Rise of the European Emperor by Taishan Laonyo.
Chapter 1791, Building the Guantanamo, Set. Your Majesty, it's all Clayman's fault for being reckless. If he could withdraw people in batches and prevent the silver mine's output from fluctuating, this wouldn't have happened. Kohler said with some shame. Marin was indeed a little unhappy, but he also knew that it was meaningless to pursue responsibility at this time. Moreover, from the process point of view, Clayman didn't do anything wrong. At most, he was not careful. But the problem is that I didn't ask him to keep it secret before. So, there's really no way to pursue Clayman's matter. If I want to hold him accountable, I have it too. Of course, although I won't hold him accountable, Clayman's contribution this time is gone. After learning about Marin's attitude, Kohler was relieved. After all, Clayman is his younger brother. It doesn't matter if he loses his contribution. He and Khan will help him to gain more credit in the future. But if he is punished, he will be affected. If there is a bad stain on the file, even if he makes contributions in the future, it will be easy to be questioned. Marin's cold treatment is actually a good ending for Clayman. In fact, Marin didn't pursue it because of Khan and Kohler's help. After all, Clement didn't make a mistake on purpose. What if someone else tried? Even if he was right, he would have to take the blame for the monarch. Just like Qin Hui, he took the blame for Song Gaozong for 800 years. If the North Sea Kingdom was a country that planned to close its doors and play by itself, Marin could actually ignore these rumors. Anyway, with the support of the Holy See, no one could do anything to him. After all, only the Holy See has the right to punish or condemn those who violate church rules. It's useless for others to jump around. However, Marin's North Sea Kingdom needs to recruit immigrants from all over the country and recruit mountain people in the southern region to serve as soldiers. Therefore, Marin cannot ignore this smear and must take countermeasures. In the words of later generations, this is called crisis public relations. This kind of public relations is generally common after celebrities are exposed by black materials, and is generally completed by a professional team. Of course, crisis public relations in this era is not that complicated, nor are there such convenient channels. The simplest way to deal with it is to put a legal and reasonable cloak on the arrest of Taino labor, and then publicize it. To this end, Marin summoned all the civil and military officials with better brains to discuss countermeasures. In terms of civil officials, Prime Minister Geoffrey, Deputy Prime Minister Mikkel, former Prime Minister of Denmark, Regent and Governor of Oldenburg-Heidel, and Governor Machiavelli, who was recruited from Italy and was in charge of the Munster region, were also summoned by Marin to discuss matters because they were not far from Aurich. In terms of military officers, Schwartz, Stade and Wagner were naturally the main ones. In addition, Kohler and Sauer, who were in charge of intelligence, were also present, as well as Kahn, who served as a mascot. At the meeting, Geoffrey spoke first. There is nothing to say about this. Just say that it is to recruit peasants from the territory, a beautified name for serfs. We firmly deny that it is to capture slaves. Mikkel shook his head and said, if you say this, I am afraid that others will not believe it, but it will cause more criticism. As the former Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Denmark, Mikkel has rich experience in dealing with similar things. He knows that it is useless to explain this rumor unilaterally. Once someone suspects you, they will not listen to your one-sided words at all. Unless there is an official proof that there is no problem with this matter. But in later generations, even if the official rumor is refuted, it is useless. Those conspiracy theorists will always find all kinds of weird reasons to say that this is a cover-up. In short, the haters will be haters all their lives and will never listen to your explanation. Fortunately, there are no such brainless haters in this era. Moreover, there is no lawless place like the internet for haters to play. Basically, as long as there is an official investigation, the rumor can be refuted. But the question is, how to get the results of the official investigation? How about asking the Holy See to send an investigation team to investigate whether this is a rumor? Schwartz suggested. Machiavelli shook his head and said, the Holy See's unilateral investigation may not convince the public. After all, everyone knows the close relationship between His Majesty and the Pope. If the Holy See conducts a unilateral investigation, it may not convince the public. Then ask envoys from other countries to go to Haiti Island to participate in the investigation. Geoffrey suggested. No. Marin stood up and rejected it directly. He said firmly, you should know that I have been describing the horror of America because I don't want people to know the richness of America. If envoys from powerful countries such as France and Spain set foot on the land of America and see the fertile land over there, it is hard to guarantee that they will have the idea of robbing it. Haiti Island is not big, but it is really not small. The area of 76,000 square kilometers is a little larger than the Kingdom of Naples. Not to mention Spain, if the French, who are extremely greedy for land, see it, won't they have ideas about that? Therefore, Marin did not want the French envoy to go to Haiti to participate in the investigation, and he was not happy at all. Kohler had been silent all along, and suddenly said, since your majesty does not want the French and Spanish envoys to go, then just don't invite them to go. Not inviting them is not convincing enough. Wagner said. Kohler thought for a while and explained, that being said, as far as I know, these rumors that smear the North Sea Kingdom have nothing to do with France and Spain. They are just rumors made up by some princes in Germany who are dissatisfied and jealous. In this case, why don't we directly target these rumor makers and ask them to send envoys to supervise and investigate? Your Majesty is worried that France and Spain will become greedy when they see the land of America because France and Spain are strong and have great potential for navigation. However, if we invite the envoys of those German inland states who spread rumors to supervise, even if they see the vastness of America, so what? They are small inland states. Even if they covet those lands, they can't send ships to rob. Good idea. Marin slammed the table after hearing this. Indeed, those small states that spread rumors and slandered Marin were all small inland states in southern Germany. Even if they sent envoys to Haiti Island, it would be nothing. Anyway, those small states have no possibility of developing navigation. After all, who told them to be inland states? Even if they saw the hugeness of Haiti Island, they could do nothing. Of course, in order to prevent them from spreading the beauty of the American colonies. Therefore, Marin decided to only take the investigation team to the small coastal castle besieged by the natives in Santo Domingo, instead of going to the Havana colony in Cuba, which has been developed into fertile land. Even when the investigation team went there, Santo Domingo had to pretend that supplies were poor. For example, the food that was usually very good was changed to only eating sweet potatoes, and eating sweet potatoes for 3 meals a day. At most, send a ship out to sea to catch some fish. Then, find a cook with poor cooking skills to cook some boiled fish in the sea, which is considered an extra meal to entertain the investigation team. Compared to the poor life that the investigation team had seen in the past, where they had to eat sweet potato rice every day and occasionally boiled fish in the sea to improve their meals, the envoys of the German states would definitely spread the word after returning. This would fit the theme of Marin's deliberate discrediting of America in the past. Of course, they couldn't just be taken to visit the besieged city of Santo Domingo, but also to visit the island of Cuba. However, it couldn't be the Havana colony in the west of the island of Cuba, nor the Moa colony in the northeast where mining was carried out. Based on the principle of proximity, Marin planned to temporarily build a fake Cuban colony in an undeveloped area on the island of Cuba and invite the investigation team to visit. This fake Cuban colony must have a certain degree of development, and it must have castles and farmland. However, the conditions cannot be too good, and people cannot see the superiority of Cuba. Therefore, Marin thought about it and finally came up with an idea: choose a place in the area closest to Haiti Island on the southeast coast of Cuba Island, and build a fake colony like building a film set in later generations to fool the envoys of other countries in the investigation team. And this place was chosen by Marin in a very famous place in Cuba in later generations, Guantanamo. Guantanamo is an excellent harbor on the southeast coast of Cuba, but the city and harbor of Guantanamo are not famous. The real famous one is the Guantanamo prison, on the east coast of the exit of this harbor. It is used by the old Americans to detain terrorists, and it has also caused a prisoner abuse scandal, which is famous all over the world. And the place where Marin wanted to build a deceptive film set is in the Guantanamo prison in later generations, an area of about 117 square kilometers. Marin planned to build a small castle on the land and station 200 soldiers there. Then, he would mobilize troops to reclaim a large area of sugarcane land around the castle, creating the illusion that the land has been reclaimed for a long time. This was secondary. Marin also planned to dispatch 1,000 of the 2,000 indigenous pseudo-troops in the Havana colony of Cuba, disguised as barbaric indigenous warriors, to deliberately besiege the castle when the investigation team visited Guantanamo Castle, creating the illusion that it is very dangerous here. Then, through the mouths of those onlookers, it was passed back to Europe to let everyone see the horrible of colonization in the Americas. He did it right away. Marin immediately mobilized a large number of engineering personnel, carrying a large amount of materials, and moved to Guantanamo to build a castle. At the same time, he also ordered Terra to send 10,000 Cuban indigenous serfs to the Guantanamo area to cut down trees and build fields, and to create a piece of sugarcane land to fool the investigation team. It can be said that Marin was equivalent to building a huge studio in Guantanamo. The effect is not to make a film, but to act and fool the envoys from the vassal states in the investigation team. Although the cost of building such a large studio is a bit high. However, if the horror of America can be promoted through the mouths of those unfriendly envoys, this investment is still worth it. At least, it can dispel the covetousness of those powerful competitors for a certain period of time. Chapter 1792, Developing 100,000 Christians. In fact, although the construction of Guantanamo film set is very noisy, the investment is not much. Moreover, this castle does not need to be built entirely of stone, that would be too time-consuming and costly. Marin plans to build this Guantanamo castle directly with red bricks and cement. That is, like building folk tile houses in later generations, use red bricks to build hollow walls. Then, apply cement on the brick seams and the outside. Finally, apply grey paint on the outer wall to make the castle look like a stone castle. Although this kind of hollow wall cannot withstand artillery fire, the indigenous people on the island simply cannot have artillery. Therefore, the hollow wall made of red bricks and the outside of cement are enough to fool the priests of the investigation team and the envoys of several German states. The most important thing is, this is easy. After all, the castle must be built before the arrival of the investigation team, and the land must be reclaimed, so time is relatively tight. So, come as fast as you can. And it is still very fast to transport ready-made red bricks and cement from the mainland, and then send enough masons to build a simple small castle. As for the sugarcane fields opened up around the castle, it was not too much trouble. As long as Terra could send enough labor to cut down the trees around the castle, and then plant sugarcane seedlings, they could fool the investigation team when they arrived. Anyway, in tropical areas, there is no such thing as spring plowing and autumn harvest, and they can be planted at any time. Then let 1,000 fake soldiers pretend to attack the city. This is easier, just let the 1,000 fake soldiers hold sticks, surround the castle and shout, and then shoot some inaccurate earth bows and arrows. The defenders in the castle can also shoot back. However, it is impossible to use real ammunition. Therefore, Marin ordered the use of some rubber to make rubber bullets for this playful battle. In addition, when loading gunpowder, the weight was deliberately reduced. In this way, during the battle, although the defenders fired guns, the 1,000 fake soldiers, actors would not suffer casualties. However, Marin would have people train them to let some people pretend to be shot and fall to the ground after hearing the gunshots, and then retreat in a hurry. In short, everything is for acting. Back to the original question, this time Marin wants to use the eyes of the investigation team and the envoys of the vassal states who initially spread rumors to see that he did not enslave the indigenous people. Therefore, a group of extras are needed to play the role of happy farmers. At that time, Marin will build small houses for some of the participating indigenous serfs in the castle. Then, give them new clothes. The most important thing is that these people must have a happy smile on their faces after going out. If a member of the investigation team asks them questions such as, "Are you happy?" Well, just pretend that you can't speak, actually you really can't speak, just keep a silly smile. In addition, these extras cannot understand other words, but they must learn a German sentence, "God bless you, amen." Then, when they see the people from the investigation team, they will greet them with this sentence. At the same time, a simple cross must be hung on the body to show the identity of a Christian. This is very important, and it is also the best excuse for whitewashing that Marin and his men have discussed for the development of Christians among the indigenous people. For this reason, this time Marin even plans to shout out the slogan of developing 100,000 Christians in America to completely justify and whitewash himself. You know, one of the conditions for the Vatican to allow Spain and Portugal to engage in overseas colonization was to let them preach. However, these two countries did not take preaching seriously at all, but were focused on plundering the resources of the colonies. Portugal even started the slave trade. They did develop King Afonso I of Congo into a Christian, but that was mainly the credit of the Portuguese church, not the Portuguese officials. Because the Portuguese officials were only busy trading and selling slaves on the African coast, how could they have the heart to preach? It was the missionaries in Portugal who bravely went deep into the Congo rainforest and developed Afonso I into a Christian. Of course, the credit of the Portuguese missionaries will eventually be attributed to the Kingdom of Portugal. Therefore, the Portuguese also have the capital to brag that I have made contributions to the Vatican. If Marin's action this time replaces the concept of arresting 100,000 serfs with developing 100,000 Christians, the style will be very different immediately. Arresting 100,000 serfs is indeed suspected of plundering slaves, which is a full-blown behavior. However, if Marin changes the concept and says that it is spreading the gospel of the Lord to them, it will be completely different. Although the means are a bit tough, the development of 100,000 Christians is really a great achievement. The Holy See must be happy to see it, and the churches of various countries can only praise it. As for forced arrests, well, sometimes, spreading the gospel of the Lord also requires some means, which is harmless. In other words, as long as the banner of missionary work is carried, Marin's black spot will be washed clean. Of course, as a price, Marin must hurry up and send people to build a magnificent church in the center of the film set of Santo Domingo Castle and Guantanamo, so that people can see his piety to Catholicism. At that time, the investigation team will definitely move into the church. Therefore, Marin cannot be stingy in this regard and must be generous. Marin even planned to requisition a batch of statues and artworks from churches in the country and send them to the new churches in these two places to show his piety to religion. In addition, Marin also discussed with his men how to whitewash the violent act of capturing 100,000 natives. After repeated discussions, everyone agreed that the word capture could be replaced with rescue. Why use the word rescue? Because Europeans know that the island of Haiti, once called Hispaniola by the Spaniards, is the source of the syphilis outbreak. The terrible syphilis also scared away the Spanish colonists. Therefore, Marin can completely argue that Hispaniola has become a plague land where syphilis is rampant. Many of the hundreds of thousands of natives on the island have been infected with syphilis and cannot be saved. However, there are still a small number of people who have not been infected with syphilis and can still be saved. Therefore, the reason why Marin sent troops to capture 100,000 natives this time was not to capture slaves, but to select 100,000 healthy people who were not infected with syphilis from the people on the island and rescue them from the plague land. With this statement, Marin immediately transformed from a slave trader to a kind-hearted hero who saves the natives from danger, with a whitewashing index of 5 stars. Then, Marin sent his spies to publicize the nonsense excuses of developing 100,000 Christians and saving 100,000 healthy natives from the plague land through the tavern system. These two interfaces are also excellent counterattacks against previous rumors. Chapter 1793, Investiture of Bishops in America. In addition to ordering the plan of developing 100,000 Christians to be publicized among the people, Marin also formally submitted a written plan of developing 100,000 Christians to the Holy See in the name of King of America and Grand Master of the Knights of Salvation. At this time, rumors that Marin had captured slaves in America had spread to Rome, and Julius II, Marin's father-in-law, was having a headache because of what his son-in-law had done. After all, that was his own son-in-law, and he still had to help maintain his reputation. But before Julius II could think of a countermeasure, Marin's written plan of developing 100,000 Christians was submitted. Even an old conspirator like Julius II had to admit that this plan and excuse was so damn beautiful. It was obviously to capture slaves to work, but when it came to Marin, it became developing Christians. It was really smart and very good at dealing with things. Moreover, what surprised Julius II was that this interface could not only help Marin to whitewash himself, but also increase his prestige and achievements as a pope. You see, during my tenure as pope, even the natives of the savage continent increased by 100,000 Christians. How face-saving. So, whether it was out of the motivation to protect his son-in-law or to brush his own reputation, Julius II was extremely appreciative and affirmative of this plan. For this reason, Julius II issued a special decree to affirm Marin's plan to develop 100,000 Christians, and stated that the Holy See would provide various conveniences and give names for this. Even Julius II gave a privilege: the King of America can nominate the Archbishop of the Kingdom of America. In other words, although the right to appoint bishops in the American continent, the savage continent, is still in the hands of the Holy See in name. But because of the right to nominate, Marin, the King of America, has actually mastered the right to appoint bishops in the Americas. Marin also knew what was going on, and immediately introduced the candidate for the Archbishop of America, Griffin, the diocesan bishop of the New York colony, and nominated him as the Archbishop of the American diocese. Griffin was originally the first batch of disciples of Archbishop Taylor, and the third disciple of Taylor. Of course, he was also the first priest who was willing to go to the American colonies to serve as a pastor. Over the years, helping Marin to brainwash the people of the colonies in the New York colony was also a great contribution. Moreover, Griffin is a Frisian. He not only knows German and Latin, but also can speak Frisian, which can communicate with English. It just so happens that the most immigrants in the New York colony were English refugees. Therefore, he also shoulders the responsibility of fooling those English immigrants. Therefore, this time, Marin nominated Griffin as the Archbishop of the American diocese on the pretext of the first person who is willing to go to the wilderness to preach. In fact, Griffin, who is only 40 years old, is not qualified to serve as the Archbishop of the entire America. However, Marin has been trying hard to hide the area of America, and no one knows how big America is. Therefore, there is no idea about Griffin, the 40-year-old Archbishop of America. If everyone knew that the combined area of North and South America is more than 8 times larger, 42 million square kilometers, than that of Western Europe, about 5 million square kilometers, it is estimated that people who are willing to serve as the Archbishop will fight for it. Of course, before that, everyone has to fight for the territory of America. The son-in-law's face must be given, and Julius II also hopes to encourage those adventurous young priests to take the initiative to go to the wild lands such as America or Africa to spread God's gospel through this matter. For this reason, Julius II convened a meeting of the Holy See and agreed to Marin's nomination on the grounds that Griffin is the first brave missionary who is willing to go to the wild continent on his own initiative. Not only that, Julius II also sent a big gift package, the Bishop of the Diocese of America, which will be decided by the Archbishop of America and the King of America. This decision is of far-reaching significance, indicating that the King of America has actually taken control of the Church of the Kingdom of America. The Archbishop is originally nominated by the King, and then the King can discuss and decide on the appointment and dismissal of domestic church positions with the Archbishop of America. Because the King will definitely nominate an Archbishop who listens to him, so it is equivalent to the King of America taking control of the domestic church. However, this matter has not caused much waves at present. Why? Because the legendary Kingdom of America is actually still a wild continent. The so-called control of the church is not impressive at all now. And the king's control of the church is actually not an exception. Because the King of France has had this right for a long time. At the beginning, King Philip IV of France took control of the church as early as 200 years ago and kidnapped the Pope to Avignon. The puppet Pope Clement V, supported by Philip IV, not only cooperated with Philip IV to frame the Knights Templar and embezzled the Knights Templar's property, but also agreed to Philip IV's collection of tithes from the teachings of France. This is the first time in history. The Holy See has always levied taxes on secular countries, and has never seen secular countries levy taxes on the church. But Philip IV, this fierce man, dared to do this, and directly made the Pope a puppet. You must know that the tithes levied by Philip IV from the French church are not 1/10 of the tithes levied by the church from believers, but the income of the entire French church. It includes not only the tithes levied by the church, but also the land income of the church. As a result, France has a more relaxed fiscal revenue than other countries, which can be used to feed an army of 10,000 or 20,000 knights. In other countries, let alone war horses with astonishing food consumption, they can't even afford to feed 10,000 or 20,000 infantry. Of course, France is the only country in Europe that collects taxes from the church. After all, they did this by turning the Pope into a puppet of France. Other countries don't have the courage to kidnap the Pope. In other words, France not only does not have to pay a share of the tithe to the Holy See, but also collects tithe from domestic teachings. But the French have a big fist, and that was authorized by the previous Pope, so even if the Vatican is dissatisfied with France, it dare not say anything. Of course, Marin's approach is actually similar to that of the French, both of which use the Pope to seek benefits for themselves. But the difference is that the French simply and rudely kidnapped the Pope, while Marin first slept with the Pope's daughter, and slept with two. Then, the only two daughters were deceived by Marin, and the Pope had no sons, so he could only pinch his nose to help his son-in-law seek benefits. And after getting the right to appoint the bishop of the diocese in the Americas, Marin was also very happy. This privilege is insignificant at the moment, but think about how big America is and how many people there are in the future. No, I still need to talk to my father-in-law, the Pope, about the issue of the tithe. It was not enough for Marin to have the right to appoint bishops, he also set his sights on the tithe in America. Chapter 1794, Desert Battle. After receiving the pigeon message from Marin, Julius II was extremely speechless, his son-in-law was really greedy. He was given the right to appoint bishops, but he still thought it was not enough and wanted to take the tithe. It is not possible to give it directly to Marin, which is too disruptive. What if other countries also ask for this right? Therefore, Julius II could not publicly declare that the tithe in America was under the control of Marin. So he thought of a way, that is, to allow the Archbishop of America to control the tithe of the Kingdom of America for missionary work in America. Of course, the specific privilege granted by Julius II is to allow the Archbishop of America to decide on the use of half of the tithe after consulting with the King of America. However, it is best to use it for missionary work and improving the living facilities of local people. In other words, the interpretation of Julius II's authorization is to allow you to take half of the tithe in America and use it to build infrastructure in America. For example, building roads and bridges, or building churches or something. As for the other half of the tithe, Julius II stipulated that it must be used for Christian affairs. For example, building churches and so on. Specifically, it is still the same sentence, it is decided by the Archbishop of America and the King of America after consultation. In other words, although Julius II did not explicitly give the tithe of America to Marin, it was also given in disguise. After all, the Archbishop of America was nominated and appointed by Marin. Dare to disobey? If he disobeyed, Marin would not nominate. In addition, with the right to appoint regional bishops, it is not too easy to get a hand on the tithe of America. As for the fact that the Holy See cannot collect tithes from America, the Roman cardinals have no objection to this. After all, the reason given by Julius II was very sufficient, they still had to use the money to build new churches and preach. As for the capture of 100,000 people on the island of Haiti, Julius II also adopted Marin's suggestion and planned to form a Vatican investigation team to conduct field investigations in Santo Domingo and Guantanamo, Cuba, to clear Marin's suspicion. Julius II also did what Marin proposed to do, asking those vassal states that spread rumors fiercely to send observers. However, some of the German vassal states suspected of spreading rumors flatly denied the rumors and were unwilling to send observers. But 3 of the vassal states were church vassal states, and they could not withstand the pressure from the Holy See, so they had to send a senior priest each to accompany the investigation team to America. In addition, there were also 2 secular vassal states who did not believe in evil, and each sent a representative to observe with the group to see if the Holy See was sheltering Marin. But this would not happen so quickly, because the castle in Guantanamo had not been repaired yet. In addition, it would take time to cut trees and plant sugarcane. Therefore, the investigation team will not set off until at least half a year later. By that time, Guantanamo will be almost ready. In addition, in order to welcome the arrival of the investigation team and prove the danger of the colony to the investigation team, Marin postponed the original order to send Terra to quell the rebellion on Haiti Island immediately after the arrival of the reinforcements, and instead asked Terra to send troops to defeat the indigenous Carlos's resistance after the investigation team left. The existence of Carlos, the real leader of the resistance army, can also allow Marin to perform the drama of the colony being difficult to manage. You know, Carlos originally had 3,000 resistance troops. If it is left to develop, it is estimated that Carlos will have 7,000 to 8,000 resistance troops when the investigation team arrives. Moreover, its recurve bows will be made more and more. In addition to the fact that the arrowheads can only be made of stone, the indigenous people cannot smelt metals, the combat effectiveness of this resistance army will be amazing. Of course, this means that when facing ordinary troops, the combat effectiveness of this group of people is not weak. But if Marin sent 2,000 soldiers wearing rhinoceros leather armor, the enemy's recurve bows and stone arrows would be in vain, and they could only accept the fate of failure. But before the demise of the rebels, Marin was looking forward to their siege of Santo Domingo. At least, it could scare the Vatican's investigation team and the observers from the 5 German principalities. Those rebels were different from the resistance forces arranged by Marin in Guantanamo. In Guantanamo, Marin would just let the 1,000 pseudo-troops pretend to be powerful. But in Santo Domingo, it is estimated that there will be a tough battle. And if you want the rebels to besiege Santo Domingo just when the investigation team arrives, this is also easy. Just send a small group of elite troops to provoke first, kill a few of the opponent's people, and anger the opponent, and the opponent will come to besiege Santo Domingo. At that time, the defenders of Santo Domingo can fight a brutal and bloody battle to defend the city in front of the investigation team, and use blood to scare the members of the investigation team and the 5 vassal states observers. These people were stimulated, and they would naturally publicize the dangers they saw with their own eyes after returning. Then, Marin also achieved his goal. Of course, those were all half a year later. And now, Marin has just forcibly recruited 2,000 masons, and followed the ships of red bricks, cement and other building materials to Guantanamo to build a castle. As for the 4,000 Hungarian prisoners of war selected by Clement, they have just joined the 1,000 North Sea veterans selected by Marin, and are currently undergoing training. It is estimated that it will take 2 or 3 months to send them to Cuba to perform the mission. After all, these Hungarian prisoners of war are not familiar with the training methods of the North Sea Army, and they are not professional enough. According to the tradition of the North Sea Army, new recruits need to undergo 3 months of devil training for new recruits. Although these Hungarian prisoners of war had also participated in the Hungarian Peasant Uprising War, they were not professional and needed strict training before they could be considered soldiers. While dealing with the affairs of the American colonies, Marin also needed to review various documents from all over the country in other colonies. After arranging the relevant matters of Cuba and Haiti, Marin reviewed a document from the Leon colony. The document stated that Mosingen was going to lead an expedition to Timbuktu again. Speaking of Mosingen's expedition to Timbuktu, we have to mention Mosingen's previous 2 expeditions. The first time, Mosingen came to Timbuktu by mistake under the guidance of 2 black slaves and exchanged for dozens of pounds of gold sand. Then, this matter attracted Marin's attention, and he approved Mosingen to go on another expedition, intending to open up a trade route for salt and gold in Timbuktu. However, Mosingen's second expedition was not smooth. Last year, Mosingen brought a total of 100 Egyptian slaves trained in Mamluk cavalry and 20 musketeers to Timbuktu. At the same time, he also brought 5,000 pounds of bags of salt, intending to exchange them all for gold. But in this second expedition, Mosingen failed. Originally, Mosingen's team successfully arrived in Timbuktu, and successfully exchanged for gold sands that were as heavy as salt. However, on the way back, they encountered huge troubles. Because of the appearance of Mosingen, the interests of many veteran North African merchants were infringed. As a result, several caravans immediately turned against each other, intending to black eat black and destroy Mosingen's team. But Mosingen's team was strong and killed several groups of North African caravans that intended to attack them. Then, Mosingen swelled. After defeating several groups of provocative enemies, this guy was full of confidence and said that he planned to monopolize the trade of salt and gold in Timbuktu. Then, he completely angered other North African bearded merchants. These North African bearded merchants who dared to cross the Sahara Desert were not good people. Ordinary people would not have the courage to cross the dangerous and hot Sahara Desert. Since one family could not defeat Mosingen, they united with dozens of families and gathered 1,400 scimitar cavalry. Moreover, the person in charge of commanding this coalition was Nasra, a merchant from Egypt. Nasra once served in the cavalry of the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt and served as a middle-level officer. However, because he was not a Mamluk of Turkic descent, but a local, the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt excluded locals, he was not valued. Later, he had a conflict with a Mamluk noble, and after beating the other party, he was expelled from the Egyptian army. Then, in order to make a living, Nasra was employed by Sulla, a big Egyptian merchant who traveled between Egypt and Timbuktu, and was responsible for protecting Sulla's travel between Egypt and Timbuktu to trade gold. This time, Mozinjan brought 100 pseudo-Mamluk cavalrymen who were born from Egyptian slaves, plus 20 musketeers. They were too powerful, and the other families could not fight alone. So dozens of families united and nominated Nasra, who had been a cavalry officer, as the commander-in-chief. Nasra was very cunning. He knew that the enemy was very strong and had muskets, so it would be difficult to gain an advantage in a head-on conflict. So he sent 500 of the weakest scimitar cavalrymen to attract Mozinjan's attention. Then, the remaining 900 people were divided into two parts, and they encircled Mozinjan from the left and right rear respectively. After Mozinjan's 100 pseudo-Mamluk cavalry launched a charge, hundreds of scimitar cavalry suddenly rushed out from the left and right rear. These scimitar cavalry, composed of the bodyguards of the bearded merchants, although their individual combat effectiveness was not as strong as the pseudo-Mamluk cavalry who had received Mamluk cavalry training, had the advantage of having more people, and they encircled and ambushed from the rear. Therefore, Mozinjan's second expedition suffered a disastrous defeat, with 46 of the 100 pseudo-Mamluk cavalry killed and 7 musketeers also lost. Not only that, the 5,000 pounds of gold sand that was traded was also taken away by the enemy. Even Mozinjan himself was seriously injured, with a scimitar opening a gap in his abdomen. If those bearded merchants had not had conflicts over the ownership of the 5,000 pounds of gold sand, and started to fight internally, and had not taken care of the pursuit, it is estimated that Mozinjan would have died directly near Timbuktu during his second expedition. This time, Cotton, the governor of Layoun, bought 800 pseudo-Mamluk cavalrymen from Egyptian slaves from Egypt, plus 100 musketeers, and his strength was greatly enhanced. Mozinjan also actively asked for battle this time, intending to make up for the last mistake, sweeping those North African bearded merchants for Marin, and completely controlling this gold trade route in the Sahara Desert. Marin looked at it and felt that there was no problem. Moreover, Mozinjan was also familiar with the route, and he should be careful this time after suffering a loss last time. Therefore, he approved Cotton and Mozinjan's plan to go on another expedition, and hoped that they would win the desert battle and grab the huge profits of the gold sand trade for him. Chapter 1795, Wide-Wheeled Chariot and Spear Charge. Because of the defeat last time, Mozinjan was indeed much more careful this time. Moreover, after being attacked from the front and back by the enemy cavalry last time, Mozinjan also brought a lot of chariots this time to form a formation to block the impact of the enemy cavalry. However, it is very difficult for the chariot to move in the desert. Because the sand is too soft, the wheels are easy to sink. Fortunately, the capable carpenters under the governor of Layoun, Cotton, modified the wheels and made very wide wheels. In this way, the chariot is not easy to sink into the sand in the desert. In addition, in order to reduce the physical strength required to push the cart, the chariots that Mozinjan brought this time did not carry too heavy things. In addition to the 4 spears on the car to resist the impact of the war horses, each car could only carry no more than 200 pounds of goods. Moreover, most of these goods are water. These are fresh water that has been sterilized at high temperature and are not easy to deteriorate. The means of high-temperature sterilization is very simple: put the fresh water into the leather bag and throw it directly into the big pot to boil. Of course, the wooden plug of the water bag cannot be plugged tightly. Because of thermal expansion and contraction, the water bag after boiling is easy to burst. Therefore, the mouth of the water bag is usually clamped with a clamp and lifted above the water surface of the steamer. When the steamer boils and the water in the water bag is almost sterilized by high temperature, the workers wearing leather gloves will use the clamp to take the water bag up and quickly plug the bag mouth with a cork to seal it tightly. Then, add some mud and dry it. In this way, a bag of water that can be stored for several months is processed. In this team, Mozinjan brought a total of 400 Udayo chariots with wide wheels and spears. When marching, Mozinjan will bring another 400 slaves, who will push this wide-wheeled chariot and follow the 800 cavalry and 100 musketeers in the desert. There are not many things on the wheelbarrow, but they are all very important: food and water. Moreover, food can be replenished when passing through oases where fresh water can be replenished. According to the desert marching principle, Mozinjan required that those specially treated fresh water should not be used if they could be left alone. When passing through areas where fresh water can be replenished, try to drink the fresh water obtained locally. Of course, it is the boiled water from the big pot that has been cooled down. Only when walking in the depths of the desert and it is really impossible to replenish fresh water can the reserve water bag on the wheelbarrow be used. In fact, this wide-wheeled Chinese wheelbarrow is not only a tool used by Mozinjan to transport fresh water and resist enemy cavalry, but also a tool intended to be used to transport black slaves in the future. Of course, it is a bit inappropriate to say that it is transporting black slaves. Because Mozinjan's plan is to let the black slaves push the wheelbarrow filled with fresh water themselves. In this way, there is no need to tire the camels to help carry the fresh water needed by the black slaves. The price of black slaves in the Songhai Empire is very cheap. A small bag of salt can be exchanged for a strong and honest black slave, which is much cheaper than the Portuguese slaves. But the problem is that it is very difficult to cross the Sahara Desert with black slaves. The difficulty lies in how to transport the fresh water needed by the black slaves. If the traditional method is used, and camels are asked to help carry the leather bags filled with water, the burden on the camels will be very heavy. Moreover, not many slaves can be carried at a time. After all, camels have limited carrying capacity and can only carry 300 pounds of things at most. It is easier to let the slaves push the carts themselves. They push the wheelbarrows loaded with food and drink they need by themselves, without tiring the camels. As many wheelbarrows as there are, as many slaves can be brought back. Before, it was naturally difficult to cross the desert because there were no wheelbarrows with wide wheels. However, since Collier, a great carpenter under Cotton, invented this wide wheel that can travel freely in the desert, it is no longer difficult to carry things in the desert. As long as you don't load too much, it is difficult to get stuck in the sand. For example, a Chinese wheelbarrow that can carry 500 to 600 kilograms only carries more than 200 pounds of things. In this way, it is easy for people to push it and it is not easy to get stuck in the sand. In addition, Mozingen also came up with a trick, to tie the slaves to the wheelbarrow with chains. In this way, there is no need to worry about the black slaves running away in the middle of the night. The main reason is that in the territory of the Songhai Empire, those black slaves can easily take advantage of people's unpreparedness and quietly run away in the middle of the night. After all, most of them are unlucky people nearby, prisoners of war or forcibly abducted as slaves by the nobles of the Songhai Empire. As long as they leave the territory of the Songhai Empire, those black slaves will be honest. After all, they are not locals and dare not be arrogant. However, this time, Mozingen did not want to bring many black slaves, but brought a group of slaves to help push fresh water, strategic material in the desert, to deal with possible battles in the desert. Moreover, these slaves have also received simple combat training. If necessary, you can also draw one of the 4 spears on the car, hide behind the car, and use the spear to poke the enemy's scimitar cavalry. But that usually happens in an emergency, and Mozingen does not think that his 800 Mamluk slave cavalry can't beat the cavalry of those North African bearded merchants. Because most of those scimitar cavalry were irregular tribal cavalry. Although they seemed brave, their quality was far inferior to that of the Egyptian slaves who had received regular Mamluk cavalry training. Moreover, in the past few months, Mozingen had also trained these Egyptian slaves who had received Mamluk cavalry training in discipline and tactics, making the discipline of these slave cavalry stronger than that of the authentic Mamluk cavalry. In the words of the emperor, the level of group battle of these Egyptian slave Mamluk cavalry was no worse than that of the authentic Circassian Mamluk cavalry. They might not be the opponents of the authentic Mamluk cavalry in individual confrontations and small-scale confrontations, but with more people, they were no worse than the authentic Mamluk cavalry by relying on the discipline and formations they had repeatedly trained in the past few months. As for the Arab tribal cavalry led by those North African bearded men, I just want to ask you if you are afraid of the Egyptian Mamluk cavalry who can charge like a wall. In order to facilitate the straight stabbing during the wall charge, all the Mamluk cavalry from Egyptian slaves have changed to use the relatively straight 65-style cavalry sword, which can stab and chop. Although it was a bit unfamiliar at the beginning, these people have also received many years of training, proficient in a variety of weapons, and even learned the use of European knight straight swords, so it is not difficult to get started. After a few months, these 800 Egyptian Mamluk slave cavalry have adapted to the use of the 65-style cavalry saber. With a comprehensive crushing in personal force and tactics, Mozingen does not think that these 800 people will lose to the 1 or 2,000 bearded North African tribal cavalry. You know, in history, Austria has never lost to Turkey in a cavalry duel since it learned to use the knight straight sword to launch a wall charge. The Austrian cavalry in the 18th and 19th centuries was only second-rate in Europe, not as good as the French cavalry and the Prussian cavalry. Even, they may not be able to beat the cavalry of Tsarist Russia. But they are the traditional scimitar cavalry that can abuse Turkey, and from then on, they beat Turkey, the bulldozer of Europe, into a chicken. Of course, it was not the Austrians who really caused Turkey's decline, but the fierce Tsarist Russia. Starting from Peter the Great, Tsarist Russia launched a number of Russo-Turkish wars in succession, and crippled Turkey, the bulldozer of Europe. But it is undeniable that Austria, which had been besieged in Vienna by Turkey many times, has no longer been at a disadvantage in the conflict between the Balkan Peninsula and Turkey since it mastered the wall charge. However, Austria was busy annexing Italy and competing with Prussia for the position of the boss of Germany, so it had no energy to deal with Turkey. Later, it finally recognized the reality, gave up Italy and began to turn around and annex the Balkan Peninsula. As a result, the assassination in Sarajevo triggered the First World War, and it was defeated. Chapter 1796, A Union of Complementary Advantages. In fact, if the Habsburgs could have annexed Bohemia and the Kingdom of Hungary as in the original history, it would have been about the same size as the Austro-Hungarian Empire that lost Italy in the 19th century. Moreover, at this time, the two large areas of Silesia and Moravia still belonged to Bohemia. In addition, the Habsburgs also owned the Netherlands and Franche-Comté, as well as half of Switzerland obtained with the help of Marin. In terms of potential, it is greater than the original Austro-Hungarian Empire. The only problem is that the Habsburgs are currently very poor, and the emperor is a poor guy. Austria was able to gain the upper hand in the conflict with Turkey only after the military reform in the 18th century. Before, although the Austrian knights were powerful, they were few in number and had poor mobility, and were no match for the overwhelming Turkish cavalry. Until 1683, Vienna was besieged by Turkey once. After the 18th century, the bulky plate armor knights were gradually abandoned by various countries, and were replaced by cuirass cavalry using knight straight swords or sabers. What defeated the Turks was the cuirassiers holding knight straight swords and launching a wall-like charge shoulder to shoulder. At this time, European war horses no longer pursued great strength and height, but instead pursued medium-sized horses with fast speed and good endurance. After entering the 18th century, European countries introduced Arabian horses to improve their bloodlines and bred various medium-sized war horses suitable for light cavalry and cuirassiers. At the same time, the plate armor on the knights was also abandoned, leaving only the helmet and three-quarters of the breastplate at most. The heavy horse armor on the horses was also abandoned. In this way, modern European cavalry gained mobility at the expense of protection. Coupled with tactical advantages, the Austrian cavalry holding straight swords could also defeat the Turkish cavalry that once frightened Europeans. Of course, there is no if in history. Who knows whether Lajos II, the only son of King Vladislas II of Bohemia, will die at the hands of the Turks. You know, with Marin's intervention, Turkey did not cripple Persia, nor did it annex the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt. Without annexing Egypt, it would be difficult to guarantee that Turkey would have the strength to crush Europe. After all, if Persia was not destroyed and Egypt was still there, Turkey would not dare to attack Hungary with confidence. However, it might be difficult for Lajos II to leave offspring. Because Princess Maria, the daughter of Prince Philip, likes to eat Häagen-Dazs ice cream, invented by Marin very much and eats it often. In this way, Princess Maria is prone to uterine cold when she grows up, leading to infertility. Princess Maria has already had an engagement with Prince Lajos. If she becomes the Queen of Bohemia and Hungary in the future, it will be difficult for her to have offspring. In the end, the Habsburg family was able to obtain the two kingdoms of Bohemia and Hungary by relying on the mutual inheritance agreement signed that year. The only question is whether Charles will marry Anna, the daughter of Vladislas II, or Ferdinand. If, as in history, Prince Ferdinand marries Princess Anna, then the Habsburg family will inevitably split into two families and will not be able to become a powerful country like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Marin has given the best advice, but I don't know how Maximilian I finally decided. It seems that His Majesty the Emperor is currently hesitating. Because Portugal has also begun to ask for a marriage. The Emperor was jealous of the huge profits of Portugal's Indian spice trade and wanted to hang out with a rich man, so he had never made up his mind whether to let his eldest grandson Charles marry Princess Anna of Bohemia. Marin was extremely speechless about His Majesty the Emperor's mentality and no matter how rich Portugal is, you can get it by marrying a Portuguese princess. You know, the Kingdom of Portugal seems to have never had a crisis of extinction until the 19th century. Therefore, it seems not so reliable to marry Portugal and hope that the other party will die. On the contrary, because the Kingdom of Hungary faces the powerful Turkey, Lajos II is more likely to die. But Marin still plans to continue to persuade Maximilian I, because he also needs a stronger Habsburg family to stand in front and block the harassment of Turkey. After all, Germany is in constant dispute, and if there is no strong barrier, it is easy for the Turks to take the opportunity to break in. You know, even if Egypt is not taken, Turkey is still a first-class power. Taking down the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt is actually more important to Turkey than seizing the position of the Caliph and the two holy cities of Jerusalem and Mecca, making the Ottoman Empire the leader of the Muslim religion. It can be said that the political significance is far greater than the economic significance. Of course, there is also the fact that the worries behind have been cleared, and Europe can be attacked with all its strength. If Marin intervenes and Turkey cannot get Egypt, it will certainly prevent Turkey from increasing its strength, but it will not affect Turkey's status as a first-class power. Moreover, the Mamluk dynasty, which has long been caught in internal strife, actually has no ability to cause trouble to Turkey. It is the Persian Shah Ismail I who has not been beaten and decadent, who is more likely to take revenge. But in any case, the Turks are now able to gather an army of 100,000, and the firearms force is very strong. With such strength, no country in Europe currently has the ability to fight alone, except for Marin's North Sea kingdom. But Marin doesn't want to make trouble, and he is unwilling to fight Turkey hard to damage his own strength. Therefore, he was more willing to let the Habsburg family fight with the Turks in the front, while he hid behind and made a fortune quietly unifying the small Germany in the north. In the end, Marin's plan was to divide Germany with the Habsburg family, you south and I north, and divide Germany equally. Then, the Habsburg family, as in history, became the Austro-Hungarian emperor, and he became the German emperor, and by the way united Britain and controlled all of America. Britain and Germany can complement each other. England is naturally rich in sailors and suitable for great voyages. Unlike the German region, except for the Frisians on the coast, the rest are landlubbers. But the German region is naturally rich in excellent infantry, and it has been so since ancient times. Even during the North American War of Independence, the main force of the British Army to suppress the North American Army was Hessian mercenaries. There is no way, the English army is really not good enough. Britain alone, or Germany, are strong men with one leg, and they are naturally not good in other aspects. But if the two countries are combined, it will be terrible. England has sailors, so it will focus on developing the navy. Germany has powerful infantry, so it should focus on developing the army. With a powerful England navy that can crush France, and a German army that is not afraid of France, what should it be afraid of? The Anglo-German alliance is the most classic complementary advantage, which is stronger than the alliance between Spain and the Habsburg family. Because, in the history of Charles V's West German alliance, the Habsburg family was actually a pure money waster, and it was of little help to the other party, and it was a drag on the command. Marin has already developed the coal mines in the Ruhr area. If he develops the German economy in the future, Germany will not become an economic burden like the Habsburg dynasty. On the contrary, it is an extremely powerful boost. Chapter 1797, Free Gift. In the autumn of 1515, everything was golden. The North Sea Kingdom welcomed another bumper harvest. This year, due to the appearance of prade plows, harrows and sledgehammers, the cultivated land area of the North Sea Kingdom increased from 12 million acres to 15 million acres. However, the tithe of cultivated land did not increase at all. Because the Holy See had confirmed with Marin long ago that the tithe would only be collected according to the standard of 12 million acres. Moreover, it was collected according to the standard of 150 pounds per acre, that is, 15 pounds of rye per acre. Of course, if there is a natural disaster, it can also be exempted. In addition, only half of the tithe needs to be sent to Rome, and the other half will be used by the North Sea Church. In fact, even if only half of the tithe is sent to Rome, it is very scary. Because 12 million acres of rye, 15 pounds per acre, a total of 180 million pounds, half is 90 million pounds. According to the current grain price in Germany, if 1 pfennig is calculated per pound, it is 90 million pfennigs, equivalent to 1.5 million gold coins. This batch of grain is enough for 200,000 people to eat for a year. Moreover, more than 1 pound of rye flour can be consumed every day. Under normal circumstances, the black bread eaten by ordinary people contains half of the flour, which is considered advanced. The black stick bread eaten by ordinary farmers contains more than half of the ingredients such as soil, stones, sawdust, and wild vegetables. According to the way ordinary farmers eat, these grains can feed 500,000 people without any problem. The grain originally produced by the Papal States can meet most of the domestic needs, so the extra grain is actually the fiscal revenue of the Holy See, at least hundreds of thousands of gold coins. You know, people like Marin who pay tithes to the Holy See so honestly are almost extinct in Europe. People like France who dare to bully the Holy See not only do not pay tithes to the Holy See, but also levy taxes on the French Church in return, which is extremely awesome. Although Spain, Britain and other powerful countries are not as powerful as France, they often find various excuses and bribe the cardinals in charge of the dioceses of the two countries to avoid paying most of the tithes and only pay a symbolic amount. The only ones who really pay more tithes are probably the bishops in Germany. It's not that they are willing to do so, but the right of appointment of the bishops belongs to the Holy See, and those bishops dare not pay. But even so, these bishops will still take advantage of the situation and bribe the Roman cardinals who are responsible for collecting tithes, deliberately reduce the amount of tithes, and then privately divide up the tithes. In the end, these bishops can send a quarter of the tithes to Rome, which is considered very honest. There is no way, the atmosphere is like this, Marin can pay so much tithes, which is the first in Europe. As for Marin's request for a fixed amount of tithes, the people in the church also know that there is something fishy. However, everyone is messing around, and Marin is the most honest. Therefore, no one will find fault with Marin in this regard. If anyone dares to find fault, Marin will compare with him to see who pays more tithes. As long as the comparison is made, even big countries such as Britain, France and Spain cannot compare with Marin. Therefore, even if Marin reclaimed 3 million acres of new land and did not pay more tithes, no one would make a fuss about it. Because others have done more than Marin. Would a murderer dare to report a thief? No. If you dare to do so, you will die first. Marin did not take the extra 3 million acres of land alone, but divided 1/3 of it among his nobles. In other words, Marin monopolized 2 million acres, and his subordinates divided 1 million acres. Well, this is in line with the principle of dividing the spoils among the mountain bandits. The boss takes the biggest head, and the rest of the brothers divide it. Marin is the boss. Ah, it is King Ma who is willing to give 1/3 to his subordinates, which is also quite kind. After all, the unowned land in the country belongs to her, the Grand Duke. Newly reclaimed land also requires his approval. In order to suppress food production and avoid too much food, Marin, who was ahead of others for hundreds of years, introduced the Environmental Protection Law to restrict deforestation to protect water and soil. However, the reason for protecting the forest is very stupid, it is to ensure the hunting rights of the nobles. But in this era, this broken reason is actually tenable. There is no way, this is an era of aristocrats, and the enjoyment of the nobles is even more important than the life and death of the common people. In fact, Marin did not completely restrict the increase of cultivated land, but deliberately suppressed the increase of cultivated land in the country. After all, he still has a large America to reclaim. If there is too much land reclaimed in the country, no one will go to America to reclaim wasteland. Therefore, Marin's attitude is very clear: the increase of local cultivated land must be approved, otherwise it will be confiscated. But Marin encourages the reclamation of land in the Kingdom of America. Even, he does not hesitate to offer various preferential conditions. For example, civilians can become landlords if they go to reclaim wasteland. Of course, the premise is that they must pay taxes to the government. In addition to the tithe of the church, they must also pay 10% each of agricultural tax and national defense tax. Of course, if there are male members in the family who join the army, they will be exempted from national defense tax during the period of military service. If a male member dies in battle, the national defense tax exemption period will be extended for 18 years. These 18 years are theoretically the time when the male's newly born son grows up. Of course, if there are no children, their family still enjoys this treatment. If there are certain military merits, the degree of pension will be greater. What disappointed Marin was that people of this era were as stubborn as the locals of Hudong in the early years of later generations. In later generations, there was a famous joke: I would rather have a bed in Puxi than a room in Pudong. It said that the stubborn locals of Hudong would rather die in poverty in Puxi than go to Pudong to seek development. Now, this situation has also appeared in Beihai Kingdom, let alone the civilians, even the nobles are not willing to go to America to open up wasteland. For example, when distributing land, many soldiers with military merits would rather have 200 acres of farmland in their homeland, equivalent to 100 uglums, 1,200 acres, than 1,000 acres of farmland in America when they were knighted. You know, in their homeland, the good land along the river has long been divided up by the nobles. Only those ordinary farmlands that are not near the river will be ownerless and distributed. However, those stubborn and meritorious soldiers just like those thin lands and are unwilling to take the fertile land along the river in America. You know, the development of America is low at present, and the land given by Marin is all precious land along the river with extremely convenient irrigation. If it were put in the future, such a farm would cost tens of thousands of dollars per acre. 1,000 acres is worth tens of millions of dollars. However, in this era, the land in America is not worth money. In addition, in order to prevent other countries from competing, Marin deliberately portrayed America as a terrifying wilderness, so no one was willing to put the fief in America. Only Kohler, Schwartz and other core high-level officials of the North Sea Kingdom understand how fertile and suitable America is for agriculture. The rye fields in the North Sea Kingdom are better than those in the North Sea Kingdom in terms of wheat planting. You know, the price of wheat is several times that of rye. But Marin can't say it directly, mainly because he is afraid that some people will leak it out. Therefore, the land in America can only be cheap for those guys. Fortunately, they are not outsiders. However, it is not enough to just give it to those confidants, and others have to drink soup. Therefore, Marin tried every means to sell the land in America. As a result, not only those grassroots soldiers who were knighted for their meritorious service were unwilling to take the land in America, but even those middle-level officers who were awarded the title of baron were unwilling to take the good land in America that is 5 times the area. In desperation, in order to promote the development of America, Marin finally made a decision to give the land in America as a bonus to meritorious soldiers. Of course, not everyone was given it, but it started with barons. For example, the land granted to a third-class baron from a baron is 1,000 ugrams of arable land in the mainland, which is 2,000 acres. Marin still grants it according to the old rules, but will also give away 2,000 acres of good riverside land in America for free. These people may not be happy at first, but after knowing the truth and tasting the benefits, they are willing to take the land in America. After all, that is arable land that can grow wheat. You know, in this era, being able to eat white bread made of wheat flour every meal is a symbol of status. You know, even ordinary knights with only 1,000 acres of American river fiefdoms can eat wheat flour white bread every day as long as they grow wheat. There is no way, the land in America is so good. Because the summer is hotter than Europe, it is conducive to the accumulation of temperature for wheat, so it is very suitable for wheat growth. In the early 19th century, most people in European countries still mainly ate black bread as their staple food, and poor Germans lived on potatoes every day. At that time, the newly established America could generally eat white bread. There is no way, the family has good land, so it is so arrogant. However, in the North Sea Kingdom in 1515, no one was willing to take the American fiefdom, forcing Marin to rely on giving away the land in America for free. What a shit. Chapter 1798, Royal West Point Military Academy. Why did Marin insist on infeffing the nobles to America? First, there was not enough land in the country, and second, it was because these nobles would also find ways to recruit people to reclaim wasteland. In addition, these nobles all had certain military qualities, and basically everyone had received military command training since childhood. Once they had interests in America, they would be very enthusiastic to help protect the sovereignty of America. If, like the British, they only gave colonial land to merchants, adventurers, or even exiled prisoners, the consequences would be bad. You know, whether it is merchants, adventurers or exiles, they are all low moral and have milk as their mother. Although the nobles are not very good, at least they still pay attention to honor and loyalty. Therefore, it is also necessary to let some nobles stay in America. Moreover, if the nobles want to maintain their rights, they must first recognize and protect the rights of the royal family. Otherwise, the royal power will be overthrown, and the next step is that their privileges will be deprived. Therefore, although the nobles are not good people, for Marin, it is more reassuring to cooperate with them than with merchants and adventurers. In addition, once the nobles settled in America, they would inevitably become one of the core members of the local parliament. Once the vote on independence is taken, these people will definitely choose to support the royal family in order to protect their titles. Otherwise, once they rebel, their titles will no longer exist. After all, without the existence of the royal family, these nobles who were canonized by the royal family would lose their meaning. Therefore, in any case, a group of nobles must be left in the American colonies to keep the place in check. Otherwise, if all the representatives are businessmen and adventurers, there is no guarantee that they will have a different mind one day. In fact, the collapse of the colonial system of the British Empire in later generations is also related to the death of too many noble officers in the two world wars. With those noble officers, it is natural that the colonies will not be allowed to become independent easily. However, without those noble officers, when the political power is in the hands of capitalists, those people don't care. In the eyes of capitalists, if there is a profit in the colonies, they will keep them, and if there is no profit, they will throw them away. They don't care about the difficulties of their ancestors in seizing colonies. In their eyes, as long as the benefits are sufficient, the country can be sold. Officials of civilian origin are often more easily bought by capitalists because of their financial constraints. Officials of noble origin tend to value face and honor more and are not easy to be bribed. Because they are not short of money. Therefore, Marin, who has been a monarch for a long time, gradually changed his initial position of being closer to civilians and changed to being closer to military nobles. Because, in danger, those military nobles are more reliable than civilians. It's not that those military nobles have good character, but that they are more consistent with their own interests. As for civilians, although they may be grateful for being good to them in the early days. However, after a long time, when the people have become accustomed to these good things, it is hard to say. At that time, they will want more, and if they don't give it. Of course, even if Marin is inclined to military nobles, he will not be willing to use any idiots. Under normal circumstances, the sons of nobles are naturally given priority in the army. But if it is a war, then military merit is king. Whoever has great military merit will be more likely to be promoted. Unless, when the military merits of a noble's son and a civilian son are similar, the sons of nobles will be given priority. In the final analysis, this is still a question of, buttocks determine the head. At the beginning, when Marin just crossed over, he was still an ordinary person in his heart, closer to civilians, and somewhat hostile to nobles. When he really became a German prince, Marin gradually discovered that he and the nobles were in the same group. Treating civilians well would certainly make them grateful. However, people are forgetful. When they are used to benefits, one day you suddenly stop giving them. The so-called, a liter of rice is a dough of rice, is this truth. But the old nobles and themselves really can't pee in the same pot. The old nobles look down on Marin's origin and bloodline, and Marin also looks down on the old nobles double-faced and incompetent. In desperation, Marin can only select new military nobles from the civilian soldiers and use his own ideas to influence them and turn them into people like himself. In this way, with enough helpers, there is no need to worry about having no supporters in the future. However, the basic quality of these military nobles from civilian origins is really not flattering. Khan is considered stupid, but most of the nobles from civilian origins are actually at the same level as this guy. Only Schwartz and Stade, who were born in the side branches of the declining nobles, could barely be considered talents because they had received a good basic education since childhood. In short, Marin was very disappointed with the level of these guys. Even if they were to carry out literacy later, most of these guys could only reach the level of the second grade of elementary school in later generations, which was really unworthy of the task. However, Marin had high hopes for their descendants. After all, it is definitely better to receive education from childhood than to be illiterate as an adult. The first batch of officers' children are now in high school and are about to go to college. However, there is no special military university in the North Sea Kingdom at present, and only the University of Auric has a military academy. Marin felt that it was not cool enough and decided to improve the status of the military academy. It happened that he had just mixed up the title of king, and it would be a waste if he didn't use it. The king, as a sovereign monarch, can issue an edict and prepare to build a university. Unlike the Grand Duke of the North Sea, building a university requires the approval of the Holy See or the Emperor. There is no way. Although the Grand Duchy of the North Sea has autonomy, it is not a sovereign state in name. But the Kingdom of America that the Holy See awarded him this time was different. Although it was a wild land, Marin had the final say. It was still possible to establish a military university in the name of the king and to pacify the wild natives. So, Marin thought of the West Point Military Academy. Well, everyone is in North America, and they are all called American XX, so I will also establish a West Point Military Academy. Just calling it West Point Military Academy doesn't seem to be domineering enough, so, let's call it Royal West Point Military Academy. In this way, Marin happily named this university under the Kingdom of America Royal West Point Military Academy. As for the location of the school, Marin planned to put it on the west bank of the Hudson River in New York City. In later generations, West Point Military Academy was located 80 kilometers north of New York City on the west bank of the Hudson River. But Marin did not plan to build it so far away from New York, but directly planned to build it on the west bank of the river across Manhattan Island. Then, a castle called West Point was built, also named West Point Fortress. Well, that's how West Point Military Academy was built. Then, in order to make it reasonable, Marin first issued an order to build a castle called West Point Fortress on the west bank of the Hudson River in New York. 2 days later, Marin signed a new order. He planned to build the first university in the United States based on West Point Fortress. Royal West Point Military Academy. In this way, the appearance of the name West Point Military Academy would not be so abrupt. However, considering that it is estimated that no military nobles would be willing to send their children to remote New York to go to school, Marin adopted a compromise plan, separating the Auric University Military Academy from the Auric University and merging it into the newly established Royal West Point Military Academy. Then, the original Auric University Military Academy branch campus outside the city of Auric was directly renamed Royal West Point Military Academy Auric Branch. In this way, the problem of the school being too remote was solved. West Point Fortress and the like are just a name. By then, teaching and other things will still be conducted at the branch campus outside of Auric. As for the main campus of the Royal West Point Military Academy, God knows when it will be built and enrolled. But that's not important, Marin is just borrowing a name anyway. He is the king now, and he is qualified to use the title of royal, royal in English, or Königlich, royal in German. In short, this is a title that improves one's status. With it, it sounds much more noble. Just like the Real Madrid of later generations, if there is no royal, it would be called Ma Delhi. The status would be lowered by 1,000,000 miles. But Marin still felt a little uncomfortable, because this Royal West Point Military Academy, if called in Chinese, always sounds like a school that trains cake chefs, similar to Xian Dongfang. Chapter 1799, Ming Dynasty Napoleon Canon. Although the terrible bombing advertisements of the Xindongfang cooking school in his previous life always appeared in his mind, Marin still insisted on using the name Royal West Point Military Academy. Anyway, except for himself, other people will not think wrongly, especially if they need to use Chinese, they may think wrongly. But the problem is that the Ming Dynasty was the time when the Chinese were most confident. Even if Western food was passed on, it would not be called Western food, and Western pastries would not be called Western pastries, but would be called Yijian or something. For example, now, Marin's name in the Ming Dynasty is Dongfan Bo, and as for the title of the Grand Duke of Beihai Kingdom, it was directly ignored by the people of the Ming Dynasty. In their view, foreign barbarians, let alone the Grand Duke, even the king seems ridiculous, and there is no difference from the chiefs of the southwestern minority areas. Therefore, no one will think of this word wrongly these days. Of course, Marin also understands the mentality of the Ming Dynasty people, but he is not very angry. Why? Because in Marin's eyes, these people are ancient NPCs, what is there to be angry with them? Besides, if we lower our attitude, we can get a lot of benefits from the Ming Dynasty, so why not do it? Look, at this moment, 2 ships of silk and porcelain have been shipped back from Panama. A rough calculation shows that it can bring Marin a net profit of about 200,000 gold coins. In this regard, the Portuguese eyes are red and about to explode. Because, according to the agreement, they should be the controllers of the Ming Empire. But in fact, they have no ability to control the Ming Empire at all. They did not benefit from the previous conflict. The fleet sent out this time has just arrived in Malacca and is being repaired. It plans to launch a full-scale attack on the coast of the Ming Empire. In fact, Portugal also envied Marin's methods and planned to learn from Marin's methods and pay tribute to the Ming dynasty as a Southeast Asian barbarian chief. But unfortunately, they were reluctant to give up the Kuala Lumpur tin mine and refused to return the land of the Malacca Kingdom, a vassal state of the Ming dynasty, so naturally they could not reach an agreement with the Ming dynasty. Therefore, they can only imagine defeating the Ming dynasty with the fleet and then negotiate. But unfortunately, the Portuguese did not know that the Ming dynasty would not succumb to the enemy's force, which is why so many people in later generations are fans of the Ming dynasty. Moreover, the current emperor is the Zhengde emperor who loved war the most in the middle and late Ming dynasty. It would be a miracle if he could defeat the Ming dynasty. In addition, Kong Tai had already received instructions from Marin and was ready to report to the Ming dynasty. So, the spy ship sent by Kong Tai to the Strait of Malacca discovered the arrival of the Portuguese fleet and rushed to Keelung by speedboat to send a letter to Kong Tai. Arrived so late. Kong Tai was a little depressed. He had been prepared for a long time, but he did not expect that the Portuguese were so inefficient and arrived several months later than he expected. As for why this was so, it was mainly because this Portuguese fleet, led by the Gama, traveled along the coast of the Kingdom of Benin on the west coast of Africa and also went ashore to rob. The Kingdom of Benin is a famous ancient country in West Africa, and it has frequent trade with other parts of West Africa, so there is a lot of gold. The Gama was a greedy man. When he passed by the coast of Benin, he saw that a civil war was breaking out there, so he intervened, sent troops ashore, helped the weak side, and defeated the strong side. However, after the victory, he took away all the benefits. By intervening in the civil war of the Kingdom of Benin, the Gama earned 1,500 pounds of gold sand and a ship of ivory, which was a great harvest. Then, he walked around the west coast of Africa, looking for opportunities to make money. However, Africa was too backward in this era. Except for a few civilized countries in West Africa, there were almost no decent countries on the coast of Southwest Africa. The only slightly decent Kingdom of Congo was still an ally of Portugal. As professional robbers, the Portuguese colonists were obviously insiders and knew that only cities had a lot of oil and water. Although those tribal villages on the coast were easy to take, they had almost no oil and water. Even hundreds of villages were not as oily as a small town. The reason is simple: in this era, only cities had active trade activities and many commodities. With more goods, there will be more currency, gold, sand. Such places can only have enough oil and water after looting. In general, small villages can only rob some coarse food and some livestock, which is really not profitable. After arriving at the coast of East Africa, the Gama's fleet robbed several small coastal city-states on the territory of the Swahili, a mixed race of Arab merchants and local blacks. From the coast of Mozambique to the southern coast of Somalia, there are Swahili people all over the country, and there are also many small Swahili city-states. The Gama was very cunning. He did not force the siege, but used the name of trade to trick the city gates open, and then suddenly launched an attack, which allowed him to break several small Swahili city-states and plunder a lot of wealth. When the Gama's fleet arrived at the Indian supply port, his warships were already filled with precious goods such as gold, sand, ivory, rhino horns, and gems. If he returned to Europe at this time, the Gama could make a fortune again. However, he was responsible for invading the Ming dynasty, so these goods could only be temporarily stored in Goa, Portugal's trading base in India, and prepared to be taken back when returning. Then, the Gama slowly led the fleet to the port of Malacca, and was discovered by Conti's spies, who rushed to report the news. The Gama didn't know at this time that Conti had presented 20 12-pound Napoleon cannons to the Ming court a few months ago, and also presented the mud mold casting method of Napoleon cannons. At this moment, Zhang Yong, one of the 8 tigers of Zhengde, was supervising the craftsmen of the Armory Bureau to cast cannons. After Lu Jin fell, Zhang Yong, who overthrew him, did not gain the power of Lu Jin. The reason is that this guy does not have Lu Jin's ability. Therefore, he can only compete for favor with Gu Daong and other tigers. Zhang Yong knows a little about military affairs, so he is responsible for the Imperial Horse Administration, which is in charge of military affairs in the Inner Court, and the Armory Bureau of the Inner 8 bureaus. After Kong Tai presented the clay mold casting method for the 12-pound cannon, Zhang Yong, relying on Zhengde's favor, snatched the cannon casting technology and tasks from the Ministry of Industry, and had the cannon cast by the Inner Court's Arms Bureau. Now, a few months later, the first batch of clay molds that were originally made have almost dried. Then, it is the cannon casting link. Copper cannons are much simpler than iron cannons, and are not prone to internal problems. Therefore, there is no problem for Zhang Yong to command the Arms Bureau to cast cannons. The only problem is probably that when Kong Tai presented the cannon casting technology, he did not submit the gun carriage drawings, but only the gun body casting technology. In other words, the 12-pound Napoleon cannon cast by Zhang Yong's Arms Bureau actually only has a bare barrel. Of course, there are gun ears, and the mountain can be added later. But there is no problem. Because, except for the cannons of the Beihai Kingdom, the cannons of other countries do not have a gun carriage with wheels. At most, there are 2 more gun ears. The sights behind the gun are considered high-tech. After being filled with gunpowder and dry blasted, after testing, only 13 of the first 120 12-pound Napoleon cannons manufactured by the Armory Bureau had problems and needed to be remelted. In other words, the pass rate is as high as about 90%. This is because Marin did not present the Rodman method of inner membrane cooling to the Ming court. This is a killer weapon for casting heavy artillery, and Marin would not be stupid enough to present it to the Ming dynasty. But despite this, the pass rate of nearly 90% still made Zhang Yong ecstatic. Because the pass rate of the cannons cast by the Armory Bureau before was much lower than this, not even half. So, he was also considered meritorious. If Marin knew what Zhang Yong was thinking, he would probably scold him to death. You know, it's not difficult to cast a copper cannon, and you have a scrap rate of more than 10%, which is simply. This is probably related to the fact that the management of craftsmen in the Ming dynasty was not very strict. Some things were clearly scrapped due to personal operational errors rather than technical problems. In this regard, the Beihai Kingdom was very strict in the process, so the scrap rate was extremely low. The management on the Ming dynasty side was not strict, and Zhang Yong kept a close eye on it this time, but it still caused so many scraps. If he didn't keep an eye on it in person in the future, the scrap rate would probably be even higher. Fortunately, if there was a problem with the casting of the copper cannon, it could be melted and remade. Anyway, copper is not as easy to oxidize as iron. At most, it would just cost a little clay mold. Chapter 1800, Pinglu Cannon. The clay mold does not cost much, after all, clay is free. Its biggest cost is actually labor and time. But in the Ming dynasty, the least valuable thing is labor. As for time, it is also worthless. After all, the Ming dynasty was still in the ancient times of carriages and horses are slow, letters are far away, and life is a couple, the last sentence is nonsense, and there is no time that cannot be wasted. Perhaps, only in the modernized factories of Beihai Kingdom will they pursue, time is efficiency. After the 12-pound Napoleon cannon was cast, Zhang Yong immediately ran to show his merits to Emperor Zhengde. Zhengde was warlike, so he went there happily. Because the range of the artillery was too far, it would definitely not be possible to test fire in the city. Therefore, Zhang Yong placed the test firing site in the Xishan camp outside the city. Zhengde brought Gu Deong and others, and followed Zhang Yong to the shooting range of the Xishan camp with great interest to watch the effect of the new cannon. Zhang Yong was also a smart man. He knew that Emperor Zhengde was most keen on attacking Mongolia. Originally in history, 2 years later, in 1517, Emperor Zhengde would personally lead the army to fight against the Mongolian prince in Yingzhou, which was the Yingzhou victory. The master had the idea of dealing with Mongolia, and Zhang Yong certainly catered to his wishes. Therefore, during the test shooting, Zhang Yong did not take out the wooden boat model that Kong Tai had suggested before as a target for shooting, but selected 30 retired old horses from the army. These horses were either old or lame due to sprained feet. In short, they could no longer be war horses. Their fate was not to retire, but to be slaughtered and made into horse meat. Zhang Yong had been in charge of the 12th Regiment and the Shinji camp for a long time, so he naturally knew this. Therefore, 30 retired old horses or lame horses were found from the 12th Regiment and formed a straight line on the shooting range. The artillery was facing this straight line. Because Kong Tai said that the Napoleon cannon could penetrate the entire company column at a distance of 600 yards. Therefore, Zhang Yong boldly increased the distance between the 30 horses and the artillery to more than 300 meters this time. This is the effective range of the rear-loading French cannon. As for the new cannon, it is natural to show its superiority over the old cannon. Zhang Yong knew that his master was fond of ostentation, so he naturally had to fully demonstrate the superiority of the new cannon. Otherwise, how could he get the credit? He had to make a drama of great pleasure. So far. Are you sure? Emperor Zhengde Zhu Hozhao frowned and asked. Although he was fond of ostentation, he really worked hard in military affairs. He had personally operated the French cannon and matchlock gun presented by Ma Lin before, and knew those properties. Your Majesty, just watch. Zhang Yong waved his hand proudly, signaling Zhang Dainyu, the chief gunner of the Shinji camp, to open fire. As the chief gunner of the Shinji camp, Zhang Dainyu actually tested the firing dozens of times yesterday, and he was actually very skilled in today's performance. He calmly directed his men to tear open the oil paper bag containing a certain amount of gunpowder, pour the gunpowder into the muzzle, and poke it in with a wooden stick together with the oil paper bag. Then, another gunner took an iron ball, stuffed it into the barrel, and poked it in with a wooden stick to compact it. These processes were taught by the gunners of Beihai Kingdom, including using oil paper to wrap the fixed amount of gunpowder. Even the gunpowder was granular gunpowder, which was bonded with rice soup, mainly because powdered gunpowder was easy to stratify in the oil paper bag and had to be stirred before use, which was troublesome. The iron ball shells naturally adopted the sandbox casting method of Beihai Kingdom, and the manufacturing was very simple. The final aim was naturally made by Zhang Dainyu. He aimed at the 30 horses in front through Wangshan, and then raised the muzzle slightly. After adjusting, Zhang Dainyu stepped back and stood up, and ordered loudly, "Ignite." Then, a wooden stick wrapped with a burning matchlock approached the fuse. A moment later, the cannon began to roar. Boom! After a loud bang, the 12-pound iron ball shells rushed towards the unfortunate horses more than 300 meters away with a shock wave like an air wave. Puff puff. A short and puff sound came from a distance. Then, big blood holes appeared on the bodies of those unfortunate retired war horses, and then blood arrows shot up into the sky. Until they began to spurt blood, those unfortunate retired war horses felt great pain. So, they began to wail and roll, and blood stained the ground. At the same time, the intestines of these unfortunate war horses also flowed all over the ground. Even the intestines of some war horses were torn apart by the iron ball shells, flowing all over the ground. Regardless of the wails of these war horses, the 12-pound iron ball shells penetrated all 30 war horses in one breath, and the momentum did not decrease. It flew forward for another 200 meters before falling to the ground. There was no way. It took a lot of energy to penetrate 30 horses. After all, the body of a horse is wider than that of a human, and the resistance to the shells is also greater. But when the iron ball shell landed, it was covered with the blood of the war horses, and even a lot of bloody meat from the internal organs of the war horses. Gu Deong and other weak people couldn't help vomiting after seeing it. Zheng De, who liked war, including Zhang Yong, who had led troops for a long time, didn't feel anything, but felt a little excited. It's amazing that it can penetrate 30 horses from such a distance. If you take a row of such artillery and fight against the Mongolian cavalry. Hee hee. Emperor Zheng De Zhu Hojiao was immersed in YY. But Zhang Yong had to remind him, "Your Majesty, this cannon is powerful, but it is difficult to move." "Why is it difficult?" Zheng De asked with his head tilted, a little unhappy. Zhang Yong said with a bitter face, "Your Majesty, this cannon weighs 1,100 kilograms, and ordinary men can't lift it. I'm afraid it will be very difficult to quickly deploy this cannon in front of the battle." Zhang Yong had to explain it clearly first, otherwise, it would be deceiving the emperor. At this time, the gunner Zhang Dainyu beside him suddenly said, "Your Majesty, eunuch Zhang, I have a way to drive this cannon." Zhang Yong was so scared that he glared at Zhang Dainyu and scolded, "Zhang Dainyu, do you have the right to speak in front of the emperor?" But Emperor Zheng De's eyes lit up and said, "Tell me quickly, is there any way to deploy this cannon in front of the battle? If the method is useful, I will reward you handsomely." Zhang Dainyu plucked up the courage and suggested, "Your Majesty, please look. The barrel of this cannon is smooth, like a cylinder. I remember that when people in my hometown cut down 1,000-year-old giant trees, when they loaded the thick giant trees onto the carts, they generally did not lift them, but directly used several wooden sticks to build a slope. Then, let a few people push the round giant trees and roll them onto the carts. So, I thought, since this 1,000-gene heavy cannon is difficult to lift, why not remove the cannon ears that are in the way and make it into a cylinder directly, and install the sights behind the cannon before firing. In this way, when loading and unloading this cannon, you can use a solid thick wooden board as a slope to roll the cannon up and down." Emperor Zheng De Zhu Hojiao was still at a loss, he had no idea about carrying heavy objects. After all, he grew up in the deep palace, had little experience, and had never seen coolies working. Zhang Yong, who was standing next to him, was suddenly enlightened. He often supervised the soldiers' work and knew that what Zhang Dainyu said made sense. So he quickly ordered someone to find a wire saw and saw off the two troublesome ears behind the cannon. Then, he found a cart and built a simple ramp with several thick woods in parallel. Later, Zhang Yong was pleasantly surprised to find that as long as the ramp was long and gentle, 3 or 4 strong men could easily roll the 1,100-G Napoleon cannon on and off the cart. "Okay, you did a good job. Zhang Dainyu, right? I will appoint you as the 100 households of the Shenjing Cannon Battalion, which can be inherited by the family. In addition, I will reward you with 1,000 taels of silver." Zheng De shouted excitedly. He seemed to see the Mongolian cavalry trembling and wailing in front of such a powerful artillery. But Zheng De hadn't wide enough, and an urgent report came from the Jinui, a secret report came from Fujian. Portugal has sent 30 large warships loaded with Portuguese cannons to Malacca, preparing to invade Guangdong and Fujian's coastal areas of Ming Dynasty. Emperor Zheng De was stunned. After thinking for a long time, he finally gave up the idea of transporting the first batch of 107 12-pound cannons to the border of Xuande, Xuanfu and Datong, and agreed to transport these cannons to the coast of Fujian in Guangdong to resist the invasion of Portugal. However, because the new cannon was fierce, Emperor Zheng De was dissatisfied with the original name of this cannon, 12-pound Napoleon cannon. Because Napoleon in Chinese sounds similar to that broken wheel, Z, which sounds unlucky. So, Emperor Zhengde gave the 12-pound Napoleon cannon a new name, Pinglu cannon. The so-called Lu, in the Ming dynasty, naturally refers to the Northern Lu Mongolian tribes. Emperor Zhengde named the 12-pound Napoleon gun Pinglu cannon, which also showed his determination to level the grassland. Chapter 1801 Iron casting cannon and raising the barrier. The craftsmen of the Ming dynasty were relatively smart, but they had not received systematic education since childhood. All their knowledge basically came from their masters or their fathers and grandfathers. Therefore, it was difficult for them to achieve great success in the future. However, some very easy things can still be made. For example, a great craftsman of the Armory Bureau named Su Quan thought about using iron to cast cannons. After all, iron is much cheaper than copper. If the cannon is successfully cast with iron, the material cost alone can save a lot of money. You know, copper can be directly cast into coins for circulation in the Ming dynasty. Thousands of kilograms of copper means thousands of kilograms of coins. Therefore, using iron to cast cannons is the most economical choice. For this reason, Su Quan and his apprentices deliberately made dozens more when kneading the clay molds. Then, after the copper cannon was cast, he applied to the eunuch Zhang Quan, who was in charge of his superiors, to try to cast cannons with iron. Zhang Quan was Zhang Yongren's godson and was in charge of the affairs of the Armory Bureau. He also felt that it was cheaper to cast cannons with iron than with copper, so he agreed to allocate iron materials for Su Quan and others to try. But this attempt was not ideal. Among dozens of clay molds, only 3 of the cannons were qualified. Moreover, after multiple rounds of shooting, the bottom of the cannon became soft due to overheating, and 2 of them burst, resulting in the death of 3 gunners on the spot and 5 serious injuries. Fortunately, the Ming dynasty did not regard the lower-level soldiers as human beings, and no one cared about the death of a few. In the end, Su Quan realized that the iron-cast cannon technology was more difficult, and in order to be safe, the cannon body must be thickened, especially the thickness of the tail cannon body, to avoid bursting. However, there is still a long way to go to come up with mature cannons and casting technology. Marin didn't know what happened in the Ming dynasty. In fact, the Beihai kingdom had already had the ability to cast cannons with steel. For example, those heavy cannons were basically cast with low-carbon steel. However, in order to control the technology and prevent others from knowing that their own cannons were cast with iron, Marin deliberately used copper cannons on all the exported cannons. There is no other reason, just raising the threshold for use. You know, it is not something that ordinary people can afford to use copper to cast cannons on a large scale. After all, copper in Europe is more expensive and the cost is even higher. Marin deliberately used copper cannons to raise the threshold for artillery equipment. Want to equip cannons? Do you have the money to cast them? When they heard that they would use a lot of copper cannons, the poorer monarchs would give up immediately. Then, the only ones who could really equip artillery on a large scale were the local tyrants. Then, Marin needed to focus on dealing with only a few local tyrant opponents, and the difficulty would be much lower. In fact, this set of old Americans in later generations played the best. Why are the Americans keen on advanced fighters and missiles in later generations? Because ordinary countries can't do it. In the field of electronic technology alone, China in the 20th century couldn't do it, let alone those ordinary countries in Asia, Africa and Latin America. Because no one can do it, in the end, everyone can only spend a lot of money to buy advanced weapons from the Americans. But in fact, the whole world has been led astray by the Americans. Is it really necessary to equip advanced fighters that cost only $200 or $300 million each? Is it really necessary to use advanced missiles that cost millions of dollars each? In fact, there is no need at all. The Americans deliberately promote and raise technical standards in order to mislead other countries. Look, you should use good weapons like mine, and everything else is rubbish. But in fact, in many cases, those particularly advanced weapons are not necessary at all. If it is a precision strike at an ultra-long distance, it does require those very advanced and high-tech weapons. But what if it is an ordinary regional friction? Do you need advanced missiles worth millions or even tens of millions of dollars to open fire? Not at all. Let's take a simple example. 2 very small and poor countries in Africa fought each other because of border friction. The 2 countries are very small in size, let alone missiles, even cannons can cover the entire territory of each other. At this time, is it necessary to use advanced cruise missiles with built-in GPS satellite positioning? Absolutely not. Conflicts between small countries like this do not require any advanced missiles or advanced fighters. Moreover, most countries cannot afford these 2 things. If they fire a few more rounds, the country will go bankrupt. At this time, things like Katyusha rocket launchers are particularly suitable for regional conflicts. Just fire a wave of rockets without thinking, and call it a day. As for the cost, a Tomahawk missile costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, while ordinary rockets only cost a few $1,000s. If it is not a long-range strike, but a close-range conflict, only a fool would use that kind of precision missile. In fact, rockets are missiles without electronic equipment such as guidance systems, and vice versa. If it is not a special rocket like the Guardian, with a range of hundreds of kilometers, the cost of rockets is incredibly low. However, in a head-on conflict, the difference is not very big. For example, when encountering the main cluster of enemy forces on the front battlefield, the effect of rockets and missiles carrying ordinary warheads is actually not much different. Unless it is used to accurately strike the enemy's headquarters, the difference can be shown. If you want to destroy the enemy's living forces, you must use rocket launchers. After all, it is powerful enough and cheap. Although the cost of a Guardian rocket with a range of 200 or 300 kilometers in later generations is as high as $100,000 per rocket, if it is an ordinary rocket without extended range and electronic equipment upgrade, the cost is frighteningly low. Marin remembered that he had heard that during the conflict with Monkey in the last century, the cost of a 109 rocket was only more than 100 yuan. Of course, everyone's salary was low at that time, and the average monthly salary was only a few dozen yuan. But a rocket is equivalent to an ordinary person's salary for 1 or 2 months. In later generations, it is only a few thousand yuan. Think about it, on the front battlefield, hundreds of thousands of troops are facing off. Is it more cost-effective to bombard the enemy with a few million-dollar missiles, or with hundreds of rockets of the same value? Although the confrontation of cutting-edge weapons is inevitable in the war, in fact, in the war, the real main force is still the low-cost, mass-produced, and powerful weapons that are the most popular. Just like in World War II, why did the German army lose to the Soviet Union in the later period? The German Tiger tank is indeed very powerful, but the Soviet army does not compete with you in technology, we compete in quantity. The T-34 is certainly not as powerful as the Tiger tank, but it is easy to produce, low cost, and has a large output. You dispatch hundreds of Tiger tanks, I dispatch thousands of T-34s, and beat you to death. The seemingly advanced F-22 fighter jet, which costs $290 million, is indeed powerful. But in fact, it may not be invincible. Apart from anything else, there is a chance to get rid of it by making a batch of low-cost drones to fight with it in the air. And how cheap are drones? Even if dozens of drones are lost, in exchange for shooting down an F-22, it is a big profit. In short, I can afford to lose, but you can't. If it doesn't work, I can also use low-cost and powerful missiles to destroy your airport, leaving you nowhere to land, or even destroying the airport together. So, sometimes, weapons that seem to be backward but low-cost and suitable for mass production can determine the outcome of the battlefield. Because, on the battlefield, weapons will always be damaged. If you are only equipped with a few advanced weapons, once something goes wrong, your combat effectiveness will be ruined. But others will not feel bad even if they lose a few backward weapons. Moreover, they have a large quantity and are not afraid of losses. Of course, advanced weapons are still needed. It is best to use advanced weapons in combination with mass-produced secondary weapons. In other words, advanced weapons are used to deal with advanced weapons. And those mass-produced weapons are the main force that really kills the enemy. But why do later generations, whether it is the Americans, the Russians, or the Chinese, like to make expensive advanced weapons so much? There is no other reason, just to raise the threshold for weapons production and trade. When the threshold is raised, most countries are rejected. As for the profits, naturally the remaining few will share the big ones. But when a large-scale war really happens, low-cost, mass-produced weapons with great lethality will be the first choice. By then, you will find that many expensive and impractical parts of fighter jets and missiles will be removed, and the entire weapon will become simple and efficient. After all, the ability to regenerate is the most important indicator in war. For example, in World War II, why did the Japanese finally lose to the Americans? Because the Japanese aircraft carriers sank one by one, while the American aircraft carriers were launched like dumplings. If I lose one, I will make up for it, but the Japanese side cannot make up for it, and they will be finished in the battle. Therefore, the main force of the war is often not the most advanced weapons, but the second-level advanced but mass-produced things. Of course, some of the most advanced weapons are also needed to suppress the field and deal with the enemy's most advanced weapons. In this way, the war will be easier to fight. As for the technical competition of fighter jets in later generations, to put it bluntly, it is to raise the threshold and fool fools. And can see it very clearly. I will not play a technical competition with you on ordinary weapons, I specialize in nuclear bombs. You have F-22. I have nuclear bombs. Do you have F-35? I have a nuclear bomb. You have a B-2. I have a nuclear bomb. I can scare you to death with just one move. Moreover, Russia later became poor and could not afford a technical competition. Therefore, this almost rogue method was used to make the old Americans who deliberately provoked the competition have no temper. After all, developing nuclear bombs alone costs less and has good results. But China seems to be a little obsessed and has to do this and that. But in fact, it is more cost-effective to develop a single big killer. However, China later had money and could keep up. Moreover, it can stimulate India and waste India's money. In short, Marin is now focusing on promoting copper cannons, not because iron cannons are not good, but to raise the threshold. Want to engage in an arms race with me? Do you have money to buy so much copper? In this way, most of the poor monarchs and poor princes in Europe were forced to withdraw from the competition of artillery equipment, leaving only the wealthy big countries to participate. In addition, Marin's iron mold casting cannon method is very suitable for rapid casting of copper cannons, which can be mass-produced quickly and is very convenient. When it is necessary to fight a war, the production can be exploded at any time to let the opponent know what it means to wash the ground with cannons. But in the Ming dynasty, because they are very concerned about costs and the craftsmen are also a little clever, it is normal for them to make iron cannons by themselves. In fact, Marin, who reads history, knows that the Ming dynasty initially learned to cast copper cannons from the Portuguese in Macau, and then developed iron cannons by themselves. As a result, the Macau Bugaleo Cannon Foundry specially hired Chinese cannon casting craftsmen to learn how to use iron cannons in the Ming dynasty. Before that, the Portuguese had always used copper cannons. The red cannons that the Portuguese sold to the Ming dynasty in the late Ming dynasty were not made by themselves, but 18-pound co-failing cannons salvaged from sunken British warships. After all, Britain is rich in coal and iron resources, but lacks copper, so it was forced to develop iron cannons in the 16th century. The people of the Ming dynasty have a strong learning ability. After all, they have not received the foolish education of the Qing court. Therefore, although the cultural level of Ming dynasty craftsmen is not high, their creativity is still good. For example, the first batch of red cannons were bought from the Portuguese in Macau. Later, the imperial court was able to cast red cannons on its own. However, a group of cannon casting craftsmen were abducted by the Qing dynasty, which made it easier for the Qing dynasty to attack the city. What is speechless is that 200 years later during the Opium War, the level of firearms in the Qing dynasty was still at the level of the late Ming dynasty. Chapter 1802 Ashio Copper Mine. In fact, Marin was under some financial pressure to equip the army of the North Sea with copper cannons. Fortunately, he invested in the development of the giant copper mine of Falen in Sweden, and obtained a lot of copper ingots every year. In addition, cheap copper can be purchased from India and the Ming dynasty. Therefore, he dared to have the confidence to engage in an arms race with others for copper cannons. However, the large-caliber heavy artillery such as the Red Cannon and the Karen Cannon on the warships are all cast with low-carbon steel. Anyway, people from other countries cannot easily inspect the artillery on the warships of the North Sea. And for those warships that need to appear in people's sight, Marin ordered that the heavy artillery on them be smeared with gold powder on the surface of the gun body, making them look like copper cannons. Anyway, those outsiders who boarded the ship did not dare to scratch the cannons and could not see the truth. Even many sailors on the ship did not know that the ship's cannons were originally cast in iron. Only the management such as the captain and the gunners would know the material of the cannon. Of course, those veteran sailors must know. Only those new sailors would not know the secret. Those outsiders who did not know the truth, after seeing the copper cannons on the armed merchant ships of the North Sea Kingdom, were all amazed. Nima, the North Sea Kingdom is really rich. It can consume so much copper to cast cannons. However, it is precisely because of this that Marin's business of purchasing cheap copper in India has been targeted by the Spanish and Portuguese. After being inspired by Marin, the senior officials of the two countries suddenly realized, yes, why can't we purchase cheap copper cannons in India? Although according to the original agreement on the transfer of spice trade, Spain and Portugal cannot restrict Marin from purchasing cheap copper in India. However, they can compete with Marin and rush to buy cheap copper from India. Therefore, Marin can also feel that the difficulty of purchasing cheap copper in India will be greatly increased in the future. In addition, there are also troubles in purchasing cheap copper in the Ming dynasty. It turned out that Kong Tai's behavior of purchasing a large amount of copper in the Ming dynasty caused dissatisfaction in the Ming cabinet. Because the regents of the Ming dynasty believed that the Ming dynasty itself was short of copper, how could they watch the copper flow out? It just so happened that because the treasure notes were not accepted by the people, the Ming court was already discussing the complete abolition of the treasure notes. At this time, copper coins became the only legal tender. The withdrawal of the treasure notes will also cause a sharp increase in the demand for copper coins. Therefore, the Ming dynasty officials who were discussing the abolition of the treasure notes were very unhappy with Kong Tai's large purchase of copper, a material for casting coins. For this reason, the Ming cabinet has sent a letter to Kong Tai, asking him to restrain his purchase of copper in the Ming dynasty. Because copper is a material for casting coins, and the Ming dynasty itself is also short of it. Kong Tai sent the news back to his homeland, and Marin was also a little worried. It will definitely be difficult for India to buy copper in the future. After all, the North Sea Kingdom has no colonies in India, and it is not as convenient as Spain and Portugal to purchase cheap copper. The Ming dynasty also restricted the purchase of copper, so where can it get copper? Marin first thought of Japan, but the problem is that the current situation in Japan is complicated. Moreover, the strength of the domestic armed forces is not weak. It would be difficult to conquer Japan without launching a national expedition. However, in that case, the risk is also great. After all, there is a danger that the old nest will be destroyed. And if fewer people are sent, they can't suppress the counterattack of the Japanese local forces. Even if the Copper Mountain is occupied, it may not be possible to mine copper with peace of mind. Then, we can only consider other places. Marin thought of the Chuquicamata copper mine in Chile again. That is the world's first copper mine in the future, and it is an open-pit mine. But after thinking about it, Marin gave up again. Why? The problem lies in the local environment of the Chuquicamata copper mine. Chuquicamata is located on the edge of the desert in northern Chile. The local climate is extremely dry and hot. In such a harsh environment, it is impossible to gather a large number of miners for mining. But the supply of fresh water is very difficult. Just like the saltpeter mine near Iquique that Marin is currently mining, due to climatic reasons, only drought-resistant and heat-resistant Egyptian slaves can be used for mining, and it is difficult to increase production. The most important thing is that fresh water supply is difficult, and water can only be supplied by camels. The saltpeter mine near Iquique is relatively close to the sea, and there is no problem with fresh water supply. Chuquicamata is deep in the desert, near the western foothills of the Andes, far from the sea, and it is difficult to guarantee fresh water supply. Unless, when the train is opened in the future. So, Marin had to temporarily give up this super copper mine in Chile. Then, he thought of the Olympic Dam in Australia. But he quickly rejected this mine, because although the Olympic Dam has a large reserve, it is also associated with gold. However, this copper mine of Tamiao is more than 100 meters underground. With the current level of technology, it is extremely difficult and dangerous to mine. So, this can only be passed. In addition, Marin also knows the Bingham copper mine in the United States, the copper mine in Zambia and the copper mine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. However, these are useless. The Bingham copper mine in the United States is located in western Utah, deep inland, and Marin obviously has no ability to develop there. The copper mines in Zambia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo are currently in Spanish territory and Portuguese territory, respectively, so it is difficult to start. In addition, there seems to be a copper mine in Panama. But Marin rejected the plan to mine copper in Panama. Because the climate in Panama was too bad at that time. Taking a group of miners to Panama to mine copper, who knows how many of them can survive. The same is true for the copper mines in Zambia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In this primitive era without development, the climate there can kill people. Want to mine copper? You'd better take a break. It's better to choose to mine copper in the desert of Chuquicamata, Chile than to mine copper in the rainforest. At least, as long as there is water in the desert, it is easier to survive than in the rainforest. After all, there are no poisonous mosquitoes and insects. If there were, they would have died of thirst long ago. Marin was very sad, so he ran to Ganfu Shuizi to find comfort. After listening to Marin's complaints, Ganfu Shuizi made a good suggestion. My husband, why are you so obsessed with occupying the Copper Mountain? It's also okay to cooperate with others to develop it. Cooperation. How to cooperate? Marin was stunned. Didn't you say that there are many copper mountains in Japan? Since you want to get copper quickly, why don't you use the local daimyo to develop mines first? In this way, you can get copper faster. Marin thought about it, and it was true. However, he was worried that after the copper mine was mined, the local daimyo would turn against him and not sell him copper. After listening to Marin's concerns, Ganfu Shuizi covered his mouth and chuckled, my husband has filtered it. You know, Japan is short of supplies. As long as you can bring the scarce goods in Japan, such as weapons and armor that the daimyo are in urgent need of, as well as silk, sugar and other rare goods that Japan is in urgent need of, you still have to worry that the other party will not sell copper to you. Marin reacted immediately, yes, it's a seller's market now. Those daimyo of the Japanese Ritsushaku countries are so poor that they can't take out any goods to exchange with others. If there is copper to be exchanged, it will definitely be taken out. Because they can't take out other valuable goods to exchange for the goods they need with others. Maybe, it's really possible to use the local daimyo to develop the copper mine first. Marin said uncertainly. Kanfu Mizuko said, my dear husband, it would be very convenient to let those local daimyo develop the copper mine. After all, they are locals. In addition, after the copper mine is developed, Nobunaga's army can also seize it. Marin's eyes suddenly lit up, yes, first use the locals to develop the copper mine. Then, when you have accumulated enough strength, you can seize the copper mine. Hee hee. At this time, the name of a famous copper mine popped up, Ashio Copper Mine. Ashio Copper Mine was one of the largest copper mines in Japan during the Edo period, and was also the main source of materials for Kanei Tsuho, the main copper coin of Japan with a large circulation during the Edo period. It is said that at its peak, Ashio copper mine produced 1,200 tons of copper annually. This is the output in ancient times, the output in the purely artificial era. If Marin now deceives the local daimyo of Ashio copper mine to develop the copper mine first and obtain enough copper, later, he will find a way to swallow Ashio copper mine. Moreover, this method is very feasible. In this era, Japan is one of the few populous countries in the world, and it is least lacking in human resources for developing copper mines. For example, the Chuquicamata copper mine in Chile, there is no one there, and it is very troublesome to move a large number of miners there. Unlike the copper mines in Japan, a large number of laborers can be captured from nearby to serve as miners. Therefore, if you want to develop a mine quickly, you must be in an area like Japan where there is no shortage of human resources. It is difficult to find miners to mine in a deserted place. Chapter 1803 Dexing Copper Mine. In ancient times when there was no modern mining machinery, mining, or dressing and smelting were completely dependent on manpower. Therefore, in areas with a large population, the development of mineral resources is more convenient. Why were prices in China and India very cheap in ancient times? Because the two countries have abundant human resources. In uninhabited places like Siberia, even if a super large mine is discovered in this era, it is not capable of mining. There is no one there. In ancient China and India, once a large mineral vein is discovered, tens of thousands of coolies can be mobilized to mine, dress and smelt. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the prices in ancient China and India are much cheaper than in Europe. However, Japan is an exception. Japan has very rich human resources. At this time, the population is as high as 17 million, 2 million more than France. However, Japan is poor in mineral resources. Although it has a large number of cheap labor, there are many mountains and little land in the country, and the mineral resources are not very rich. Therefore, the price is quite high. Of course, that is because Japan's prospecting technology in this era was relatively poor and failed to discover large-scale minerals. Later, with the discovery of supermines such as Iwami silver mine and Ashio copper mine, Japan had abundant money in a short period of time. Needless to say, the silver produced by Iwami silver mine is the world currency, which is very useful. The copper produced by Ashio copper mine, which was discovered in the 17th century, is also very popular. During the Tokugawa shogunate, the Edo shogunate was not only able to use a large amount of copper produced by Ashio copper mine to cast Kani Itsuho, but also to export a large amount. In the 17th century, due to the huge output of Swedish copper, the price of copper in Europe had fallen from 15 to 1 with silver to about 44 to 1. But as the Dutch brought back Japanese copper from Japan, the price of copper fell directly to a copper-silver ratio of more than 80 to 1, which was a full-fold drop. In this way, the Dutch also made huge profits. At that time, not only did the Dutch ship Japanese copper back to Europe for sale, but the Qing dynasty, when it was just established, also relied on importing crude copper from Japan for casting copper coins. In addition, Southeast Asia at that time also relied on importing copper from Japan to cast its own currency and even to cast cannons. It can be seen that Japan's copper production at that time was so large that it could not only meet domestic demand, but also be exported in large quantities to Europe, the Qing dynasty and Southeast Asia. The most famous copper mine in Japan at that time was probably Ashio copper mine. At that time, Ashio copper mine produced 1,200 tons of copper per year, or 2.4 million catties. If it was cast into small copper coins of about 3.5 grams, more than 340 million pieces could be cast. And according to the conversion of 1,001 to 1 tael of silver, it can be worth about 343,000 taels of silver. Ma Lin, a history student, has read history and knows that during the heyday of the Qing dynasty, the annual output of copper was only more than 10 million catties. At that time, the copper of the Qing dynasty was almost heavily dependent on the Dian copper produced in Yunnan. The proportion of Dian copper in the production of the entire Qing dynasty once reached 95%. Of course, this is the data from the Qianlong period. At the beginning of the Qing dynasty, during the reign of Emperor Kangxi, it was still very dependent on Japanese copper imported from Japan. Yes, how could I forget about Yunnan copper? Ma Lin slapped his head and thought of the problem. A big difference between the Ming dynasty and the Qing dynasty is that the Qing dynasty developed Yunnan copper in Yunnan, so it no longer relied on imported copper in the middle and late periods. In the late Ming dynasty and the early Qing dynasty, it was very dependent on Japanese copper. Ma Lin remembered that in a paper he accidentally read in his previous life, it said that in the Ming dynasty, Yunnan copper production in Yunnan was not taken seriously. At that time, the annual output was only tens of thousands of catties, which was not very valued. But since Kong Matsi defeated Wu Sangui and took control of Yunnan in the Qing dynasty, in view of the serious lack of copper for casting coins like the Ming dynasty, Yunnan's copper mines were vigorously developed. By the Qianlong period, the annual output of Yunnan copper in Yunnan had reached more than 10 million catties, accounting for most of the national output. In other words, the Ming and Qing dynasties were both short of copper at the beginning, but the Qing dynasty later alleviated the shortage of copper by developing Yunnan copper. It is said that the copper coins of the Qing dynasty were basically made of Yunnan copper. At that time, several large copper mines such as Dongchuan in Yunnan almost became the treasury of the Qing dynasty. The Ming dynasty was more miserable because the Yunnan copper in Yunnan was not developed, so there was a serious shortage of copper in the country. It was okay in the early days because there were treasure notes to support it, which could alleviate the need for copper coins. In the middle and late stages, with the abolition of treasure notes and the high development of the economy, the gap in copper was huge. Fortunately, the Europeans happened to send a large amount of silver later, which alleviated the pressure of the lack of currency in the Ming dynasty. Otherwise, the Ming dynasty would have to suffer a serious shortage of money. It was also Marin's bad luck that he happened to encounter the Zhengde dynasty. At this time, the Ming dynasty court was discussing the issue of abolishing treasure notes. Once the treasure notes were abolished, the Ming Empire could only rely on copper coins as the main currency. At that time, it would be found that there was a very, very severe shortage of copper. Even now, the Ming cabinet has also discovered the shortage of copper. Therefore, a warning was issued for Kong Tai's large-scale collection of copper. If you want to continue to import cheap copper from the Ming dynasty, unless the Ming dynasty is no longer short of copper. Should I tell the Ming dynasty about the potential of Yunnan copper? Marin fell into deep thought. To be honest, as a college student who is proficient in both Chinese history and geography, Marin not only knows the important historical status of Yunnan copper in the Qing dynasty, but also knows another super copper mine, Dexing copper mine. Dexing copper mine is one of the largest copper mines in China in the future, and most importantly, it is an open-pit mine. I don't know how the ancients did it, but they missed such a large copper mine and were still short of copper. Marin remembered that Dexing copper mine seemed to be in the Guanmao mountain area in the northeast of Dexing city, located at the junction of Jiangxi, Zhejiang and Anhui provinces. No wonder. Thinking of this, Marin suddenly realized. After all, it is at the junction of 3 provinces, it must be a remote mountainous area, no wonder Dexing copper mine was not discovered in time. If it is located in an area with convenient transportation, such as Tongling in Anhui province, this riverside area would have been discovered long ago. Dexing copper mine is a super large mine with a copper metal reserve of more than 10 million tons. The copper production in later generations reached more than 100,000 tons a year, which is very scary. If the Ming dynasty developed the Dexing copper mine, it is estimated that the financial problems can be greatly alleviated. After all, copper means money in ancient times. If the Ming Empire has money, it will definitely not collapse so quickly. As long as the Dexing copper mine and the Dongchuan copper mine, the main force of Yunnan copper in the Qing dynasty's money bag, are developed, the Ming dynasty will not be short of money at all. What? The Ministry of Households has no money? Dig copper coins. Just mint a few 100 million coins and it will be done. Moreover, the Ming Empire is not afraid of minting too much money at all. Because the Ming dynasty itself is seriously short of money and not enough. With 2 major copper mines as the foundation, the Ming dynasty's economy can be stabilized. But what good is this for me? Marin fell into deep thought. After thinking for a long time, Marin decided to help the Ming dynasty. However, he only planned to tell the Ming dynasty about the Dongchuan copper mine and the Dexing copper mine. Because if the Ming dynasty was too rich, Marin would also be under pressure. After thinking about it, Marin finally decided to tell the Ming dynasty about the Dexing copper mine and temporarily concealed the Dongchuan copper mine. Because even if the Ming dynasty was told about the reserves of the Dongchuan copper mine, it would be difficult to develop it. After all, the Dongchuan copper mine is located on the Yunnan-Guizhou plateau, and external transportation is extremely inconvenient. Even if copper is produced, transportation is troublesome. Didn't you see that the development of Yunnan copper began during the Kanshi period of the Qing dynasty, and it was not until the Qianlong period that it was able to meet domestic demand? The Dexing copper mine is different. It is located at the junction of Jiangxi, Zhejiang and Anhui provinces. This place is close to the southeastern core of the Ming dynasty, with rich human resources and convenient transportation. As long as you leave the Shangrao mountain area, you can quickly reach the Yangtze River to the north, which is very easy to develop. In this way, if the Ming dynasty wants to develop the Dexing copper mine, it will soon see the effect. Unlike the development of Yunnan copper, it will take many years just to build a road out of Yunnan. Moreover, the southwest region of the Ming dynasty was unstable. After the development of such a large copper mine, who knows if a chieftain will jump out to seize the copper mine. Therefore, it is better to let the Ming dynasty develop the Dexing copper mine near the core area of the southeast. Once the shortage of copper in the Ming Empire is alleviated, Ma Lin can also smoothly purchase a large amount of cheap copper from the Ming dynasty. Moreover, this is faster than developing Japan's Ashio copper mine. Because Japan is now divided into pieces. And the Ryozoku Shimetsuk province, to which Ashio copper mine belongs, seems to be not strong. Even if Marin informed the existence of Ashio copper mine, the small country would not be able to develop the copper mine immediately. The Ming Empire is different. Although this empire has various problems, its execution ability is definitely strong enough. Perhaps in the southwest and northern regions, the Ming Empire lacks control. However, the Dexing copper mine near the core area of the southeast can be developed quickly by the Ming Empire as long as it is determined. The Ming dynasty has no shortage of personnel and funds. As long as it breaks out, copper can be produced in a short time. At that time, Marin can also benefit from it. In addition, providing information about the Dexing copper mine can also be regarded as a great contribution to the Ming dynasty, which can increase the favorability of the Ming court. At that time, it will be much easier to do other things. As for the Ashio copper mine, Marin thought about it and decided to notify Shimakuni and let them develop it first. With the strength of Shimakuni, it will take many years to develop the copper mine. And when they develop the copper mine, Nobunaga Kanfu will almost grow up, just in time to swallow this copper mine. In other words, the existence of the Dexing copper mine that rules the Ming dynasty can allow Marin to get enough cheap copper in a short time. As for the Ashio copper mine, Marin is now just using it as a future profit point. Anyway, as long as the Ming Empire develops the world-class Dexing copper mine, neither the Ming dynasty itself nor Marin will be short of cheap copper in the short term. At that time, Marin can take silver to the Ming dynasty to exchange for a shipload of cheap copper. Then, cast it into a 12-pound Napoleon cannon and show off in Europe. Other European countries, because they have difficulty in contacting the Ming court, can only watch Marin, a dog tycoon, show off his copper. Chapter 1804 The Royal Navy. As for whether the Ming Empire would explode after getting the Dexing copper mine, Marin didn't care. Because the Ming Dynasty Civil Service Group is a big trend. With them as a constraint, it is not easy for the Ming Empire to expand overseas. Even the warlike Emperor Zhengde focused more on Mongolia in the north. Without destroying the Mongolian tribes, it is impossible for the Ming Empire to turn its attention to the ocean. Moreover, Ma Limin would like to thank Liu Daxia, a loyal minister of all ages. It was his existence that made the Ming dynasty lose a good opportunity to compete with the West for the ocean in vain. If he were still a Chinese in this life, Marin would naturally hate him as a loyal minister who meant well but did bad things. But now Marin is the monarch of the North Sea Kingdom. His butt is different, and his head's position has changed. Although he still sighs in his heart, Marin still has to thank Lao Lu for his contribution. This mentality is very strange. There is both anger at its lack of struggle for China's loss of maritime power and relief that the fierce dragon of the Ming Empire has been bound by itself. There is no way, who made Marin a traverser of the Chinese soul. As long as there are eternal loyal ministers, like Liu Daxia, Marin can stop worrying about the Ming Empire going to the sea to grab his job. As for the problem of the Ming dynasty becoming rich after the explosion of Dexing copper mine, Marin is not worried at all. Because, after seeing the huge benefits of the copper mine, the greedy civil service group will definitely reach out. At that time, even if the copper mine can produce a large amount of copper coins, how much can fall into the treasury is still a question mark. But it is undeniable that as long as the Ming dynasty developed the Dexing copper mine, while alleviating the crisis of lack of copper for casting coins, it must accept Marin's feelings. Moreover, it is a great favor. You know, the problem of lack of money has always been the top problem of feudal dynasties. In the Song dynasty, because of the lack of money, even iron coins were used to cast coins. There is no way, the social economy is too developed, and there is not enough money. Anyone who can help solve the problem of money shortage will be a first-class hero in any country. Therefore, after sending a memorial informing the location of Dexing copper mine, Marin began to think, what benefits should he ask for from the Ming dynasty court at that time? Well, it's too stingy to sell me only 100,000 kilograms of saltpeter every year. The quantity must be greatly increased. There is also mercury, which is very important for the development of gold and silver mines, and it also needs to be purchased in large quantities every year. Buying a large amount of cheap copper is basic, this must be available. Marin's memorial was sent directly to the Ming dynasty cabinet by Kong Tai, not directly to Zhengde. In fact, sending the memorial to that and sending it to Zhengde are two different things. If the Dexing copper mine is handed over to Zhengde, then Zhengde will definitely swallow the copper mine as a royal private property. At that time, the royal inner treasury will not be short of money, and the Ming emperor will have more say. At that time, the cabinet must bow to the emperor. Because they need copper to cast money. Moreover, with the Dexing copper mine, Zhengde will have the capital to form a strong army. Maybe, the Ming Empire is strong and prosperous, just in front of us. However, this is not what Marin wants to see. If he is reborn as a literati of the Ming Empire, Marin will definitely offer the copper mine to Zhengde as a source of funds for the prosperity of the Ming Empire. However, since Marin has been reborn as a European monarch, he naturally does not want to see the military of the Ming Empire too strong. Therefore, giving the copper mine to Zhengde is out of the question. And handing the memorial directly to the Ming cabinet is completely different. The cabinet is the highest representative of the Ming civil service group. As long as the memorial falls into the hands of the cabinet, while fulfilling the cabinet's political achievements, the dominance of the copper mine will definitely be controlled by the cabinet. If Lu Jin is still there, this copper mine will be offered, and it may be snatched away by the inner court as Zhengde's money bag. However, the powerful Lu Jin has fallen, and the other members of the 8 Tigers are unable to help the wall and cannot fight against the powerful Ming civil service group. At that time, the control of this huge copper mine will definitely fall into the hands of the civil service group. Then, the consequence is that the civil service group will become stronger. After layers of exploitation, not too much ended up in the Ming dynasty treasury. At the same time, after mastering the purse, the civil service group was more confident when competing with Zhengde. Therefore, handing over the Dexing copper mine to the emperor or the cabinet has 2 completely different consequences. For his own interests, Marin finally chose to hand over the Dexing copper mine to the Ming dynasty cabinet, the representative of the Ming dynasty civil service group. In this way, he can also gain the favor of the civil service group. Moreover, Emperor Zhengde couldn't say anything. Because the memorial passed the cabinet, which was done according to the rules. It was against the rules to submit a secret memorial to Zhengde directly. In addition, if Marin submitted a secret memorial to Zhengde directly and presented the Dexing copper mine to Emperor Zhengde, it would definitely greatly offend the Ming dynasty civil service group. The minds of literati are very small, and God knows how they will retaliate against themselves in the future. In addition, Marin is familiar with history and knows that Emperor Zhengde has no descendants and died early. Once Zhengde died, his private gift of the Dexing copper mine to the emperor would definitely bring about crazy revenge from the civil service group. Therefore, whether from the perspective of one's own interests or from the perspective of the future, giving the Dexing copper mine to the Ming dynasty civil service group is the best choice. In addition to the formal memorial, Marin also wrote private letters to Yang Tingyi, the chief minister of the Ming dynasty, and others, informing them of the importance of the Dexing copper mine. Yang Tingyi is a gentleman, but he is also a civil servant. In the letter, Marin introduced the reserves and significance of the Dexing copper mine to him in detail, and told him that whoever controls the Dexing copper mine controls the purse of the Ming dynasty. Presumably, with Yang Tingyi's wisdom, he would not be unaware of what to do. Moreover, Marin also wrote private letters to other civil servants. As long as these people are not stupid, they will definitely intervene in the Dexing copper mine. As long as the Dexing copper mine is controlled by the civil service group, Marin will be relieved. As for Zhengde, well, I'll send a few more Napoleon cannons over and let this bear kid play with the cannons. Goods without sons are not worth long-term investment. Just when Marin was writing those private letters at his desk, Schwartz, the vice president of the Royal West Point Military Academy of America, came over to discuss with Marin whether to add a naval department to the Royal West Point Military Academy. Today's Royal West Point Military Academy was separated from the University of Warwick and only has an army department. Among them, there are several projects such as infantry, cavalry, artillery, engineering and logistics. But the Kingdom of America is far overseas, so Schwartz, as the executive vice president, thinks that naval subjects should be added to the Royal West Point Military Academy. After all, the Navy is indispensable if you want to control America. However, the training of naval officers in the North Sea Kingdom is currently placed in the captain's school, where they are trained together with ordinary captains. Schwartz thinks this is not good. Because the quality of the members of the captain's school is uneven. Some captains lack the courage to fight and are not suitable to be naval officers. Therefore, he came to Marin this time to suggest Marin to add naval subjects to the West Point Military Academy. At the same time, select students with fighting courage from the captain's school and enter the Royal West Point Military Academy for further training. As for the captain's school, the naval warfare projects were appropriately reduced. Especially the artillery battle exercises, Schwartz felt that it was a bit wasteful. For those captains who lack courage, being a merchant ship captain is enough, and there is no need to receive too much naval warfare training, especially live-fire naval warfare training. After all, the cost of firing is very high, and there is no need to waste it on captains who are not naval officers. You know, a round of volleys of artillery fire is dozens or hundreds of pounds of gunpowder, and the cost is very high. After listening to Schwartz's report, Marin also felt that it made sense. After all, not every captain is brave and warlike. For those ordinary captains, it is indeed a waste to conduct live-fire training in naval combat. Just equip the armed merchant ships with a few gunners eliminated from the naval artillery department. Moreover, armed merchant ships only need to be equipped with small-caliber artillery. For example, a 12-pound Napoleon cannon is enough, and there is no need to equip merchant ships with large-caliber artillery. Unless it is a military ship. You know, the main artillery of the Portuguese warships is also a 12-pound cannon. Equipping ordinary merchant ships with a few 12-pound cannons is enough for firepower. As for the naval combat command of those ordinary captain trainees, Marin thinks it is still necessary. After all, merchant ships may also encounter pirates. However, live-fire exercises are not necessary. At that time, just simulate the scene, but don't do live-fire drills. Even if you do it, just symbolically fire 2 shots. Only when the naval captains need to conduct further combat exercises and sign, when seeing the word Royal in the Royal West Point Military Academy on the document, Marin suddenly had an idea and said to Schwartz, "Schwartz, what do you think about me reorganizing the fleet of the North Sea Kingdom into the Royal Navy?" At this time, Marin remembered the famous British Royal Navy in later generations, which was the maritime overlord that once dominated the ocean for 200 years. Since the title of Royal has been applied, why not copy it more thoroughly? Even the name of the Royal Navy has been copied. You know, the genuine Royal Navy will not be established until Charles II ascended the throne in 1660. In other words, if Marin now creates a Royal Navy, it will become the genuine Royal Navy. Moreover, Marin will also control England in the future. At most, the name of the Royal Navy will also be shared with England. Anyway, Marin plans to recruit many sailors in England in the future, and the Royal Navy is not lacking in English elements. In fact, this is also a kind of helplessness. Who made most of the Germans landlubbers? And the only ethnic group in Germany, the Frisians, were too small, only a few 100,000 people. The fishermen and sailors added up to only tens of thousands, which was not enough for Marin. Therefore, if he wanted to form a powerful Royal Navy that could dominate the ocean like the original version, he really had to go to England to recruit sailors. Otherwise, there would not be enough people. Chapter 1805 Loans for Ships and Naval Manpower. In fact, there are not many people in England at present, with a total of less than 3 million people. Counting the 500,000 people in Scotland and the 250,000 people in Ireland, there are only a few 100,000 people. However, England is surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, and only the border with Scotland in the north is not close to the sea. Therefore, although there are less than 3 million people, the total number of fishermen in England is hundreds of thousands. Moreover, Marin promoted the fishing boat loan plan a few years ago, lending money to poor fishermen in England to help them buy big fishing boats of dozens of tons. The reason why Marin was willing to buy fishing boats for English fishermen without collateral loans, just like he did to the Frisians in the country, was to cultivate the foundation of fishermen, and then get more fishermen. In this way, there will be no shortage of people to recruit sailors in the future. At present, England is in the era of enclosure movement. Many English farmers had their land occupied and were forced to become refugees. Then, there were only 2 ways out for them. One was to enter the wool spinning factory and become a wool spinning worker, the other was originally not available, but after Marin was willing to provide a loan, they had one more choice, to buy a boat with a loan and become a fisherman. These farmers who had no fishing experience could not survive because they lost their land. Although the wool spinning factory recruited people, the number of people recruited was also limited. The main reason was that the source of wool was limited, and too many people could not be recruited to weave woolen cloth. Therefore, in fact, many landless farmers had no way out and could only become vagrants and refugees. However, vagrants are an unstable factor in society. It is easy to start an uprising or turn into a robber. Therefore, no matter which country, no one is happy to see the existence of vagrants. Marin remembered that the information he had read showed that when the tyrant Henry VIII was in power, 1509 to 1547, there were too many landless farmers in the country, often hundreds of thousands of people. In order to protect social stability, Henry VIII cruelly threw all the vagrants into prison. Henry VIII even ordered the hanging of 72,000 vagrants, from selected works of Marx and Engels, pages 62 to 63, as a threat to the farmers who wandered around after losing their land. Because at that time, some landless farmers were unwilling to work in woolen mills that exploited people, and would rather wander with their families. At that time, the proportion of vagrants in London was very high. In the 17th century, there were 50,000 vagrants among the 200,000 people in London, which made the public security in London extremely corrupt. When Britain colonized North America in the 17th century, it was also frightened by vagrants, so it did so. As a result, the effect was very good. After all, those vagrants would not stay in Britain to make trouble if they went to America. Of course, that was the original historical situation. In this time and space, because of Marin's intrusion, the domestic situation in England has changed greatly. Originally, during the reign of Henry VIII, there were hundreds of thousands of vagrants whose land was occupied in England, and peasant uprisings against enclosure broke out in 1536 and 1537. Henry VIII was violent, and stimulated by this, he executed a large number of landless peasants, totaling more than 70,000 people. This is the original history, but because of Marin, Edward's war for the throne broke out in England in this time and space, and the Scottish army looted several counties in the north. In Edward's war for the throne, tens of thousands of people died in England, and later Marin recruited tens of thousands of people to North America, and recruited tens of thousands of people to reclaim wasteland in Northumberland. Therefore, there are still relatively few wanderers in England at present, with a total of only tens of thousands of people. This number of people is nothing for a country as big as England. Only when the number of wanderers reaches hundreds of thousands will it threaten England's national security. Because the total population of England is only about 3 million. Even these tens of thousands of wanderers who have lost their land are gradually decreasing under the temptation of Marin's loan to buy fishing boats. And King Edward of England is happy to see this happen. Because the reduction of wanderers means a better security environment and a more stable society. As for the problem that the landless farmers who bought boats with loans could not fish, Marin even set up a service company to provide loans for buying fishing boats, and also sent experienced fishermen to teach newcomers how to operate fishing boats and cast nets to catch fish. Of course, there is also the need to find fishing areas. The last point is more difficult to learn, but fortunately, there are few fishing boats on the sea these days, and the fishery resources are very rich. Even if you are not experienced, you can catch enough fish to sustain your family. After all, the North Sea fishing grounds are one of the 4 largest fishing grounds in the world in later generations. The fishery resources of this era are extremely rich because they have not been developed much. Moreover, Marin also stimulated the great development of the shipbuilding industry in the North Sea by lending money to the landless farmers in England. Because when Marin lent money to English fishermen and landless farmers, he did not give them money to buy boats themselves, but designated them to buy boats from the shipyards of the North Sea. In this way, the loan for buying fishing boats will not even go to the hands of English fishermen or landless farmers, but will be transferred from left hand to right hand, and directly sent from the loan bank to the North Sea shipyard under Marin's name. In other words, Marin's so-called loan to buy fishing boats is actually a disguised promotion of the ships produced by his own shipyard, just like buying a car in installments in later generations. In this way, English fishermen and landless farmers have a new livelihood, and Marin has sold the fishing boats at a high price through means similar to mortgages and car loans, which can be said to be a happy ending. The wood used by the shipyards in the North Sea to manufacture fishing boats is imported from the southern forests of Norway and the southern forests of Sweden, which belong to Denmark. Because Denmark lost its sovereignty over Sweden and lost the right to maritime trade, Marin decided to give some compensation and import wood from Denmark, which was considered to be a little benefit to the Danish royal family. The purpose is naturally not Marin's kindness, but to maintain the balance of power between Denmark and Sweden. After all, Sweden has the existence of the French copper mine, strong financial resources, and its national strength is growing day by day. If Denmark relied purely on farming, it would definitely be suppressed or even annexed by Sweden in the future. Marin had no interest in Northern Europe, and he did not want Denmark or Sweden to be too strong and suppress its opponents. Therefore, in order to find a balance, he deliberately imported oak from southern Norway and southern Sweden under Danish control from Denmark to make fishing boats. Then, he sold them to poor fishermen in China and England, as well as landless farmers in England in installments. After this operation, almost all 3 parties benefited. Marin benefited the most. After all, the total price of the installment payment was much higher than the actual price of the goods. Marin imitated the lending rules of later generations, but relaxed the repayment to once a year. Moreover, there was no down payment. As a result, it was calculated that it was 50% more than buying a boat in full at one time. Invisibly, Marin made 50% more profit from the total price than others by selling boats. Moreover, early repayment is not allowed. If you repay in advance, you still have to pay so much. Although it is a bit black-hearted to do this, to be honest, Marin Lincoln sold boats to those fishermen or landless farmers without a down payment loan, which has given them a chance to turn over. Such an opportunity is also difficult to find in later generations. Because this is completely venture capital. In later China, ordinary people who want to start a business either have to borrow money from relatives or can only borrow usury. And through the method of unsecured installments, Marin has also supported many new fishermen in England. And these fishermen will become the source of recruitment for the Royal Navy after Marin enters England in the future. Marin even had an agreement with those English fishermen or landless farmers who borrowed money to buy boats if their ships unfortunately sank, or if the fishing failed to recover the cost and could not pay back the money, Marin would not pursue the debt. However, the family that is required to pay back the money must send a strong man to serve Marin's warship for 20 years. During the service, the salary will be halved until the debt is paid off. Therefore, Marin didn't care whether they could repay the loan or not. If they could repay, he would make a lot of money. If they couldn't repay, he could still get a sailor who would work hard for him. Generally speaking, most fishing boats could break even or even make a profit. Therefore, Marin would not lose money. Moreover, those sailors who were forced to join the Royal Navy after owing money were not qualified to be picky. At that time, some sea areas with harsh climates would be where they would serve. Chapter 1806, French Landless Peasants. In Marin's view, those old fishermen who took out loans to buy boats basically would not lose money. But it is hard to say for those landless farmers who took out loans to buy boats. Although Marin will provide them with training services, they can learn fishing skills, but it is difficult for them to master the ability to find fishing areas. This skill is often the experience of old fishermen for decades. Therefore, many landless farmers who took out loans to buy boats actually go bankrupt easily in the end. Then, the family has to send a strong man to serve in Marin's Royal Navy in order to repay the debt. Then, they will be sent to places with harsh climates such as tropical rainforests for many years. Some people may ask why make it so complicated. Can't we directly recruit landless farmers to join the Navy? Yes, it can, but it is a bit troublesome. First of all, they may not be willing to join the Royal Navy. Moreover, since they are recruited, they cannot be assigned to serve in areas with harsh climates at will. Just like Marin arranged for young Frisian fishermen in his country to serve in tropical areas, they often had to pay much higher salaries than other areas. Otherwise, no one would go. This is similar to serving as a soldier in border areas such as Tibet and Xinjiang in later generations. If you don't give high benefits, no one will go. Even if they were forced to go, they would not accept it. If a war really breaks out, morale will be low and it will be easy to lose. Therefore, Marin would rather set a trap and let some people who have no talent for fishing owe money, and then send them to areas with harsh climates as sailors. People who owe debts dare not have any opinions. This era is not the era of the one who owes money is the boss in later generations, because the law does not protect people, especially those who owe debts. Therefore, sailors who owe money can only honestly go to areas with harsh climates to serve as soldiers and use half of their salary to repay their debts. In addition, when they first took out loans to buy boats to go fishing, they also exercised their ability to survive at sea. Among them, the ability to adapt to staying at sea for a long time is also one of them. A landman who has never been at sea at all, rashly goes on a ship as a sailor and goes to sea for several months, may be depressed and crazy in the middle of the sea. However, those fishermen who have fished at sea for several years have no such worries at all and are very adaptable. In particular, when they go fishing for survival, they are very motivated and can adapt to long-term life at sea the fastest. Even if those landless farmers who have no talent for finding fishing spots eventually go bankrupt, it will take at least 1 or 2 years. By then, after a long period of fishing at sea, they have long adapted to staying at sea for a long time. Moreover, they are no strangers to the operation of wooden boats. Such people do not need an adaptation period to join the Navy, and they can be directly taught the skills of naval warfare. As for the adaptation to the sea and the operation of sailboats, they have laid a very solid foundation when they were fishing. At present, Marin has clearly positioned the English and Germans. The Germans are mainly responsible for farming and land warfare, except the Frisians, while the Frisians among the English and Germans are mainly responsible for fishing, trade and naval warfare. The two major ethnic groups have a clear division of labor and will jointly form the most solid foundation of the future empire. Even the landless farmers in England, Marin intends to train them into sailors and fishermen. On the German side, only the Frisians with a fishing tradition are an exception. Others are mainly mixed on land. Of course, the Dutch are also the source of sailors currently designated by Marin. The Dutch have a tradition of fishing, and now Prince Philip is enclosing land under the instigation of Marin. In the future, many Dutch will definitely lose their land. At that time, Marin also plans to use the same trick to deal with them. First, provide unsecured loans for them to buy fishing boats. If they succeed, they will make money for Marin. If they fail, they will sell themselves to Marin as sailors in a hard place for 20 years. In fact, the Dutch people now speak Dutch, which is still very close to German, and is obviously different from German in later generations. In this era, the Netherlands still belonged to the Holy Roman Empire, which was equivalent to a vassal of the German region. The Dutch are also a branch of the Germanic people, so the Dutch language can communicate with German in this era. Of course, this is about the Netherlands, not the Netherlands. If the entire Netherlands region is included, the later Belgium region in the south is greatly influenced by France, and the local language is somewhat close to French, which is a bit different from German. The real difference between Dutch and German began to appear when the 7 northern provinces of the Netherlands became independent from Spain. Many residents of the southern Netherlands, Belgium, moved to the 7 northern provinces because they did not like being ruled by Spain, which had a great influence on the Dutch language in later generations. Then, the Dutch language became less and less like German. In later generations, it was difficult for Dutch and German to communicate. But in this era, people in most parts of the Netherlands, except for those in the border areas with France, can communicate smoothly with Low German. Therefore, there will be no problem for Marin to accept the Dutch. Because the Netherlands does not have independent thoughts and national consciousness now, it is only a part of the Holy Roman Empire. In addition, the Habsburg family that ruled the Netherlands has always been on good terms with Marin, which has led to the Dutch people always being close to the North Sea Kingdom and having a good impression of Marin. Even the Dutch are more friendly to Marin than those in the southern German principalities. Because some princely states in southern Germany deliberately discredited Marin in propaganda, which made many southern Germans have a bad impression of Marin. On the contrary, the Dutch, under the influence of the Habsburg family, have a good impression of Marin. However, this group of people at the moment gave Marin a headache. Who are they? French. Yes, since the autumn harvest last year, Marin colluded with the nobles in northeastern France to use the method of usury plus steaming the seeds lent to farmers. As expected, most farmers did not harvest enough food to repay their debts during the autumn harvest, and then had to sell the land to the local nobles who lent them usury. These nobles swallowed up a lot of land and wanted to turn local farmers into their serfs again. However, through this usury incident, the local farmers have become afraid of these black-hearted local nobles and dare not trust them anymore. Therefore, some French farmers who lost their land chose to leave their hometown and make a living elsewhere. At this time, the spies who had been lurking for a long time under Marin appeared in front of the French farmers who wanted to leave their hometown. Come with us, swear in the name of God, as long as you are willing to become our master's serfs, you will have bread every meal in the future, and you will also be given clothes. Moreover, we can swear that the masters will never force you to do things you don't want to do. At that time, as long as you farm well, your family will be able to live well. Marin's spies swore in front of the farmers in northeastern France who had lost their land and recruited them. In order to win the trust of those French farmers who planned to leave their hometown, the spies were even willing to swear in the name of God, and even swore on the Bible. In Europe at this time, no one dared to lie in the name of God and the Bible. So many French farmers chose to believe them. Moreover, these spies did not lie. If you really become Marin's serfs, your life will definitely be first class among European farmers. However, the problem facing Marin right now is how to bring a large number of French farmers back to the North Sea Kingdom. You know, it is easy to recruit these French farmers whose land has been annexed, but if there are too many of them, it will have a huge impact if you want to bring them back to the North Sea Kingdom. Because the total number of them is already tens of thousands. The French are not fools. If they take away hundreds or thousands of people in batches, it will not attract attention. However, the migration of tens of thousands of people can be noticed by anyone who is not a fool. Therefore, what Marin needs to solve now is how to get these tens of thousands of French farmers back to their country without angering the French. Moreover, these tens of thousands of people are only the first batch. Because this time, it is estimated that there are 200,000 to 300,000 French landless farmers who have left their homes. If more are recruited, it is estimated that there will be more people. But this first batch of tens of thousands of people is enough to give Marin a headache. If he recruits more, it is estimated that it will anger the French. Chapter 1807, Marching Towards Paris. How to get along with France has always been a big problem for the North Sea. If it is against France alone, with the current strength of the North Sea, it dare not say that it will win, but it is possible to guarantee that it will not lose. But the problem is that the North Sea has many enemies in Germany. If it provokes France, it is easy to be surrounded and attacked. Therefore, for safety, Marin had to compromise with France on the surface. Originally, Marin had designed a script to let France and Spain fight to the death in Italy. Unfortunately, a smallpox caused the two countries to stop fighting. Now, the main force of France is entrenched in Paris, not far from the North Sea. At this time, if tens of thousands of immigrants are rashly taken away from France, it will definitely touch the nerves of the French and cause unnecessary trouble. Therefore, Marin is also very troubled by this. But if he gives up these tens of thousands of French landless farmers, Marin is very unwilling. After all, there are tens of thousands of people who can cultivate hundreds of thousands of acres of land. In order to solve this problem, Marin had to gather his men together to discuss how to solve this problem. During the discussion, everyone spoke enthusiastically. Among them, Schwartz even suggested that we learn from the practice in the Duchy of Württemberg and directly send spies to incite the French peasants who lost their land to launch a peasant uprising, and then create more refugees. Finally, Marin sent people to France to buy prisoners of war. But Kohler objected. Schwartz, listen to me, my intelligence personnel reported that the French already know what happened in Württemberg. It is said that some German princes told the French envoys. In other words, the French understand our routine. If we still use this routine to deal with France, the French are likely to find out. As long as we send people to buy prisoners of war, the other party will easily guess that we have done something. Think about it, what will be the consequences at that time? Schwartz was shocked. What? Those damn princes are actually hooking up with France? Isn't this selling out the country? Schwartz never thought that the German princes were so close to France. Marin didn't say anything, but he was very clear about this. You know, more than 3 years later in history, after the emperor's death, many German princes even planned to nominate King Francis I of France as the Holy Roman Emperor. If it weren't for the faction of Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, who took the lead in supporting Charles V, it is estimated that Francis I might really become the Holy Roman Emperor. The representatives of the pro-French faction, headed by Duke Anthony of Lorraine, basically regarded the Habsburg family as an enemy, but regarded France as an ally. It is precisely because of this memory that Marin knew the strength of the pro-French forces in Germany, so he was afraid to turn against France easily. So, what should we do? Schwartz said with some distress. In fact, if these tens of thousands of French landless farmers are brought back, all the people present will be beneficiaries. Because, all the people present are the top landlords in the North Sea. Although their arable land in the North Sea is restricted, Marin does not restrict them from obtaining land in the American colonies. Moreover, Marin's greed was not bad. He took at most 2/3 of the tens of thousands of people he brought back, and the remaining 1/3 was divided among the big guys present, and only a small part would be left to the people below. Therefore, this was also a matter closely related to the interests of the people present. At this time, Machiavelli, who was usually very low-key, suddenly said, "Your Majesty, masters, I think the French court is definitely unwilling to see the existence of these hundreds of thousands of landless peasants in France. Right now, if we rashly recruit tens of thousands of people, it will definitely anger France. But what if we let these landless peasants make trouble as vagrants first?" Make trouble? What do you mean? Let them launch a peasant uprising? Isn't this similar to Schwartz's routine? Marin asked. Machiavelli shook his head and said, "No, Your Majesty, when I say, make a fuss, I don't mean to start an uprising, I really mean to make a fuss. Perhaps, the Germans don't have this tradition and like to pick up weapons and do it. But in our Italian region, when the common people have something to do, they still prefer to protest and demonstrate rather than start a war." Marin suddenly realized. In this era when wars break out at every turn, he has forgotten the most common rallies and riots in Europe in later generations. Before crossing, after the French President Ma, who married a female teacher 24 years older than him, came to power, France had been making a fuss about the yellow vests. For this matter, the young Ma brother was also very anxious. What Schwartz did in Württemberg before, naturally, could not be applied to France. Because inciting the other party's national rebellion, this is a great feud that will never end. Once discovered, the two sides will immediately turn their faces completely. But if you incite the French landless peasants to go to Paris to petition, this is not considered a rebellion, there is no precedent, and it is not easy to be discovered by the French. But if 200,000 or 300,000 refugees gathered in Paris, the impact would be no less than that of the yellow vests in later generations. In fact, it would be more terrible than the yellow vests. Because, at that time, Paris, as the largest city in Europe, had a population of more than 120,000, in 1500, the largest city in Europe was Naples, with 150,000 people, and Paris ranked second, but later because of the war, a large number of people in Naples fled, and Paris naturally became the largest city. Unexpected, right? If there were not so many people, France would not fight for the Kingdom of Naples. Because the total population of the Kingdom of Naples exceeded 2 million. If 200,000 or 300,000 landless farmers all went to Paris to petition, François I would not just be in a big headache. Because the number of petitioners has far exceeded the population of Paris. You know, when the yellow vests broke out in later generations, the population of Paris was 2.24 million, and more than 200,000 yellow vests made France anxious and almost collapsed. Now, more refugees than the population of Paris are pouring into Paris. Even if they don't cause trouble, they can scare the French court to death. Thinking of this, Marin was very happy and decided to let those unlucky French landless peasants learn from their backs and hold a rally to scare the Paris court. Then, when the French government and the opposition feel that it is difficult, they will stand up and express their willingness to accept those refugees. In this way, not only will they not offend France to death, but they can also gain the favor of France. No, if I jump out to accept these people, it may arouse the suspicion of the French. Marin thought about it and still felt that it was inappropriate. According to the principle of whoever is the biggest beneficiary is the most suspicious, in later generations, Marin is easily suspected. If he takes the initiative to jump out to take over, smart people will suspect that he did it. How can I prevent the French from suspecting? After the meeting, Saul, who had not spoken just now, did not leave. After hesitating for a while, he suggested to Marin, how about, after those French peasants make trouble and make the French court anxious, let John Lafitte, the French minister, take the initiative to sell the refugees to us. After saying this, Saul also looked a little unconfident. After pondering for a while, Marin clapped his hands and cheered, yes, if they propose it themselves, it will not be easy to be exposed. But Marin rejected this idea again, because John Lafitte might be exposed in the future, and then he would be exposed. However, this idea is really good. After thinking about it for a day, Marin finally thought of a better solution, let John Lafitte, the French minister, secretly influence other French ministers to make this suggestion. In this way, it will be even more unnoticed. But first, we need to send people to organize those French landless peasants who have lost their land and are planning to wander around, and let them go to Paris to petition together, make some noise, and scare the French court. Chapter 1808, Magellan arrives. Marin has no shortage of candidates to organize refugees, because he has planted a large number of spies in the disaster areas in northeastern and eastern France since last year. Moreover, they are all spies who can speak fluent French. These people have taken root in the local area and have found ways to obtain legal and reasonable identities. Moreover, they have all received professional spy training. They all have the basic ability to instigate people to make trouble. Therefore, Marin directly asked Kohler to arrange those spies to select the most prestigious people among the hundreds of thousands of French refugees. Then, fool them and instruct them to organize the refugees and march to Paris together. After arriving in Paris, they don't need to do anything, just gather outside the city of Paris, and then send representatives to ask the French court for relief. This mild approach seems not as difficult as rebellion, but in fact, it is more difficult to solve. If it were in the ancient Chinese dynasty, this approach would undoubtedly help the court. Because the court has the ability to mobilize food from other places to provide disaster relief. After surviving the famine, these disaster victims are all good labor. But in Europe at this time, doing this is more terrible than directly launching a rebellion. Because the food needed for the relief of hundreds of thousands of people is something the French royal family can hardly afford. If they rebelled directly, it would be easier to deal with it. They could just send knights to chop them down. But this large-scale request for help left the French court with no reason to act, and they could only take out food for disaster relief. Unfortunately, food was so expensive in Europe at that time. The daily food consumption of 200,000 or 300,000 disaster victims was a terrifying astronomical figure. If they gathered around Paris for a long time, they would definitely eat the French royal family out of money. No matter how much food was withheld or how much porridge was provided to hundreds of thousands of disaster victims, the daily food consumption would be equivalent to the daily consumption of tens of thousands of troops. Over time, with the financial resources of the French royal family, how could they afford it? Moreover, even if there were no riots, hundreds of thousands of disaster victims surrounded Paris, which was very embarrassing for France. After all, as the largest country in Europe, hundreds of thousands of disaster victims gathered around the capital, which absolutely made the Kingdom of France lose face. If you encounter an old king like Louis XII who has been on the throne for many years, you may be able to shamelessly expel the refugees. Even a ruthless person like Henry VIII could directly massacre the refugees. But that is not possible in France right now, because Francis I has only been on the throne for more than half a year and has not yet secured his throne. Moreover, unlike the general Orthodox heirs, Francis I became king by becoming a son-in-law, not an Orthodox heir. Therefore, Francis I did not have the confidence to order the expulsion or even the massacre of refugees. He could only solve the matter with relatively gentle means as much as possible. Otherwise, he would be questioned by his subjects whether he was capable of being the king. In other words, Francis I, the son-in-law king who was not the biological son of the former king, needed to care about his reputation. Otherwise, the throne would be unstable. In this way, this gentle method made Francis I uncomfortable. Sending troops to expel them is not an option, and slaughtering them is even worse. After all the twists and turns, it is most appropriate to give them to Marin. You go and arrange for spies to encourage those refugees to go to Paris to ask the royal family for help. Remember, don't let the French nobles know that they are going to Paris. Otherwise, they will mistakenly think that these refugees are going to complain, and they may send people to intercept and slaughter the refugees halfway. Therefore, confidentiality is very important. Kohler nodded and wrote down all of Marin's requirements. Then, Marin continued to instruct, in addition, send someone to secretly contact John Lafitte and ask him to find a good candidate and deliberately make friends. Finally, let the selected person make suggestions to François I, suggesting that the victims be sold to me. Remember, this matter must be concealed, and it cannot be said openly. You must use indirect means to inspire the selected person to carry out this matter. Yes, I understand. After Kohler recorded Marin's requirements, he arranged for someone to convey the order. As soon as Kohler left, the deputy commander in charge of the palace security, Cage, Khan was the commander, knocked on the door and entered the office, reporting, "Your Majesty, there is a Portuguese captain named Magellan outside the palace, who wants to see you and wants you to support him in a sea expedition. In addition, he asked me to send you this." Then, Cage took out a very simple globe with an inaccurate map. Globe. Marin's eyes suddenly shrank, as if he remembered something. Then, he asked, "What do you think the guy's name is?" Cage thought for a while and said, "It seems to be Ferdinand Magellan. You know, Portuguese names are long and ugly, wouldn't it be better to keep it simple?" After saying that, Cage shrugged helplessly. It turned out to be him. Marin suddenly realized. "I almost forgot about this great god." Marin patted his head. In the age of exploration, there are 4 people who have to be mentioned. One is Columbus, the pioneer of the age of exploration, the second is Gama, the big man who discovered the Indian route, and Amerigo, although a little watery, because America is named after him, it is the most famous, and the remaining 4th big man is Magellan. Because this guy is the first strong man to prove that the earth is round. However, because this guy emerged too late, Marin almost forgot about such a person. It seems that this guy's circumnavigation of the world was around 1520. And now it is only 1515, this Magellan should have begun to fool the monarchs of various countries to fund his circumnavigation. Marin carefully recalled the history and found that Magellan seemed to have returned to his hometown of Portugal at the age of 33, 1513, and began to fool the Portuguese king Manuel I, intending to let Manuel I support his circumnavigation of the world. However, Manuel I ignored him. Because the Portuguese had already mastered the spice trade route to India, there was no need to make any more trouble. Moreover, the so-called India discovered by Columbus was simply a wild continent and worthless. How could the Indian spice trade make money? Therefore, Manuel I was unwilling to waste this money and supported Magellan's circumnavigation. In desperation, around 1517, Magellan ran to Seville, Spain, and began to fool the Spaniards. The commander of the Spanish garrison in Seville admired Magellan very much and married his daughter to Magellan. Later, Magellan was recommended to Charles V, relying on a globe full of errors made purely by conjecture. Magellan finally fooled Charles V and received funding from Charles V. Then, in 1519, he began his circumnavigation. Charles V did not lose money. In the end, Magellan discovered the Philippines during this voyage, which gave Spain a colony in the Far East and laid the foundation for future trade between Manila and the Ming dynasty. However, Magellan, the unlucky guy, died while participating in a local tribal conflict in the Philippines, and was unable to enjoy the honor of being the first to complete a circumnavigation of the world. Of course, that was the original history. At this time, because of Marin's intrusion, the two great navigators Columbus and Amerigo were both under Marin's command. Magellan had not yet had time to go to Spain to deceive the King of Portugal, but after failing to deceive the King of Portugal, he ran to the North Sea Kingdom first. It seems that Magellan thought that Marin attached great importance to the great voyage, so he did not go to Spain, but came to the North Sea Kingdom to deceive Marin first. Chapter 1809, Big Brother Meets Big Brother. Magellan has a rich resume. He was born into a declining knight family in Porto, northern Portugal. When he was 10 years old, his father found a way to send him to the royal palace to serve. Later, he also served as a page to the Queen of Portugal. But unfortunately, in Europe, this kind of identity of a person around the Queen is useless. Because ancient Europe paid more attention to bloodline. Because of his low origin, Magellan did not rise to prominence. It can only be said that he got a little more opportunities than others. Later, Magellan was incorporated into the Portuguese National Navigation Office, and later accompanied Almeida, the first governor of India of Portugal, on an expedition to India. Later, he also participated in the Battle of Joe. However, it was as a low-level grassroots officer. Later, when he returned to his country, because of a shipwreck, Magellan handled things properly, and was promoted to captain. In other words, before that, Magellan didn't even get a position like captain, he was just an inconspicuous little man. It is precisely because of this that Magellan was unwilling to find opportunities to stand out. He asked Manuel I to lead a team to sail around the world, in fact, just to gain fame. Of course, he himself has a certain level of sailing and an adventurous spirit. Today, Magellan is 35 years old, and he has not achieved anything so far. He has not even been awarded a title. He still has the title of noble son and has not yet been awarded a noble title. Moreover, in this time and space, Magellan is even worse than in the original history. In the original history, when Magellan returned from India at the age of 30, the ship ran aground and all the people on the ship were trapped on a deserted island. Magellan stood up to command everyone to overcome the difficulties and was later promoted to captain because he remained calm in the face of danger. Because of Marin's intervention, the history of this time and space has changed a lot. The original Joe naval battle became the Calicut naval battle. Moreover, it was changed from Almeida's command to the Spanish commander da Costa's command. Therefore, Magellan's contribution in this time and space is much smaller than that in the original history. When he returned to his country, he did not encounter the reef accident that allowed him to go further, and in the end he could not even become the captain. When he left the Portuguese navy, he was only a second mate, which was extremely miserable. Fortunately, as a noble son, he was sent to the palace as a page since he was a child. Magellan had a wide range of knowledge. He also read a lot of books while serving in the palace and knew a lot of navigation knowledge. In order to get ahead, Magellan suddenly thought since Columbus and Amerigo could get ahead, why can't I learn from them and make a great voyage? Forget about exploring the Indian route, but I can make a round-the-world voyage. Magellan and his friends are supporters of the Earth is spherical theory and hope to verify this. Moreover, if he can be the first to verify this theory, it will bring him great prestige. Then, fame, title, all will be there. Then, he sold the plan to Manuel I. Unfortunately, Manuel I had already obtained the Indian route and didn't want to make trouble and find other routes. Because this route is enough for Portugal to eat. Therefore, King Manuel I of Portugal had no interest in supporting Magellan's expedition. Originally, Magellan planned to try his luck in Spain. However, he suddenly remembered that the two most famous navigators in Europe, Columbus and Amerigo, seemed to be in the North Sea Kingdom. The Grand Duke of the North Sea, Marin, seemed to attach great importance to the great voyage. Maybe, he could fool him. Moreover, Marin happened to be promoted to the King of America recently, and he must be in a good mood. Maybe, while he was in a good mood, he could fool him into investing. Then, Magellan changed his plan to go to Seville, Spain, and went to the North Sea Kingdom to try his luck first. He didn't know that his decision made him lose a marriage and the opportunity to win the first honor of circumnavigation. Marin naturally would not support Magellan to do any circumnavigation, because there was no need. You know, Amerigo had already set out from Panama, crossed the Pacific Ocean, and arrived at Taiwan Island. In other words, Magellan's expedition was meaningless. However, Marin didn't want to let Magellan go. Because if Magellan left the North Sea Kingdom, he would definitely go to Spain to seek sponsorship. If he got sponsorship from Spain and then completed the circumnavigation, apart from anything else, the vastness of the American land would definitely be exposed to the Europeans. After all, Marin remembered that Magellan's route was along Brazil and Argentina, all the way to the Strait of Magellan, before turning west and heading to the Pacific Ocean. At that time, the situation along the coast of Brazil was needless to say, and the climate and terrain on the Argentine side were exposed at once. If the Spaniards learned about the vastness of South America and the relatively mild climate in Argentina, compared to Brazil, they would definitely be tempted. Especially the La Plata River estuary, which is definitely a very suitable area for development. So, after thinking about it, Marin felt that Magellan must not be allowed to go to the Spaniards. Otherwise, the situation in America would definitely be exposed. For a moment, Marin had a murderous intention and decided to just kill Magellan. However, it seems a pity to kill a historical celebrity like Magellan. So, Marin decided to test Magellan's attitude first. He decided to use generous treatment to win over Magellan first. If the other party accepts the recruitment, then let it go. After all, he also needs a lot of navigation talents. However, if the other party insists on doing a round-the-world voyage, don't blame yourself for being ruthless. In the original history, Magellan caused panic among King Manuel I of Portugal after he represented Spain in a round-the-world voyage. Even Manuel I planned to send someone to assassinate Magellan to eliminate future troubles, but he just didn't succeed. Thinking of Manuel I's original historical approach, Marin suddenly threw away the burden in his heart. You see, the Portuguese monarchs all do this, and I am not an exception, right? With a complicated mood, Marin, the big boss of the time traveler, summoned Magellan, the original historical navigation boss. Unlike the boss that Marin imagined, Magellan was very humble when he saw Marin, and he looked like he was trying to please him. This attitude made Marin very useful, and he was a little flattered. Then, he remembered that he was the boss now, and Magellan was still a lackey. When Magellan held up the globe and promoted his spherical Earth theory to Marin, and asked him to lead a team to explore the global route, Marin frowned. Magellan's heart clicked and thought, won't it fail again? He thought Marin looked down on his plan, but he didn't know that Marin was thinking about how to stop his great idea. At this moment, Marin was organizing his words and thinking about how to stop Magellan from sailing around the world. At the same time, he recruited the other party. Chapter 1810, Scare Magellan. Marin hesitated for a long time because he didn't know how to convince Magellan to give up this idea. After all, this is a good thing that can make the world famous. Without sufficient reasons, it is difficult for the other party to give up. Finally, Marin thought about it and felt that since Magellan felt that the circumnavigation could earn the greatest fame, it was because of a first. If there was no first, would the other party give up the idea? So, Marin considered the tone and said, Mr. Magellan, it's not that I don't want to help you. It's that someone has already completed the circumnavigation. It's just that it hasn't been published. Then, a big pot was put on the legendary Einstein. What? Someone has completed the circumnavigation. Who is it? Why is there no news? It shouldn't be. Magellan couldn't understand. In his opinion, if someone completed the circumnavigation, he should be eager to announce the result to achieve his own reputation. Marin, who decided to blame Einstein, said calmly, not everyone is keen on fame and fortune, Mr. Magellan. As for which senior, I might as well tell you, it is my teacher Einstein. It is Saint Einstein. Magellan was surprised, and then suddenly realized. Because now all of Europe knows that Einstein is a deceased ascetic monk, a traveler, who is said to have traveled to many places in the world. It seems reasonable for such a person to complete a round-the-world voyage. As for the unpublished results, he is an ascetic monk who doesn't care about fame and fortune at all. Marin nodded, then pretended to remember the martyrs and explained, yes, he used his savings of several decades, including donations from many believers during his travels, to buy a large ship and took dozens of followers on a voyage around the world. However, the voyage around the world was too dangerous. In that voyage, only the teacher survived, and the dozens of followers he brought with him either died in a terrible storm or died of scurvy on the ship. In fact, Marin was just scaring Magellan. The voyage around the world was very dangerous, don't go. Magellan hesitated. Although he was 35 years old, he had not yet married, and his career had not improved. He didn't want to die so early. However, he was a little unwilling. So he asked, "Then, Your Majesty, I want to know what the situation is west of the savage continent." After speaking, he looked at Marin with hope. Marin thought for a moment and said, "It's an endless sea." The name of the sea between the continents of Azeroth suddenly popped up in Marin's mind. Since the name of Warcraft was used, Marin simply continued to use it. It is said that to the west of the savage continent, there is a very wide endless ocean, so it is called the Endless Sea. At the same time, because of the fierce storm, it is also called the Storm Sea. The teacher's records say that the vast ocean is very wide, with a big whirlpool in the middle, with strong winds and high waves, and there seems to be a bottomless pit in the middle of the sea, swallowing hundreds of millions of barrels of seawater every day, as if it leads to the hell at the center of the earth. On that voyage, half of the teacher's followers were swept into the sea when passing through the bottomless pit of the big whirlpool and disappeared in the bottomless pit. The teacher and his followers were also lucky, and the ship was blocked by a reef, so the whole ship was swallowed into the bottomless pit of the big whirlpool. Later, when the wind was calm, they escaped in a panic. Big whirlpool. Bottomless pit. What the hell is this? Magellan's head was full of confusion. Marin became interested, took out a pencil, and based on the map of Yamaguchi Mountain in his previous life, he casually drew a schematic diagram of the Endless Sea and the Great Whirlpool on a piece of white paper. Then, he told Magellan, "In short, sailing in the Endless Sea is very dangerous. If it weren't for God's blessing, my teacher couldn't even come back." Magellan swallowed, thought about it, and asked hesitantly, "So, how wide is this Endless Sea?" Marin thought about it. It seems that the widest Pacific Ocean is 19,000 kilometers, and the widest Atlantic Ocean is 2,800 kilometers. Well, in this case, it's about 6 or 7 times the width of the Atlantic Ocean. Magellan suddenly collapsed. Damn, it takes more than 2 months to cross the Atlantic Ocean, so the Pacific Ocean, which is 6 or 7 times wider than the Atlantic Ocean, won't it take more than a year to sail? As if he had seen Magellan's thoughts, Marin continued to introduce, Taiping, no, there is no continent in the middle of the Endless Sea, only a few small islands. Moreover, it should be pointed out that these islands may be coral reefs, and there is no fresh water on them. In other words, sailing on the Endless Sea, it is not only important to avoid terrible whirlpools and storms, but also to prevent the crew from dying of thirst due to lack of fresh water. In addition, the teacher once said that if the crew stays on the sea for several months in a row, it is very easy to get scurvy. Therefore, it is best to go ashore frequently and eat fresh food. Marin did not explain any knowledge of vitamin C, because Magellan was not yet one of them, so there was no need to tell him. In addition, scurvy and the like, compared to Magellan, he also understood. Because the Portuguese encountered many such cases when sailing in India. Even the younger brother of the Gama, who first discovered India, died of scurvy. Magellan nodded solemnly and said, "I understand. We often encounter this problem when sailing to India." Marin smiled and said, "Maybe the distance of sailing to India is not as short as crossing the Endless Sea, but you must understand that most of the time when sailing to India, you will sail close to the African continent. Only after arriving at Mombasa or Malindi on the east coast of Africa will you cross the Arabian Sea and head to India. However, this time is only about 1 month, less than 1 month with a favorable wind. Therefore, the fleet has plenty of opportunities to dock to replenish supplies, get some fresh food and water, and prevent scurvy. But if you cross the Endless Sea, there is no land along the way to replenish fresh water and food. Not to mention that it is easy to die of thirst, and the chance of scurvy is very high. You are a sailing professional, you must understand what I mean." Magellan nodded solemnly, then asked doubtfully, "So, respected Saint Einstein, how did you solve the fresh water crisis when crossing the Endless Sea?" According to Marin, the people on Einstein's ship should not be able to persist in crossing the Endless Sea. Because there is not enough fresh water. Marin was stunned and realized the loopholes in his words. So, he told his brain to work and finally thought of a reasonable explanation. "It's like this, my teacher is lucky and encountered rainy weather many times along the way. He solved the fresh water crisis by collecting rainwater. That's also good luck. If you are unlucky and encounter sunny days in a row, the teacher himself may not be able to persist. It is said that there was a period of continuous sunny days without rain, and everyone did not have enough fresh water to drink. When they were most thirsty, the sailors relied on drinking their own urine to solve the thirst problem." Marin deliberately exaggerated. Magellan was shocked. What? Drinking urine? So scary. So scary. Chapter 18:11 Let's go to Egypt. In fact, although what Marin said was a bit exaggerated, it did exist. Generally, the shelf life of fresh water is only about 1 week. If it exceeds 1 week, the fresh water will become smelly. Because a lot of bacteria have grown in it, it can no longer be drunk. Later, people brought rum, a strong liquor, and drank it with some spoiled fresh water. Because rum is a strong liquor and has a certain bactericidal effect, it is not enough to drink it. But sometimes, there will be problems, and many sailors died. During the voyage, collecting rainwater is indeed an important means of replenishing fresh water. But if you are unlucky and encounter sunny weather for a long time, and it is really in the middle of the sea, drinking urine is really a helpless choice. However, this problem does not exist in the North Sea Kingdom. Because Marin had long thought of a way to obtain canned water that can be preserved for a long time by steaming cans, which perfectly solved this problem. Moreover, when encountering sunny weather for a long time, Marin has a killer weapon: solar cooker. As long as the seawater is boiled in a solar cooker, and then through a simple circulation condensation device, the water vapor after the seawater is boiled can be condensed into clean distilled water for drinking. Of course, Marin would not tell Magellan these, because he is not one of his own yet. However, it seems that it is not difficult to turn Magellan into one of his own. From the original history, Magellan decisively abandoned Portugal and turned to the arms of Spain. It can be concluded that this guy is not patriotic, but only loves the future. So, Marin began to win over. Mr. Magellan, our North Sea country is in short supply of navigation talents, and we really need navigation professionals like you to join. Are you willing to come to the North Sea country to help me? Marin showed a kind smile and a sincere tone. In this era, it is simply very polite. Magellan hesitated for a moment, and seemed to be reluctant to give up the ideal of circumnavigation. However, he then thought, I want to sail around the world, isn't it for fame and fortune? Well, let's see the other party's sincerity first. To be honest, in the age of discovery, every one of those navigators was noble. They are either keen on fame and fortune, or they are part of the pirates. In short, there are no good people. Marin also guessed the other party's thoughts. After thinking for a while, he said, we have a special trade route with Egypt in the North Sea. Recently, the commander of this route, the hereditary Knight Morris, is unwell and plans to retire in a few years. How about this? I will first appoint you as the captain of one of the galleys to adapt to the Egyptian route first. After running a few times and getting familiar with it, I will slowly arrange for you to serve as the deputy of the great Knight Morris, and gradually take over the affairs of the entire Egyptian route in a few years and become the general manager of this route. The price offered by Marin is not low. The Egyptian route is very important to the North Sea. Because most of the soda needed for the glass industry of the North Sea and the sodium sulfate needed for papermaking are imported from Egypt. The glass industry is still okay. If the source of sodium sulfate is cut off, the papermaking industry in Canada will soon come to a halt, and the consequences are more serious. Of course, Marin actually has other options at the moment. For example, importing sodium sulfate from the Ming dynasty for chemical pulping for papermaking. But Marin currently needs to support the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt to fight against the expansion of Ottoman Turkey. Therefore, he had to continue to purchase expensive Glauber's salt from Egypt to support Egypt in disguise. At the same time, Marin also deliberately purchased a large number of trained Mamluk slaves from Egypt to allow the Egyptian Mamluk nobles to make profits. At the same time, even camels were imported from Egypt. Frankly speaking, camels are really useless to Marin. Because most of his territory is rich in water resources and there are few arid areas. However, in semi-arid areas such as the Pampas, camels can be used for farming. After all, camels are not small in strength and are faster than cattle. But the problem is that camels cannot adapt to the climate in humid areas and are prone to illness. Therefore, Marin bought camels and was actually worried about how to deal with them. At present, the camels bought by Egypt are mainly used on the Sahara Desert trade route from Layoun to Timbuktu. This is the most contracted place and the place where Egyptian dromedaries can best display their abilities. In addition, Marin also tried to exchange camels with horses from Arabs in North Africa. Arabs in North Africa generally raise horses of Arabian horse descent. Although its bloodline is not as pure as the Arabian horses on the Arabian Peninsula, it is also a very good breed. However, the herders in North Africa are also very cunning. They are unwilling to exchange one for one with Marin, and are only willing to exchange 2 camels for 1 horse. Strictly speaking, Marin is losing money. Because a good horse in North Africa is only slightly more valuable than a camel, but it is far from the point of exchanging 2 camels for 1 horse. After all, horses are also worthless to the nomadic peoples of North Africa. But Marin has no use for camels, and horses are more useful. Therefore, he would rather lose money and exchange the camels he exchanged from Egypt for horses with North Africans in Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia. As for Libya, he did try to exchange horses, but soon gave up. Why? Because Libya is close to Egypt. Previously, Marin asked merchant ships to dock and exchange Egyptian camels for local herders. As a result, these herders turned around and sold the camels to Egyptian merchants. Then, Marin's men saw the camels that had been exchanged before in the Egyptian market. This was obviously a bit of a pitfall for himself, so Marin later stopped people from doing this kind of business in Libya, which is close to Egypt. Moreover, Libya is extremely short of water, and there are not many horses. But even so, Marin bought too many Egyptian camels, and there was still too much to put. In desperation, Marin had to order the camels to be slaughtered and made into camel meat. Marin remembered that camel humps seemed to be a famous dish in later generations. It was really delicious when the imperial chef recruited by the Ming dynasty made it. But the rest of the camel meat smelled a bit strong. Dromedaries live in hot areas all year round, and they smell a bit strong. Although it is not a sheep smell, it is also a bit strange, just like the curry smell on Indians. However, it is not impossible to deal with it. For example, you can learn from the northwestern minorities in later generations and use cumin to remove the smell. Moreover, Egypt is rich in cumin and is the origin of cumin. Therefore, Marin placed orders directly with the locals and imported a large amount of cumin powder. You know, cumin powder is a barbecue artifact, and it is also a deodorizing artifact. Ordinary camel meat, sprinkled with cumin and accompanied by chili powder or pepper, immediately becomes fragrant. Later, Marin simply established a processing base, slaughtered the surplus camels imported from Egypt, and made them into roasted camel meat. Then, put them into oil paper bags, heated them, and sealed them. In this way, delicious roasted camel jerky is made, which can be sold as a flavor food. Or, it can also be used as military rations. And this time, Magellan was sent to Egypt by Marin to be responsible for trade with Egypt, and was specifically responsible for importing Egyptian natural soda, Glauber's salt, slaves, camels, cumin powder and other commodities. The reason for this choice is that Marin wanted to dispel Magellan's idea of going on a great voyage and work for him with peace of mind. Moreover, in order to attract Magellan's interest, Marin also told Magellan about the pyramids and sphinxes in Egypt. In those days, the colonists had not yet entered Egypt, and they didn't know much about Egypt. Therefore, this knowledge was very new to ordinary Europeans, and Magellan also listened with great interest. After listening to Marin's story, Magellan really developed a strong interest in Egypt, an ancient civilization, and even planned to visit the pyramids and the Sphinx. However, before agreeing to Marin's recruitment, Magellan still cautiously asked the answer he wanted to know most: what are the benefits of being the head of the Egypt route? Marin smiled and said to Magellan, if you become a captain, there is a high chance that you will be canonized as a third-level knight, which is an ordinary knight who is not hereditary. If you become a lieutenant of the fleet, there is a high chance that you will be canonized as a second-level knight, which can be hereditary for 3 generations. If you become the person in charge of the route, you will be at least a second-level knight, and there is a high chance that you will be canonized as a first-level hereditary knight like Morris, which is a great knight. If you have any great achievements, you can even be promoted to a baron. Great knight. Baron. Magellan, who was keen on fame and fortune, was jealous. Okay, I'll do it. Chapter 1812, Helping Magellan Find a Wife. In fact, Magellan, like Schwartz, was a descendant of a declining knight family. Schwartz's father lost the opportunity to become a knight, while Magellan lost the opportunity to become a knight in his own generation. Although he participated in the Indian War, he did not make great military achievements. His performance was just mediocre and he had no chance to be conferred a title. Moreover, the most unfortunate thing was that the queen that Magellan served as a page in the palace was not the queen of the current king, but the queen of the former king of Portugal, John II. Of course, the problem was not here. The problem was that John II's son died. The successor Manuel I was not the son of John II, but the enemy of John II. Because John II personally ordered the execution of Manuel I's elder brother, Diogo, the Duke of Saxony. Moreover, after his legitimate son, Crown Prince Alfonso, fell off his horse and died in another hunting trip shortly after his marriage, John II did not choose Manuel I as his heir, but tried to promote the illegitimate son to become the prince. In the end, John II did not succeed. It can be said that until his death, John II and Manuel I were hostile. Therefore, Magellan, who once served as a page to Queen John II, had not only not helped, but also hindered. After all, who would have thought that the new king and the old king were enemies? Therefore, he later had to join the Indian Expeditionary Force to gain military merit. As a result, he did not get any military merit, so he had to return to his country to find opportunities. It can be said that Magellan promoted the great navigation plan so hard, in addition to his adventurous spirit, to a large extent to obtain a noble title. But now, Marin deliberately frightened him and told him the dangers of circumnavigating the world, so that he gave up the idea of risking his life. After all, why should you risk your life if you can win by lying? Isn't this sick? Marin promised in person that there will definitely be a noble title in the future. Even, it may be a hereditary aristocracy, which immediately ignited Magellan's ambition. Afterwards, Marin used another trick, sending Magellan to attend the North Sea Kingdom aristocratic ball and letting him find a wife. Magellan was already 35 years old. Although it was normal for male aristocrats in this era to not be married in their 30s, they could not find a suitable one, not that they did not want to get married. Because Magellan had made a mistake in his previous team, he was disliked by the new king, so he naturally did not get the title, and there was no status to speak of. The possibility of finding a noble wife was very low. Unless a fool took a fancy to him. Obviously, the governor of Seville, Spain was that fool. Marin did not want to let the governor of Seville, Spain intercept him this time. After all, Magellan's route to Egypt might also pass through Seville. If Magellan met that old fool again, and let that old fool give his daughter to Magellan, Magellan might be lured away by Spain. Therefore, Marin could not wait to send Magellan to the North Sea Kingdom aristocratic ball and let him find a wife in the North Sea Kingdom. In this way, he would not be in danger of being lured away by the Spanish fool. After all, the canon law of this era does not allow divorce. In addition, after the North Sea Kingdom annexed the 8 principalities, there are now hundreds of old nobles in the Bremen province, and there are a lot of barons. These old nobles have daughters. Now that they have lost their power, they are eager to return to the officialdom. And marrying with new nobles and marrying with Marin's favorites has become an important means for them to return to the officialdom. Just like the Gust family, where Miss Gust married Albert, is now turning over and becoming one of the few families that are doing well among the old nobles. After all, their daughter married Marin's younger brother. Although marrying a new noble that Marin values is not as effective as marrying Marin's younger brother, it is finally an opportunity to return to the officialdom. Therefore, whenever Marin introduces his young talents to participate in the dances of those old nobles, these people are also very popular. This means that Marin gave them a chance and they must try their best to make creditors. In order to facilitate Magellan's search for a wife, Marin asked the guards who led Magellan to the old aristocratic ball to try to reveal a message when introducing Magellan. His Majesty values this Magellan very much. In this way, everyone understood that marrying someone His Majesty values is a good opportunity to return to officialdom. In this way, the ignorant old boy Magellan was sent to the gathering place of old nobles in Bremen province, where he lived a life of attending aristocratic balls all day long, dancing with noble ladies of different characteristics every day, and dating at the same time. And Marin, after obtaining Magellan's consent, sent people to Porto, Portugal, to pick up Magellan's family to the North Sea Kingdom. In this way, Magellan's connection with Portugal can also be cut off. Marin believes that in history, Magellan could completely abandon Portugal and serve Spain wholeheartedly, and it is very likely that he would abandon Portugal and serve the North Sea Kingdom wholeheartedly. However, Magellan, a Portuguese nobleman, still has the possibility of being won over by Portugal. Therefore, Marin was a little worried, so he ordered Kohler to plant spies around Magellan and supervise him at any time. Once it is found that someone from Portugal is trying to win him over, and Magellan is also tempted, then get rid of him. Of course, that is when Magellan betrays or is about to betray. If someone is content to serve you, there is no need to embarrass them. Moreover, if Magellan marries a North Sea country wife and settles down in the North Sea country in the future, the possibility of betrayal will be even smaller. For Magellan, the newly joined navigation talent, everyone is not repulsive. Even many people are willing to make friends with him. After all, he is someone Marin values. You know, Marin is sincerely busy helping Magellan find a wife, which is a sign of deep winning over. Who is looking for trouble and dares to go against Marin's red man? There really is. This person is Columbus, the first boss in the navigation industry. Columbus is old and no longer sails at sea. At present, he is retired and at home. He either teaches at the navigation school or goes to Las Vegas to talk to a girl. Moreover, this old man does not look for mature girls, but likes to look for girls around 10 years old. In other words, Columbus has completely given up his ambition and is already at ease with his retirement. However, the recent rise of Magellan has made Columbus feel pressured. It's not that Columbus thinks Magellan can suppress him, but he is worried that his son Diego Columbus will be suppressed by Magellan. Diego Columbus is about the same age as Magellan and is now a fleet commander. However, Diego's talent is not high, and he can only be considered mediocre. If there is any genius jumping out, it may affect Diego's future. Amerigo Columbus is not worried, because he is a person of the same era as himself. When Diego grows up, Amerigo will be old. Moreover, Amerigo's children are still young and are not in the same batch as Diego. But Magellan made Columbus nervous when he appeared. Because Columbus remembered something, it seems that the strait at the southernmost tip of South America was named Strait of Magellan by Marin many years ago. What the hell is going on? How could it be such a coincidence? It seems that Magellan is a major rival of his son Diego. So, Columbus ran to Marin to find fault with him with dissatisfaction. He hoped that Marin would give a clear attitude, supporting his son or Magellan. Of course, Columbus definitely hoped it would be the former. Chapter 1813, The First Fleet of the North Sea Nation. Seeing Columbus' unhappy face, Marin laughed. After hearing Columbus's complaint, Marin laughed, "Christopher, you worry too much." "Why?" Columbus was puzzled. Marin stopped laughing and said to Columbus seriously, "Do you know why I trust you and Amerigo so much? Isn't it because we have a high level of navigation?" Columbus said uncertainly. Marin shook his head and replied, "No, because you are Italians." Columbus was stunned and asked, "What does this have to do with Italians? Could it be that your Majesty trusts Italians more?" Columbus was even more confused. Because, although he was an Italian, Columbus himself knew that Italians were not so reliable. Marin shook his head again and said seriously, "Because Italians don't have their own country." Suddenly, the air solidified, and Columbus's face was full of astonishment. At the same time, there was a trace of sadness. Yes, Italians don't have their own country. We Italians are just vassals of Germans and French. Columbus said with sadness. Marin patted Columbus on the shoulder and said, "Although it may sound cruel, I want to tell you that it is precisely because Italians do not have their own country that I can use you with confidence. Because you will not be loyal to me while thinking about your own country." Columbus was a little sad at first, but after a while, he seemed to react. "You mean, Magellan is a Portuguese and has his own country. So, it is difficult to get your full trust." At this moment, Columbus was happy. If Marin could not fully trust Magellan, then his son Diego would have a greater chance. Marin nodded and said seriously, "Well, but don't go out and talk nonsense. If I know that you have leaked the secret, Diego will have no future." Columbus nodded repeatedly, and then he relaxed. After relaxing, he said goodbye to Marin and took a carriage to Las Vegas. At present, in order to facilitate the deployment of troops, Marin has paved a cement road from Aurich to Oldenburg City, and then to the Bremen area. It is also very convenient for Columbus to go to Las Vegas by carriage. As long as the carriage goes all the way to Bailey on the west bank of the Elbe River across Las Vegas, you can take a boat across the river to reach Las Vegas, a den of money. On the way, there is a professional ferry across the Weser River, which is very convenient. However, since the last time he thought of replacing cement roads with cement slabs, Marin has begun to order the promotion of cement slabs throughout the country. Today, the North Sea Kingdom has only 2 cement roads, north-south and east-west, as important routes for troop movement. Mainly, it is to facilitate Aurich's control over the southern and eastern regions. Now, Marin ordered the promotion of cement slabs throughout the North Sea Kingdom. In this way, the transportation of the North Sea Kingdom will become as developed as in later generations. In addition to the lack of technology to realize the cross-river bridge, which can only be replaced by a ferry, in other aspects, the existence of cement slabs will make carriage transportation extremely convenient. After watching Columbus's carriage leave, Marin shook his head. He actually didn't think highly of Columbus's eldest son Diego Columbus. Diego's level is not bad, but his qualifications are average. If there are more talented sailors, Marin doesn't mind promoting them and suppressing Diego Columbus. Moreover, there is more than one sailing family in the entire North Sea Kingdom. For example, although Amerigo got married late, he also had a son. After Amerigo surrendered to Marin, Marin helped introduce a new wife. His original wife died and left no offspring. Therefore, Amerigo's son is relatively young, only 5 years old. In addition, the fleet commander Kidd and others also have offspring in their families. Therefore, it is really hard to say what Diego will be like in the future. After all, the North Sea Kingdom is not just a second generation of sailors. Unless he can prove that he is better than other second generations of sailors. But this possibility is not very high. However, as the number 1 sailor, Marin still has to appease Columbus now, so as not to make him upset. You know, Columbus is the number 1 sailor in the North Sea Kingdom, with countless students. If he and Marin are separated, there will be big problems. But Columbus is old, already 64 years old, and is not far from death. Although he lived 9 years longer than in the original history, and his body was healthier than in history. But time is unforgiving, and Columbus has only a few days left to live. In addition, this old guy is rather wretched and often goes to Las Vegas to hang out. It is estimated that he will not live for many years. Therefore, he will not see what his son will be like in the future. In this case, Marin does not mind coaxing him while he is alive. To put it bluntly, Columbus is old and can no longer be used by Marin. Including Amerigo, who is also over 60. So, their mission has been completed. As for the future, it depends mainly on the new generation. But Diego Columbus, as Columbus's successor, although not very talented, will not be bad in the future. At least, Diego is still competent as the commander-in-chief of a route or the commander of a fleet. In the future, Marin plans to form several fleets to safeguard his interests around the world. For example, the First Fleet is being planned. Its designation is the First Fleet of the Royal Navy, also known as the North Sea Fleet. Its combat mission can be seen from the name, to control the North Sea maritime power and maintain the safety of routes in the English Channel and Danish waters. At the same time, there will also be tasks to restrict the French in the future. According to the plan, Marin intends to draw 2,500-ton warships from the existing forces as the main combat force to maintain the North Sea maritime power. In addition, 2,250 class armed merchant ships are also equipped for auxiliary crews and transportation. In other words, the North Sea Fleet, the first fleet of the North Sea Kingdom, will have 40 warships. This force is already very powerful in Europe today. You know, in the Battle of Joe, Portugal dispatched only 18 small warships of 1 or 200 tons. Even in this time and space, the Spanish-Portuguese joint fleet only dispatched 15 warships of more than 200 tons in the Battle of Calicut, which is less than the number of warships in history. However, because the tonnage is large enough, the combat effectiveness is not reduced. Moreover, the results achieved are not bad. Most of the warships of the Spanish-Portuguese joint fleet were not as good as Marin's 250-ton armed merchant ships. After all, the 250-ton armed merchant ships were built in proportion to the Constitution, and the hull design and firepower configuration were more reasonable. The 2,250-ton armed merchant ships alone would have made it the top fleet in Europe at that time, not to mention the 2,500-ton main battleships. So, even though there were only 40 ships, Marin's North Sea Fleet was indeed a dominant force in Europe at the moment. In particular, with the supply of Chilean saltpeter mines, the North Sea Fleet's large-caliber naval guns were no longer just for show, but could be used to fire at the opponent. Chapter 1814, Enclosure and Pirates. In addition to controlling the First Fleet in the North Sea, Marin also plans to form multiple fleets to safeguard the interests of various important sea areas. For example, the east coast of North America must also have a fleet to maintain coastal security. At the same time, drive away and eliminate any covetous people. Therefore, the Second Fleet must be the North American Fleet. Its home port will probably be located in Long Island, New York. At the same time, a branch port will be set up in the Savannah area and a fort will be built. Then, it is the Caribbean region. Here, Marin will set up the Third Fleet in the future, mainly to patrol the southeastern waters of the Caribbean Sea, and strictly prevent adventurers from Spain and Portugal from entering America along the route that Columbus took to America. In any case, the Caribbean Sea is also an important interest of the North Sea Kingdom. Whether it is Grenada, which produces nutmeg, or Cuba, which produces various materials and nickel mines, they cannot be lost. Panama, west of the Caribbean Sea, is also a strategic hub. Then, it is the South American colonies that Marin needs to protect. This is a relatively remote, but also a very fertile area. In particular, the grasslands near the mouth of the La Plata River are currently being developed on a large scale. Since Marin was inspired by Felice and decided to introduce Italian immigrants last time, he has introduced 200,000 Italian immigrants and sent them to the mouth of the La Plata River to develop the most essential riverside part of the Pampas. This is also an important point of interest for Marin, so Marin will set up a home port at the mouth of the La Plata River and establish the Fourth Fleet to protect the safety of the Argentine colonial areas, including the Brazilian region in the north, which is also within the patrol duty range of the Fourth Fleet. In addition, the Fourth Fleet has a very important task to guard the Strait of Magellan. It is very difficult to enter the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean through the Drake Passage with high winds and rough waves. Because of the influence of the westerly drift, the Drake Passage not only has strong prevailing westerly winds, but also has endless westerly drift. In the Drake Passage, sailing from west to east is very pleasant, with smooth sailing and fast speed. But from east to west, it is very painful. If it is just against the wind, relying on the schooner, it may be possible to move forward in a Z shape. But because of the existence of strong westerly drift, it is extremely difficult to sail against the wind and against the current. Therefore, in the age of sail, if you want to enter the Pacific Ocean from the Atlantic Ocean, you often choose to go through the Strait of Magellan between the South American continent and Tierra del Fuego. Because there is land here to block the westerly drift, it is easier to pass. In this case, as long as a squadron is stationed in the Strait of Magellan and a few artillery batteries are built, the enemy can basically be prevented from sneaking to the Pacific Ocean and making trouble in Panama. You know, in the 17th century, British pirates even conquered Panama City on the Pacific coast, not only looting the city, but also setting fire to Panama City. In order to prevent similar situations from happening in the future, Marin had to plan ahead and deploy defenses in the Strait of Magellan in advance to prevent the enemy from making trouble on the west coast of America. Of course, if the enemy knew that the Earth was round, and changed to go east from the Cape of Good Hope and follow the westerly drift to the western waters of South America, Marin would have no choice. After all, he can't deploy a fleet at the Cape of Good Hope to guard against pirates now. After all, that place is still the territory of the Portuguese. In addition to the above four fleets, Marin also plans to set up the Fifth Fleet, which is responsible for the security of the Far East. For example, to maintain the security of Taiwan Island and control the Japanese waters. Therefore, the Fifth Fleet can also be called the Far East Fleet or the Japanese Fleet. This is also Marin's major interest, and he must not be careless. Therefore, it is necessary to form a strong fleet. You know, pirates in East Asia are also very powerful and should not be underestimated. Originally in history, since the rise of maritime trade in the Jiajing era, pirates on the southeast coast of Daming have also become rampant. Later, it even became an extremely difficult foreign threat to the Ming Empire, and gave birth to famous generals such as Qi Jiguang and Yu Daiyou. Of course, maritime trade has just begun, and the pirate industry in the southeast of Daming has not yet risen. At this time, Marin only needs to form a powerful fleet and severely strike pirates, or even kill without mercy. In this way, the proliferation of pirates on the southeast coast of Daming can be curbed in its infancy. With these 5 fleets, the interests of the North Sea Kingdom around the world can basically be guaranteed. If other countries want to challenge the maritime hegemony of the North Sea Kingdom, they have to ask the guns of the more than 200 warships of these 5 fleets whether they agree or not. In addition to these 5 fleets, in the future, Marin also plans to obtain the South African region through interest exchange. Then, the 6th fleet will be established at the Cape of Good Hope to block all illegal ships that want to enter the Indian Ocean. After all, Marin knows the harm of pirates very well. But in any case, if the pirates want to enter the Pacific Ocean, they can either go through the Strait of Magellan or the Cape of Good Hope. As long as these 2 important places are controlled, pirates can be prevented from threatening the Pacific region to the greatest extent. As for the Atlantic region, Marin can only say that he will try his best to crack down on piracy. But in history, the most rampant pirates were actually England. And in this time and space, Marin is destined to annex England. As long as England is managed well, pirates should not be so rampant. You know, the reason why pirates were rampant in English history, in addition to the secret support of the British court, the influence of the enclosure movement is also very important. Many landless farmers have lost their livelihoods, and they don't want to enter wool spinning factories as wool spinning workers who work more than 10 hours a day, nor do they want to be wanderers. Then, going out to sea and taking risks as pirates became a very important choice for them. In the final analysis, many things are closely linked. The enclosure movement in England not only provided a large number of workers for the English wool textile industry, but also provided enough pirates for the English pirate ships. Why didn't France produce pirates? The farmers' land was not occupied, and they were farming well at home. They risked being beheaded to become pirates when they were sick. However, misfortunes often bring blessings. Who would have known that such an evil thing as the enclosure movement in England actually gave rise to the great development of the English pirate industry and pushed England to the status of a maritime power? To put it bluntly, England became a maritime power not voluntarily, but forcibly. So many farmers lost their land, so many people chose to go out to sea and take risks as pirates. Later, Queen Elizabeth I, in order to solve the unemployment problem in the country, shamelessly supported the pirate cause. Then, England, a weak country, compared with France and Spain, inexplicably became a maritime power. But that was something in the original history. Because of the appearance of Marin, now all the landless farmers in England will have a way out. In this way, they don't have to risk their lives to become pirates. However, Marin also set up a pit, which would bankrupt some landless farmers who had no talent for fishing. Then, they were forced to serve as sailors for Marin because of debts. Therefore, England will still be a maritime power in the future. However, it did not rise because of pirates, but because of the strength of the official maritime power. Because, in the original history of England, the prosperity of pirates promoted the strength of England's maritime power, but at the same time, pirates would also bite back England itself. In the late 17th century, after England gradually became the overlord of the sea, those English pirates who had plundered the Spaniards began to attack England's colonies. In desperation, England could only enact strict laws and execute pirates if they were caught. It took decades for English pirates to decline. Therefore, Marin will definitely not learn from the historical rise of pirates model of England, but intends to adopt the rise of a great power model to let the country control the maritime power, rather than allowing or even supporting the development of pirates. Chapter 1815 Asbestos Fiber Cement Board. Over the years, although England has not improved much under Edward's rule, it is still stable. The population lost in the war has also slowly recovered. However, these populations are still too small. But unfortunately, England is not Marin's now, and Marin cannot vigorously promote and encourage childbirth in England. So, even if there is any idea, we can only wait and see. Of course, in Northumberland and the Isle of Wight under Marin's rule, he can still encourage childbirth. Even in the border county in Highland County of Scotland, Marin has also adopted the method of encouraging childbirth. Because the output of the North Sea fishery is increasing, now Marin has ordered that in the areas under his rule, whether it is his own manor or someone else's manor, as long as there are pregnant women, they will all be given subsidies. Of course, the subsidy is not money, but salted fish. If conditions permit, Marin will also encourage the fresh meat in the manor to make soup and give priority to pregnant women. Not only that, Marin also ordered that once a woman in his own manor is pregnant, she can stop working and take a pregnancy leave. However, the welfare is not less, and it is even better than that of ordinary people. In short, pregnant women are given priority. Even in every town, Marin will set up a maternity hospital to take care of pregnant women. In addition, the maternity hospital will have female doctors who have received special training in natural delivery and know how to use forceps as the main midwives to ensure the safety of delivery. These technologies were ordered by Marin to ensure the safety of Angela when she gave birth to William. Now, they are just used to ensure the safety of maternity delivery across the country. Of course, now all these maternity hospitals are under the name of Marin's Save Knights, becoming legal medical units recognized by the church and enjoying subsidies from the church. In addition, Marin also ordered that everyone needs to give up seats to pregnant women when taking the bus. In addition, beating pregnant women is strictly prohibited. If beating a pregnant woman causes miscarriage, it will be severely punished. Because this is equivalent to murdering a new life. Speaking of the buses in the North Sea, we have to mention the current public transportation construction in the North Sea. Before, Marin had always planned to build a cement road. However, he has always been worried that the cement road is too eye-catching and attracts attention. Therefore, when two main cement roads were built in the mainland, which ran north-south and east-west, other things were deliberately applied on the surface of the roads to cover the original appearance of the roads, and the cement roads were cut into pieces to make them look like large slabs of stone spliced together. But later, when Marin thought of the cement slab road, he let go of those concerns. Then, the infrastructure maniac mode was turned on in the North Sea Kingdom. To this end, Marin ordered the cement plant in Corner Brook in the west of Newfoundland to take advantage of the local limestone mine and combine the coal sent by the coal ship from Cape Breton Island to expand cement production. Then, on the East Frisian Islands in the mainland, Marin also ordered the restoration of the abandoned cement plant on Baltrum Island and the neighboring Landjug Island, and expanded the scale to produce cement. The cement production here used to come from sea transportation. For example, limestone, clay and fluorite are all wholesaled from the markets in Hamburg and Bremen. The coal for burning cement is transported from the Newcastle coal mine across the sea, which is very convenient and low in cost. Then, Marin also built a large-scale brick factory and cement board factory near the steel plant in Crumheen to produce bricks and cement boards. Steel smelting will produce a lot of slag, which is very suitable for burning cement and making bricks. Of course, the establishment of a brick factory and cement board factory next to the steel plant is not to directly use steel slag, but to use the dock facilities near Crumheen to facilitate the transportation of cement. After all, in order to operate this steel plant, Marin built a special dock in the local area to facilitate the transportation of ore and coal. At the same time, a large number of soldiers were stationed to ensure local safety. The cement board factory will definitely attract worldwide attention in the future. After all, it is a top material for paving roads. Therefore, a place with convenient transportation and no fear of enemy covetousness is needed. Obviously, the Crumheen steel plant with a high level of security protection is a good choice. Moreover, setting up a factory here is also conducive to centralized industrial management and rational use of local infrastructure resources. At present, the cement board factory in Crumheen mainly produces two specifications of cement boards, 240mm x 240mm x 53mm ordinary type and 240mm x 240mm x 26mm reduced thickness type. Among them, ordinary cement slabs are mainly used for paving the main roads. Its thickness is similar to that of red bricks in later generations, and its strength is sufficient to withstand the passage of heavy-duty horse-drawn carriages. The reduced thickness type with half the thickness is that the craftsmen of the cement board factory found that when paving non-main roads, that is, small streets and alleys, inside the city, there is no need to use 53mm thick ordinary cement boards at all, and half the thickness is enough. Because those small streets and alleys are often for pedestrians, and there are few heavy-duty horse-drawn carriages. Therefore, half the thickness of cement slabs is definitely enough. In addition, this type of reduced thickness cement slab is also enough for rural roads where there are not many horse-drawn carriages. Moreover, after the thickness is halved, the cement material is also saved by half, which saves more road paving costs. After thinking about it, Marin agreed with the craftsman's opinions and rewarded the craftsman who proposed the reduced thickness cement slab bricks. Because this really saved him half of the cost of road construction materials. Moreover, those small streets and secluded villages do not need such strong cement slab bricks. After reducing the thickness by half, the same material can pave one more road. Stimulated by this reward, the craftsman later proposed the idea of adding asbestos fibers when making cement slab bricks, and produced asbestos fiber cement slab bricks with good strength. After testing, the cement slab bricks with asbestos fibers are of much better quality than ordinary cement slab bricks. Call, the craftsman who proposed this method of making cement slab bricks, participated in the process of going south to help the Swiss build fortifications. At that time, Marin asked these craftsmen to go south with a large amount of cement, and also asked people to purchase a large amount of asbestos fibers in Switzerland, saying that it would be used in the manufacture of fiber concrete to increase the strength of fortifications. During the construction, Call remembered the concept of fiber concrete proposed by Marin and found that asbestos fiber concrete was indeed stronger than ordinary concrete. This time he was transferred to the cement board factory. When making cement boards, he remembered that if asbestos fibers were added to the inside of the cement board, would it make the cement board stronger? Then, the results showed that his guess was right. After seeing the samples presented by the cement board factory, a word popped up in Marin's mind: asbestos tiles. In later generations, asbestos tiles are a very common large tile and an important raw material for building houses. Its material is made of asbestos fibers. Glass fibers can also be added to cement. Even many car brake pads in later generations are mixed with asbestos fibers. However, before crossing, Marin seemed to remember that car brake pads would produce asbestos dust due to friction when they rub to assist braking. If these asbestos dusts are inhaled into the lungs, they can cause lung disease and even lung cancer. Of course, this statement is slightly exaggerated. However, Marin knows that it is inevitable to produce a large amount of asbestos dust in the production process of asbestos tiles. If asbestos tiles are manufactured for a long time without safety protection, there will definitely be big problems. However, asbestos tiles are not harmful after they are made. Because as long as there is no asbestos dust and it is not inhaled into the lungs, it is difficult to cause harm. In the same way, cement tiles made of asbestos fibers are also harmless. After all, it is just a road material, and people will not lie on the ground to deliberately grind and inhale asbestos dust, so there is basically no harm. Asbestos fiber itself has low cost, and Germany is an important asbestos production area. In addition, Egypt, Greece, and Italy are all asbestos production areas for traditional Chinese medicine. Because the production volume is large and the use is not very wide. Therefore, the price of asbestos is not expensive. It is used to make asbestos fiber cement board. The cost is not high, but the quality is greatly improved. Just for the high quality of asbestos fiber cement board, Marin will not give up this good product because of the health hazards of future generations. Therefore, asbestos fiber cement board has become an important product of the cement board factory, and the craftsman call has received a heavy reward from Marin. Chapter 18:16 I'm really stupid, really. You know, in later generations, asbestos brake pads are also a very common commodity, and there is no national ban. Of course, there are definitely hazards. Because when a car brakes, some dust is indeed generated due to the friction between the brake pads and the wheels. But from the point of view that the country has not banned it in later generations, there are hazards, but they have not reached a certain level. Otherwise, it would have been banned long ago. Therefore, Marin will not prohibit the use of asbestos fibers in the production of cement boards. After all, he has no glass fiber to replace asbestos fibers. The most important thing is the cost. In fact, Bahai state-owned glass craftsmen can also draw glass. However, this kind of pure glass fiber is very brittle, easy to break, and has no practical value. Marin remembers that in later generations, glass fibers seem to have added a lot of other substances. Unfortunately, he is not a professional in the relevant field and doesn't know how to do it. Therefore, from the perspective of cost and technology, using asbestos fibers to make high-quality cement slabs is indeed a good choice. As for the hidden dangers of dust inhalation during the production process, Marin decided to promote the wearing of masks in the workshop to minimize the chance of asbestos dust being inhaled into the lungs of workers. In addition, Marin placed an order with the Crimean Khanate, ordering several thousand Maogongang for the production of asbestos fiber cement boards. In this way, the harm of asbestos to the people of the country was greatly reduced. As for the life and death of Maogongang, it would be good to give them masks, and nothing else to mention. From the moment they were captured by the Crimean bandits, they had no hope. In fact, stimulated by the heavy reward, the craftsman's enthusiasm for invention was high. Look, Kahl's colleague, craftsman Katz, proposed the concept of plant fiber concrete. After experiments, Katz proposed the theory that flax fiber and sisal fiber can also be filled into cement boards as tendons and bones to increase the strength of cement boards. Marin also deeply agrees with his point of view. However, he is unwilling to put it into use. Why? The cost is high. If it is the most common flax fiber, the corrosion resistance is not good and the service life is insufficient. If you want to enhance the performance and life of flax fiber, the best way is to soak the flax fiber with tung oil, so that the flax fiber will be like the old rattan used in rattan plaques, and the toughness and life will be longer. However, the cost is a bit high. As for sisal fiber concrete, this thing has also been studied in later generations, and it is a good variety. But the problem is the same, the cost is high. Sisal fiber is indeed of good quality, and its corrosion resistance and tensile strength are much stronger than flax fiber. But the problem is that there is a shortage of sisal fiber in Bahai Kingdom at present. It is not enough to make sails and cables, so how can there be extra to make cement boards? Therefore, although it is a good idea, Marin cannot use it. There is no other reason, the cost problem. After all, it is an ordinary material used for paving roads, and the cost cannot be expensive. Otherwise, if the road is paved for a long time, it will go bankrupt. Therefore, for the most common paving materials, cost is also a very important issue. However, for the floor tiles in the palace, it seems that sisal fiber concrete or flax fiber cement board made of flax fiber soaked and strengthened with tung oil can be tried. After all, Marin is also worried about the health of his family. Although asbestos fiber cement board is actually not dangerous, Marin dare not take risks with his family's health. It's okay to use asbestos fiber cement board to pave outdoor roads, but it's better not to use it indoors if you can. In fact, even for outdoor paving, it is not necessary to use asbestos cement board. After all, although asbestos is not expensive, it is not cheap if it is used in large quantities. Therefore, it is the same as the principle set by Marin before: asbestos cement board is used on the main road, and ordinary cement board without asbestos fiber is used for ordinary roads, and the reduced thickness type is used to save materials. In this way, a lot of expenses can be saved. At the same time, it can prevent asbestos fiber from being insufficient. But after going to church for worship on Sunday morning, pretending, Marin suddenly found that there seemed to be an option of thatch in plant fiber. When he was coming back from church, he passed by the slums and found those adobe houses. Suddenly, he remembered that adobe houses are not the simplest concrete structures. In order to make the earth wall stronger, when building the adobe wall, thatch is often mixed into the earth wall as a confinement to enhance the tensile strength of the earth wall and make it less likely to collapse. In the same way, if the tough thatch is used as tendons and mixed into cement, it also has a certain tensile strength. At least, it is better than a simple cement board. So, Marin asked the cement board factory to conduct experiments, and indeed obtained a cement board made of grass-reinforced concrete with decent results. Although it is far from being comparable to reinforced concrete, and not as good as bamboo-reinforced concrete. However, it is better than cement alone. Marin knew that the concrete made of this kind of thatch-reinforced concrete is very average in terms of quality and life. However, that is compared with reinforced and bamboo-reinforced concrete. If it is only used for paving roads, the concrete made of thatch-reinforced concrete can actually be barely used. After all, there are no heavy trucks that destroy roads in this era. Usually, horse-drawn carriages reach their limit with a load of 1 or 2 tons. And this level of pressure, grass-reinforced concrete is still competent. Moreover, concrete is mainly alkaline and has a certain corrosion ability. The reason why reinforced concrete is not afraid of corrosion is that steel is not afraid of alkaline environments, and can even form an alkaline protective film on the surface of steel bars to improve the corrosion resistance of reinforced concrete. Bamboo reinforcement is worse and not very corrosion resistant. However, according to past experience, bamboo reinforced concrete can last for 20 to 30 years without any problems. The alkali resistance of thatch is much stronger than that of pillars. Although its strength is not as good, its service life may be better than that of bamboo reinforced concrete. The most important thing is that thatch is cheap. Thatch is cheap. Thatch is cheap. Important things should be said 3 times. In this era of extremely low productivity, cost is everything. Marin chose asbestos fiber, which is harmful to health, as concrete reinforcement because asbestos is not expensive. At least, the cost is much lower than sisal fiber or oil-soaked flax fiber. But no matter how you compare, it is not cheaper than thatch, which can be found everywhere. Moreover, livestock don't like to eat thatch. Marin is currently promoting the plowing of grasslands across the country, and then replacing thatch and other weeds with alfalfa and ryegrass. Nowadays, what he lacks the least is weeds such as thatch. Moreover, for paving ordinary roads, the life of grass-reinforced concrete made of thatch is definitely enough. You know, in later generations, some cities still renovate roads every year, so the graduates of Lanshan excavators are not enough. Because, breaking up the old cement road surface requires the breaker of the excavator. After all, reinforced concrete is more common in later generations. Even if the life of grass-reinforced concrete is only a few years or 10 years, it is enough. As long as it is not replaced every year, the cost can be afforded. I'm so stupid, really. Marin muttered to himself. Why didn't I think of the cheap grass-reinforced concrete earlier? I'm so stupid, really. Marin repeated it several times, and he was about to turn into Xianglin Saw. Chapter 1817 Edward was assassinated. Fortunately, Marin discovered this problem early before the North Sea Kingdom began to lay cement slabs on a large scale. So, everything was in time. In fact, these days, because there are no heavy vehicles, the requirements for roads are actually very low. Under normal circumstances, even if tendons and bones are not added, cement slabs are difficult to be crushed. However, in this era without heavy vehicles, the real enemy for cement slabs is probably not the pressure of vehicles, but the thermal expansion and contraction of the internal structure or huge vibrations. Because this will produce internal stress and shear force, causing cracks in the cement slab. In winter, cement is most likely to crack due to thermal expansion and contraction, and the internal contraction force is generated. Once cracks occur, if a heavier load carriage runs over it, it may cause the cracks to expand. Then, until the cement slab is completely broken. In other words, the main purpose of adding fiber, tendons and bones, is not to worry about the insufficient strength of the cement slab, but to worry about the cement slab itself cracking. Of course, after adding tendons and bones, the strength of the cement slab has also been greatly enhanced, and the performance is better. The strength enhanced by grass-reinforced concrete is very limited, but it can undoubtedly help the cement slab resist cracking. This is especially important in winter, which can greatly increase the service life of cement boards and save costs. Instead of using cement boards for decades, as long as they can be used for several years without replacement, Marin will achieve his goal. Moreover, cement board roads are easier to repair, just replace one. In this way, Marin set a rule: the main roads use 53 mm thick asbestos fiber cement boards of ordinary thickness, while ordinary roads and streets in the city generally use 26 mm thick grass-reinforced concrete cement boards with reduced thickness thatch reinforcement. After all, asbestos fiber has very stable chemical properties, is not easily corroded, and will not deteriorate. Although the cost of cement boards used to make main roads is higher than that of grass-reinforced concrete cement boards, there are not many main roads after all, and the amount is limited. As for grass-reinforced concrete cement boards, because thatch is not valuable, it is easy to collect and the cost is low. Moreover, after the thickness is halved, the manufacturing cost is further reduced, which is very conducive to full promotion in the country. Subsequently, the newly built cement board factory in Beihai State began to produce two specifications of cement boards. The two types of cement boards produced by it are given priority for road construction within Beihai State. But roads will also be built in England. For example, the two fiefdoms of Northumberland and the Isle of Wight will definitely need roads. As for the border counties in the south of Scotland and the Highlands in the north, Marin was not in a hurry to build roads there. Because there are mostly mountains there, it is difficult to build roads. Moreover, mudslides are prone to occur in mountains, which can easily destroy cement roads. However, in Wicklow County, Ireland, where Adler is located, Marin gave priority to providing a batch of cement slabs to support the construction of two main roads for military purposes. Although Wicklow County is on the east coast of Ireland and has relatively little rain, it still has much more rain than the North Sea Kingdom. Therefore, in Wicklow County, cement roads that are not afraid of rainy days are more needed. In other words, the entire island of Ireland needs such roads. However, Marin's current production cannot be increased, so he can only supply the needs of Adler's Wicklow County first. Moreover, it can only supply the needs of one or two roads. In addition, Marin also has to supply the needs of New York. Others can wait, but a cement road leading to the Great Lakes region is inevitable. Because Marin is now hoping to find the location of the world's first modern oil well, the Drake Well in Titusville. And Titusville seems to be near Lake Erie, and there are oil seeps on the surface. Marin plans to start building a cement slab road from Philadelphia to the west now. There is no need to rush the progress, just start repairing it. Anyway, with the hollow steel drum roller and cement slab, the speed of road construction is so fast. The only trouble may be that they will be attacked along the way. After all, the Indians are not fools. They must understand that they will encounter trouble after the road is repaired, and they will definitely block them. However, Marin is now planning to get hundreds of thousands of laborers from Haiti Island, so he is not afraid. At that time, he plans to draw tens of thousands of Taino laborers from Haiti Island to build this road. Cut trees first, then build roads. After determining the direction of road construction, cut down all the trees along the way first, and then start laying the foundation and building the road. The standard for cutting trees is that all trees within a distance of 30 to 40 meters on both sides of the road are cut down. The native Indians' earthen bows, which use rattan as bowstrings, are not very powerful, with a range of only 30 to 40 meters. Leaving this distance open just prevents them from shooting arrows in the woods and affecting the construction. And if they dare to walk out of the woods, they will just taste the power of the guards. Once the stone road is built, Marin will build a post every 20 kilometers. The post station can not only raise horses for messengers to transfer, but also build walls and have military defense capabilities. This is just the first step. Later, Marin will send farmers to each post station. Then, starting from the post station, attack both sides of the road, cut down trees, and reclaim farmland. Finally, based on the post station, a walled armed village is formed. If there is a fierce rebound from the Indians, a large force will be sent along the stone road to clear the Indians around the post station. Now, the colonial army in North America has rich experience in jungle warfare. It may not be possible to conquer the entire east coast of North America, but it is more than enough to attack a small tribe alone. Moreover, in the future, Marin will continue to select soldiers from German immigrants, form a 10,000-man army in the North American colonies, learn jungle warfare skills from the more than 2,000 colonial veterans, and finally further sweep the Indians in the jungle to seize more land. The principle of building cement slab roads is not to seek a short straight line distance. Except for the stone slab road that is in a hurry to find Testville by Lake Erie, other cement slab roads will try to extend forward along the river plain. The purpose is to occupy as much good land as possible. After all, the plains by the river must be fertile and the most fertile. Just like what the powers did in China in the late 19th century, the railway is the sphere of influence. Similarly, the cement slab road is also the sphere of influence of the North Sea Kingdom. Even further than the sphere of influence. Because Marin will directly send troops to control there, or even directly develop and utilize it. After sorting out his thoughts, Marin wrote quickly and issued a series of orders, specifically arranging the road construction and development matters in the North Sea Kingdom, Britain's own territory in the American colonies. But just when he was tired of writing and wanted to exercise his wrists, Kohler suddenly rushed over and reported, "Your Majesty, His Majesty Edward was assassinated." Chapter 18:18 The opportunity has come. What? Edward was assassinated? Marin stood up in surprise, his face instantly filled with complex expressions. This expression was of course dominated by shock. But was there also some secret joy? After being surprised for a while, Marin asked, "Is the news reliable? How is His Majesty Edward?" Marin's subtext was, "Is Edward dead?" As Marin's confidant, how could Kohler not know what his master meant? So, he shook his head and said, "It's just that his arm was cut and he needs to rest for a few months. There is no fatal injury." "Is that so?" Marin was full of disappointment. He thought his son could enter England in advance. As a result, it was a false alarm. At this time, Kohler suddenly said, "However, we found that the assassination of His Majesty Edward this time seems to be related to the French." "What's the matter?" Marin became interested and asked. "It's like this. Recently, the relationship between France and Britain has been extremely bad because of the ownership of the Calais fortress. The French even really thought about taking Calais by throwing the clothes of dead smallpox patients, but then because Your Majesty proposed the cowpox method, the British immediately vaccinated the people in the Calais fortress with cowpox, which made the French plan fail. So, in the following time, France and Britain carried out military confrontation and negotiations at the same time. But the relationship between the two sides has dropped to a freezing point, and they both wish the other side would die. And the assassin who assassinated Edward this time, after the cooperation and investigation of our North Sea spies in London, found that the assassin was bribed by the French and ambushed His Majesty Edward outside Westminster Abbey. However, His Majesty Edward was lucky. The knife that stabbed his heart was blocked by the breastplate hidden in his clothes. The assassin failed and could only cut His Majesty Edward's left arm. Marin shook his head. Why would he wear a breastplate under his clothes? So insidious. Kohler looked at Marin speechlessly and said, "Have you forgotten? When we helped Edward attack Henry VII, His Majesty Edward was with us every day. When we entered the city of London, you showed him how to wear a breastplate inside a silk robe." Marin suddenly realized, damn, saying that others are shady, isn't this scolding yourself? It's been many years since this happened, and Marin himself has forgotten it. He is a person who is afraid of death. Every time he goes out to hold a ceremony, he will wear a steel breastplate inside his silk robe to protect his vitals to avoid being assassinated. Unexpectedly, Edward learned it unintentionally. In fact, he didn't teach Edward on purpose, but when he led the army into the city of London, he showed Edward the shiny breastplate worn inside the silk robe. Edward just asked casually at the time, and Marin answered casually. As a result, Edward remembered this method. It can't be blamed on Edward to learn this method, because when he entered London to overthrow the rule of Henry VII, under the instigation of Marin, Edward went on a killing spree, slaughtered too many nobles of Henry VII's faction, and forged too many blood feuds. It can be said that in England, there were thousands of people who wanted to kill Edward, if not tens of thousands. But as a monarch, he always had to go to important places such as the Square and Westminster Abbey to participate in public activities. At this time, including on the way to and from the church, he was easily assassinated. Therefore, Edward also learned from Marin and wore a three-quarter breastplate armor inside his gorgeous silk robe to protect important parts such as the heart. This time, he was attending an important religious event at Westminster Abbey, and the assassin caught the opportunity. Taking advantage of the chaos of the crowd, he came up and stabbed. But the assassin didn't expect that Edward was wearing a breastplate armor inside his gorgeous robe, and then he missed. Before being chopped to death by Edward's guards, he swung the knife hard, trying to go straight to Edward's throat, and then Edward blocked it with his left arm, and his left arm was injured. Then, the assassin was chopped into 8 pieces by Edward's guards. Originally, because the assassin was killed on the spot, the clue was broken. But it just so happened that the spy of the North Sea Kingdom in London saw the assassin in contact with a businessman in a tavern the day before the assassination. And that businessman was a French businessman. This is not the point. The point is that this French businessman took root in London with the help of the French maid next to Queen Anna. Now the problem is big. Is Queen Anna's maid related to the assassination? Really not. Queen Anna's maid Marceau was a French woman with a clean background selected by Edward after he dismissed all the maids and attendants arranged by Count d'Ette for Anna, in order to ease the queen's homesickness. After all, with a group of maids from her hometown accompanying her and speaking her hometown dialect, she is not lonely. But the coincidence is here. The French businessman named Weissman, who is also a French spy, happens to be a distant relative of the queen's maid named Marceau. In order to enter London conveniently, Weissman followed Marceau's path and entered London. The queen's maid still had some face, and Weissman soon took root in London, specializing in the introduction of French wine. England imports a large amount of wine every year, and the export of English woolen cloth. This time, Weissman took the opportunity to arrange for someone to assassinate Edward, which was actually the order of Weissman's boss. In the eyes of the French, Edward's seizure of the Calais fortress was indeed very treasonous. Therefore, the French also wished that Edward would die early. Once Edward died, England would definitely be in chaos. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the French would have the opportunity to recapture the Calais fortress. And because Edward had no children, England might even have civil unrest, giving France the opportunity to invade its homeland. Therefore, Weissman hired a poor former English nobleman named Bill and sent him to assassinate Edward. The father of this hired former nobleman Bill was a baron during the reign of Henry VII. Although he was not in a high position, his family was also rich. But in the battle against the Marin army hired by Edward to march into London, Bill's father, Baron Gates, died outside the city of London as a middle-level officer. Because he was not a high-ranking noble, Edward did not specifically target him during the purge. And Bill was very clever in disguising himself and escaped, so he was not liquidated. However, during this period, Bill seemed to have contracted pneumonia and was dying. At that time, pneumonia in Europe was basically waiting to die, and there was no medicine to cure it. Weissman also saw this and bewitched him, saying, "Since you are dying anyway, why not do a feat before you die and kill Edward who destroyed your family?" Then, Bill from the Gates family, with a heart full of hatred, relied on the fact that his noble family had learned some martial arts, and prepared to assassinate Edward. Moreover, he really found an opportunity. At that time, many people were worshipping. Bill was wearing ordinary monk's clothes, lowering his head, and did not attract attention. After all, the most monks in Westminster Abbey are monks. But when he finally tried to kill Edward, he didn't expect Edward to wear a breastplate under his robe, and he had to die. Afterwards, the British officials didn't catch Weissman because he had hurried out of the city early in the morning. In the end, Edward's men only caught a few of Weissman's unlucky men and the unlucky maid Marceau. This innocent French girl named Marceau bore most of Edward's anger and was beaten to death. Hearing this, Marin changed his previous depressed mood of "Edward didn't die," and laughed. "I was worried that there was no chance, but I didn't expect that the opportunity would come so soon." Chapter 1819, Slandering Queen Anna. What opportunity is Marin talking about? It's an opportunity to slander Queen Anna. In the future, Edward will definitely get a box lunch, otherwise how can he control England? However, the existence of Queen Anna has become an obstacle. If this woman is strong enough, she might be at Cixi or Empress Lu. At that time, he will encounter huge obstacles if he wants to control England. Even if she doesn't have the ability of Cixi and Empress Lu, her identity as Margaret's mother is enough for Marin to drink a pot. But fortunately, Anna is the daughter of the French Count Duarte and the daughter of an enemy noble, so this gives Marin room to operate. Marin doesn't have to think about killing Queen Anna, because this woman is very honest and dutiful. However, no matter how dutiful she is, her identity is there. Once Edward dies, Queen Anna will have the right to be regent before Margaret comes of age. This is common in both the East and the West. Even if Queen Anna does not have the ability to be a regent, if there are several nobles supporting him and using her as a puppet, she will have the ability to compete with Marin, an outsider. Therefore, if Marin wants to be the regent of England, he must remove the stumbling block of Queen Anna. Originally, Marin wanted her to die with Edward. However, if both Edward and his wife were killed, according to the principle of whoever benefits is the most suspicious, it is easy to be suspected. Therefore, Marin did not dare to let Queen Anna die with him easily, and could only think of other ways to deal with it. The simplest way is to discredit Queen Anna and make her lose the trust of the English. For example, arguments such as, Queen Anna is a French spy, can easily make Queen Anna lose the trust of the English and make the English suspicious of her. As long as this is done, no one will support Queen Anna's regent in the future. At that time, the English will stand on Marin's side. After all, the English and France are enemies, but not the North Sea Kingdom. In this way, Marin can achieve his goal without killing Queen Anna. He can prevent her from competing with him for the regency of England. Originally, Marin was still thinking of ways to throw dirty water on Anna. But he couldn't find an opportunity. After all, throwing dirty water on someone also requires some circumstantial evidence to achieve the effect of real hammer. Coincidentally, this assassination happened. Marin felt that the opportunity to throw dirty water had come. Although little Marceau was a maid selected by Edward himself, not brought by Queen Anna at the beginning. However, she has been with Queen Anna for several years. A few years is enough to develop an unknown person into one's confidant. After all, the maid is with Queen Anna all day long. Therefore, Marin only needs to seize this point and let people spread rumors in London that Queen Anna was involved in the assassination. Even if there is no evidence in the end, it is enough for Queen Anna to drink a pot. Not to mention being deposed as queen, it is undoubtedly that she will no longer be trusted in the future. When the seeds of suspicion are planted, trust will begin to collapse. Once suspected of being a French spy, even if Queen Anna wants to stand up as regent in the future, others will not agree. You, a French spy, want to be regent? Will you sell England to France? In this way, Marin's goal was achieved. He did what he said. Marin quickly arranged for Kohler to send Morse code instructions to the North Sea spies in London in the form of pigeons, ordering them to start spreading rumors secretly, linking the assassination to Queen Anna. After receiving the order, the North Sea spies in London immediately executed Marin's order and began to say on various occasions that the dead girl Marceau helped Weissman gain a foothold in London as instructed by Queen Anna. Anyway, the people are dead, there is no evidence, and it is not easy to check. Then, these spies also spread rumors that this was Queen Anna's father, Count d'Ette, who was ready to take action against His Majesty Edward, so as to cooperate with France to seize the Calais fortress and further annex England. After hearing such rumors, the people of England really felt a surge in their resentment towards Queen Anna, and many people believed that Queen Anna was a spy sent by France. After all, Queen Anna's father was the first lackey of King Louis XII of France. For a time, there were even calls for abolishing the Queen among the people. But Edward was indifferent to this, because, as a pillow person for more than 10 years, Edward knew his wife's character very well. She was a very simple woman. To put it bluntly, simple means no brains. If Queen Anna really had any tricks, Edward would not have been unaware of it with his control over the London palace. As for the fact that Marceau helped Weissman gain a foothold in London, Edward did know something about it. At the beginning, Edward sent people to secretly investigate the matter and found nothing wrong. Moreover, that Weissman was indeed Marceau's distant cousin. And this time, he asked his men to kill Marceau. In fact, Edward had nowhere to vent his anger, so he had to take it out on this little maid. Anyway, this was just a maid from a foreign country. But Edward did not expect that his inadvertent willful act of venting his anger was used by Marin's spies, and the dirty water was thrown on Queen Anna's head. However, Edward was not a person who easily trusted others. This assassination made him have a little doubt, although he still believed in Queen Anna. Therefore, this time he did not clarify the facts to the public and announced that he believed in Queen Anna. However, he did not find fault with Queen Anna, but treated it coldly. Of course, Edward still comforted Queen Anna in private. The North Sea spy lurking in the palace of the Tower of London passed the news that Edward continued to trust Queen Anna back to the North Sea. Marin was not disappointed with this result. Because his biggest goal was not to make Edward doubt Queen Anna, but to make the subjects of England doubt Queen Anna. Because Edward was definitely going to get a box lunch. When he died, it would not matter whether he trusted Queen Anna or not. At that time, whether the subjects of England trusted Queen Anna was the most important. Because the dead could not affect the situation. Therefore, Marin did not care much about Edward's attitude. Of course, it would be best if Edward also began to doubt Queen Anna. And from the current situation, although Edward trusted Queen Anna, he did not publicly defend her, proving that he still had a little doubt in his mind. And his failure to publicly defend Queen Anna gave Marin the opportunity to continue to throw dirty water on Queen Anna. Have you heard? His Majesty Edward did not publicly deny the view that Queen Anna is a French spy, proving that this is not a fabrication. As for His Majesty's failure to publicly refute it, it is probably because Queen Anna is Princess Margaret's mother after all. Under the deliberate guidance of the North Sea spies, such remarks were heard in pubs across England. In this way, although King Edward's attitude did not change much, among the people, even in the government and the opposition, Queen Anna, a French woman, had a worse and worse reputation in the eyes of the English. Chapter 1820, Preparation for War and Defense. Edward did not suppress public opinion. Because he felt that Queen Anna did not need too high a reputation. In England, it was enough for him to enjoy the respect and love of the people of the whole country. Of course, this was also related to Queen Anna's French identity. As France's mortal enemy, Edward did not want a French-born Queen of England to have too high a reputation in England. Only when someone openly proposed to depose Queen Anna did Edward resolutely refute it and impose certain punishments. In this regard, the North Sea spy guided public opinion to give another point of view. His Majesty Edward had completely fallen in love with Queen Anna, so he was willing to help her conceal the identity of a French spy. This view was more romantic and in line with Europeans' imagination of love. Therefore, it quickly spread and was recognized by the whole country. In particular, it was recognized by women all over England. Then, Edward was actually given the title of infatuated king. But in any case, Queen Anna could not wash it off even if she jumped into the Thames. However, Queen Anna was also very salty. For her, as long as her husband believed in herself, she could let the rumors outside go. Moreover, her origin is indeed sensitive. She comes from France, England's mortal enemy. It would be strange if she was not criticized. But the couple didn't know that Marin was preparing for King Edward to die. Once Edward died, Queen Anna was suspected again. In fact, even if Edward currently trusted Queen Anna, Marin was able to destroy it. The method is simple: tell Edward the truth about being kicked in the balls, and then, while telling Edward the truth, artistically process the role played by Queen Anna in it. If Edward knew that he had no hope of having a child, he would lose his mind in anger. Not only would he retaliate against France crazily, but he would also lose his mind in anger and vent his anger on Queen Anna. However, Marin did not intend to reveal the matter now. Because he was not ready to take over England. It was not that Marin was worried about not being able to control England, but that he was worried that in the process of controlling England, the jealous French would attack the North Sea country and destroy his process. After all, if you want to take advantage of the chaos to control England, you also need to send more people. Once you are pinned down by the French, things will be hard to say. Therefore, while Marin is building roads with cement slabs, he is also planning to build various fortifications and even walls on the western border to block possible armed intervention from France. Once the preparations are completed, Marin dares to launch in England. First, use the kicking egg incident to provoke Edward's anger and trigger England's attack on France. Then, let Edward receive a box lunch and put the blame on the French. After all, Edward attacked France in anger, and the French tried to assassinate Edward. This reasoning is flawless. What's more, through this assassination, the reason for framing the French for assassinating Edward is more sufficient. After all, there is a criminal record. Marin looked at the border carefully and found that the western border is mainly bordered by the Habsburg family and the Archbishopric of Utrecht. But even in the Archbishopric of Utrecht, the west is the Netherlands of the Habsburg family. And the Habsburg family is impossible to let the French army cross the border casually. Because the two families are mortal enemies. Therefore, Marin only needs to build some bunkers with beacon towers on the border with the Netherlands and the Archbishopric of Utrecht, and does not need to invest too much. Of course, the cement slab roads should be laid to facilitate the deployment of troops and reinforcements. If the French attack the North Sea Kingdom, the most likely route of attack is probably from the southwest. The Duchy of Lorraine in the southwest is basically a pro-French principality, and it will definitely give way to the French army. Then, to the northwest of the Duchy of Lorraine is the Archbishopric of Trier. This principality is not so pro-French, but as a church principality, it is very corrupt. Most of the money in its country has been embezzled by the priests, and it will not be used to form a strong army. The Trier Pfennig issued by the Archbishopric of Trier is also one of the Pfennig silver coins with the lowest silver content in Germany. Such a country is simply impossible to come up with much money to form an army. Therefore, once the French army crosses the border, their greatest possibility is to shrink into their own city and let the French army cross the border. The Principality of Jülich to the north of Trier, although it belongs to the Lamarck family, the in-laws of the Hoffman family, the Lamarck family's military strength is also very poor, and it can't stop the attack of the French army. Therefore, they are likely to be cowards. After all, if the French army is to be dispatched, it must be tens of thousands of troops. As long as the Lamarck family doesn't want to die, they won't stand up and seek abuse. The Archbishopric of Cologne to the north of the Principality of Jülich is similar to the Archbishopric of Trier, and will not choose to confront the French army head-on, at most protesting. In the end, the most likely direction for the French to break through is to cross the river from the west of the Rhine River in the Archbishopric of Cologne, enter the territory of the Duchy of Berg, and then attack the original Mark state. The Duchy of Berg is also the territory of the Lamarck family, but it is impossible to stop the French. Therefore, the most important thing for Marin to defend is to build fortifications in the original Mark state area, where the current North Sea Ruhr province and the Duchy of Berg and the Duchy of Clever meet, to block the French army's advance. The main means of blocking the enemy is, of course, to build walls or dig ditches. But considering the cost, Marin gave up the plan to fortify the area south of the Ruhr River in the Ruhr province, but directly built fortifications along the Ruhr River on the north bank to block the possible crossing of the French army. In this way, it is also convenient to concentrate troops against the enemy. Therefore, in the end, what Marin needs to guard against is actually the Rhine-Ruhr River section, and defenses can be built along the east of the Rhine and the north of the Ruhr River. Of course, the part of the land border between the province of Munster and the Principality of Clever also needs to build a wall to prevent the French army from crossing the Principality of Clever and attacking the North Sea country. After all, this road is the closest to East Frisia, the core part of the North Sea. Before building the border wall, Marin sent someone to say hello to the Lamarck family, his in-laws, and expressed his concerns and predictions. After all, many people know about the engagement between Caesar and Princess Margaret, and Marin's speculation about the possible fallout of France is not unreasonable. Therefore, the Lamarck family also expressed understanding. Marin understood the other party better and said that if France attacked the North Sea Kingdom, the Lamarck family did not need to help, they only needed to help secretly pass on the message. And the fortifications built on these borders or rivers were naturally cement walls or cement structure bunkers. Of course, they were all concrete structures. Because the strength of a simple cement wall is very poor. But there is no reinforced concrete, because it is very troublesome to produce steel bars in this era, and the output is very low. Marin can only guarantee that reinforced concrete can be used in core cities such as Auric, Emden, Goslar and Bochum. For cement walls in other areas, only asbestos fiber concrete can be used. As long as it is made into a bastion structure, it is still possible to prevent the French from bombarding with small artillery. In addition, in order to prevent the German princes from taking advantage of the fire, Marin also ordered the construction of a border wall in the southeast of Brunswick-Wolfenbüttel province, which had been captured less than 2 years ago. Because the southeast of this province is next to the electorate of Saxony, it is the most threatening area. However, considering the cost, it seems that it is too expensive to build a border wall on land. Therefore, Marin launched the second plan, only set up bunkers with beacon towers on the southern and eastern borders. And build a border wall at the junction with the electorate of Saxony. Then, build a second line of defense in the area close to the core of the homeland. This second line of defense is to protect the most core part. In order to reduce the difficulty of building the defense line, Marin built the defense line according to the river. Among them, the EMS River to the west of East Frisia is naturally a natural barrier, and it is only necessary to set up a defense line on the east side of the river. To the east, the Weser River in Oldenburg province is also a natural defense line. As for the south, the canal between the Leda River flowing through the county town of Leer and the Hunt River flowing through the city of Oldenburg has been built. In this way, the Leda River, the Hunt River, and the canal naturally form a water system that blocks the north and the south. As long as defenses are deployed and fortifications are built along the two rivers and the north of the canal, the enemy's attack can be resisted to a large extent. Moreover, the defense range is much smaller along the rivers in these three directions, and the number of troops required is much less. If the defense is deployed along the real border, 100,000 troops will not be enough. If only along the three water systems, focusing on defending the second line of defense, the four corps of the North Sea Kingdom are enough. Of course, the city of Goslar cannot be lost easily. After all, it is now the silver vault of the North Sea Kingdom. If they lost there, the silver would definitely be snatched away by the enemy, and the silver mines that had been developed with great difficulty would also be taken away. Therefore, while defending the second line of defense, Marin would generally not easily mobilize the 6th Legion, but would let them defend Goslar to the death, keep the silver mines there, and then wait for rescue.